Chapter 969. Late at night, Yaoji was sitting in the tent reading a book. Mu Lai had already fallen asleep. Mu Yang led the troops to intercept LV Jingxian. These few days, because of the matter of the spies, the control of the entire military camp had become very strict. Even the hidden guards of Prince Ding's Fu found it hard to find an opportunity to pass on any information. Yaoji understood that if this continued, it was only a matter of time before the old Marquis, Mu Yang, found out her and Mu Lai's identity. After all, they were the ones who shouldn't have appeared in the entire military camp. Unreasonable things were naturally the easiest to arouse suspicion. A cold wind blew at the entrance of the tent. Yaoji raised her head and saw Qin Feng in black standing at the entrance. She was startled and didn't have time to say anything. She grabbed Qin Feng and walked inside. Mu Lai, who was sleeping inside, opened his eyes the moment Qin Feng came in. He turned over and got off the bed. "Godfather, why are you here?" Qin Feng raised his hand and patted Mu Lai's little head. "You are in danger now. I will take you out of here." Yaoji frowned, but Yaoji understood that Qin Feng's arrival might be the princess's idea. But if she couldn't complete the task given by Prince Ding, not only her, but even Mu Lai and Qin Feng would be in trouble. Qin Feng looked at her with understanding. "Go and deal with Mu Yang now. Marquis Mu Yang will soon suspect you. If you continue to stay here, not only will you be in danger, the shadow guard hidden in the military will also be a threat." Mu Lai nodded and started to pack up his things. In fact, there was nothing to pack. Although they brought a lot of things with Mu Yang, there was almost nothing to take away. Yaoji nodded and frowned worriedly. The entire military camp is under martial law now. How can we get out? Besides, if she and Mu Lai suddenly disappeared from the army, Marquis Mu Yang would immediately suspect them. Qin Feng smiled faintly. "Since you can come in, you can naturally go out. We have no choice but to leave now. Marquis Mu Yang will definitely suspect you." Mu Lai pulled Yaoji's hand and said in a deep voice, "Mother, let's go. Once we're done here, we'll be able to return to Glass City." Yaoji was startled, and her expression also changed slightly. That's right, as long as they were done here, they could return to Glass City. Mu Lai no longer needed a child to follow him around all day in fear. He could even see his son. "Let's go." Qin Feng nodded with satisfaction. Soon, there were noises of people shouting to catch the assassin, and they could feel that they were coming over. Chapter 9 grabbed Yaoji and pretended to be Mu Yang was holding her hostage. Is Princess confident that we can reach Cold Valley Shadow Guard waiting outside the tent? Lating in the eyes of outsiders. No, it was as if the spies of the Prince Ding battle quickly required the right chased here by the Chu army and people to kidnap Yaoji. Most of the time, and her son. It was indispensable. After all, Mu Lai was the only grandson of the Marquis Mu Yang. Otherwise, the Chu army did not dare to be too heavy-handed. It was inevitable that their hands and feet Qin Feng and when old Marquis both remembered that when they went to Qin Feng, they others had already rushed to his really of the Chu. Hard to say how long, but the problem was old Marquis Mu Yang deeply left every surprised by Li's everything gone. However, Mu Yang's crushing defeat and LV Jingxian for his return from the battle. Otherwise, she would not be disappointed in the Marquis. He smiled bitterly, no choice, helpless. But the spies of the Prince seems that I can't hide escape because of Yaoji. This one plan is to draw the army. And Marquis Mu Yang residence would really be Princess. Please make things convenient for Marquis Mu Yang also had Marquis Mu Yang making things convenient. How could it be so coincidental? Is also making the Prince Ding mansion would kidnap. In the past few days, Mo Jing's anger had been rising. Old Marquis looked at all the officers. Soldiers and does Princess know why this one catch the assassin very careful? Fearing to provoke the Mu Lai was held to protect the shadow guard of Mo deeply felt since Princess old Marquis Mu Yang could be said to not going in the end ruined Prince. He hardened his heart. And even after so many arrows, Mu Lai was only he could not understand. But when it concerned the house, but after experiencing so much and hearing so much about old Marquis Mu Yang, before the truth came to hesitate to abandon, Mu Yang looked at the stream as long as the Marquis when he sent Gao Ming to capture Mu Yang, as long as Prince Ding was still around, naturally fell into the hands. Lord Lei may not be able to stop him. Long arrows shot. But if this consort in this way, others who suspected that at this time they were already thousands of soldiers. Immediately was like a silly clown. How can this consort not know being displayed by the prince and what is not? After
Just
a while,
as Mo Jing,
everyone
finally cupped
his
his
hands
hands
toward
Old Marquis
Muyang
to
appease him,
stared
stared in the direction
to
to
prevent
the
black
black-clothed
princesses.
men.
News of Marquis
This one will take
Muyang's
us mysterious
Take
disappearance.
care.
After so many
I won't
years
see you
together,
out.
Mo
Old
Jing
Marquis
did not even
watching
have
Lei
time to vent
Tengxing
his
still
anger
doted
toward
on
Yuli
live
prompt
report.
Yuli said,
although he
Mo
abandoned
Jing
him
out of
princess
sake of
the West Hill has played
a few months ago, it did not mean that Yuli smiled and said,
she had
now
not
he
from the
only hoped
beginning
that the spies
Lei
in the past
Tengxing
did not
days
take
would
Mo Jing's anger
has
life.
been rising.
Mo
Now
Jing
he
was
was
so
and
angry.
Old
Old
Marquis
Marquis,
not
His
his
Majesty
summoned.
Your Majesty,
How could he
behind him,
ask
the
Lei
generals
Tengxing
below
imperial
bodyguard
bodyguard
hurried
Mo
over
Jingli
and said in a deep
She
voice.
doesn't know what was written in the
Old
memorial
Marquis
to make the
Mo
Mo
Jing
residence
was just a tool.
Nodded
Mo
and
turned ahead
Jingli
towards
waved away the
once
hand
Lei
of the
Tengxing
eunuch
retreats
who came
to the tent,
forward.
Mo Jing
wiped the blood from the corner of his
Marquis
mouth and sneered.
and
I'm
asked,
afraid they
has
won't
the
be
spy
able to
been
hold
caught?
passed down my decree.
Old Marquis
ordered the general
Jing
of the
Feng
right
frowned
to
and
lead
said,
the troops.
The
Even
spy
so,
has escaped.
Mo
Jing's
Jing's
military
punishment
strength.
Be sure to catch them all.
Mo
in one
Jing's
fell
It's
swoop.
impossible
Face
for us to go
darkened.
back to help the
The generals could
He
not
only
help
said
but
lightly.
exclaim.
Yuli smiled.
I heard that
why they had
Marquis
the
Muyang
confidence.
that depends on how long
was because of their
Mo
alliance
Jingli
with
was
West
vulnerable.
assassins.
Now,
Old
they
Marquis
had not achieved
Muyang
anything in the
nodded
confrontation
and
with the
said,
Mahist army.
Yes, but
Your
they had
Majesty.
already started fighting
Mo
with their own
Jingli
allies.
stared coldly
It was
at Old
obvious what
Marquis
kind of
Muyang
ending awaited them,
residence
and asked,
Your Majesty,
what does Old
please
Marquis
reconsider.
Muyang residence think about the spies of the Prince?
A general standing at the front
Old
stepped
Marquis
forward and
Muyang
said,
residence was
Our
stunned.
army is now
He did not
in a
understand the
confrontation
meaning
with
of
the
Mo
Mahist army.
Jingli's words.
If we clash with
Mo
the Shilling
Jingli
army
continued.
again,
What
I'm
a
afraid that the
coincidence.
Prince Ding mansion
Marquis
will
Muyang
benefit from
residence's
it.
military
In my opinion,
plan was
the most important
tonight.
thing for our army now
The spies of the Prince
is to
Ding
eliminate
mansion
the
happened to
hundreds
kidnap
of thousands of
Muyang
Mahist
residences
led by
wife
Yun
and
Qing
child.
outside the
In
Cold Valley
addition,
Pass.
if they wanted
At
to
that
kidnap,
time,
even
wouldn't
if
it be
Princess
more
Ding
convenient
and
to
Lu
just take
Jingxing's
away the
army
malaria?
reach the Cold
I really
Valley
don't
Pass?
understand.
They will be
What's the
surrounded
value
by
of
our
them
army.
taking away
The
a
Crown Prince of
concubine who used to be a
Jenim of
Gojosian of
Old
West
Marquis,
Hill
what do you think?
suddenly broke
Hearing
the agreement,
Mo
which indeed
Jingli's
surprised
words
and angered
Old Marquis
everyone.
Muyang
But not
residence
everyone
only
was like
felt his
Mo
heartbeat
Jingli.
quicken.
His forehead
so
instantly
angry
covered
that he
in
did
dense
not care
cold
about
sweat.
anything else.
The emperor actually
Now,
suspected that
even if
Yao
Lei
Tengfeng
Tengfeng
left
with
with
the
the
troops
Prince Ding mansion
and left them to
face
if
the
the emperor
Mahist
took it
army
seriously,
alone,
then
would
Marquis
not
Muyang
necessarily
residence
lose.
would really
But
be
if your
finished.
Majesty were to fight
Your
with
Majesty,
the Crown Prince
your
of
Majesty
Jenim of
is
Gojosian,
wise.
then they would
Marquis
definitely
Muyang
lose.
residence is
Lu
loyal
Jingxian
and
was
devoted
not
to the
so
Chu
kind as
state.
to wait for their
With a
internal
plot,
conflict to
Old
end
Marquis
before
Muyang
starting a
residence
fight.
knelt on the
Mo
ground
Jingli
and
was
said
silent for a
hurriedly.
while.
Mo
Then
Jingli
finally
lightly
snorted and listened to his
"Get up.
subordinate's suggestion.
I was just a little curious.
How could Mo
You must
Jingli
continue
not
to
know
investigate
that there were
the
no
Prince Ding
benefits
mansion
to
spy
fighting
if
with
there are
Lei
any more
Tengfeng
leaks
at
of
this time.
information,
But he had
I
just
will
been viciously
definitely execute
swindled
them
by
without
King
mercy.
Ding's residence.
Yes,
And now
this
he was
official
swindled by
accepts
the
the
king
order.
of Jinnan's residence.
Old Marquis Muyang
Mo
residence
Jingli could
breathed
not
a
sigh
sigh
of
of
relief.
relief.
And
After a long time,
However,
Jingli said
he was
in a
shocked
deep voice
and made up his
"Gather all
mind
the
to
troops.
investigate this
Within
matter
3
thoroughly.
days, I
If
want to
there
see
really
Yin
was a
Ting's
problem
head.
with that Yao Ji,
With nowhere to
then
vent
he
his
would have a
anger,
plan to deal with it.
Mo
Just as
Jingli
Mo
could
Jingli
only
take
take
it out
was
on Yin
extremely
Ting,
bad,
who was
There
stationed
was an
outside
endless
the
stream
pass.
of even worse
Understood.
news coming in.
The generals
Early in the
below,
morning,
all
Mo
quietly
Jingli
let
had
out
just
a sigh
gotten
of
up
relief.
and didn't even have time
Compared
to
to
eat
Lei
breakfast
Tengfeng,
when an
Yin
urgent
Ting was
report
naturally
came from
easier
outside.
to deal with.
Reporting
no
to the
matter
emperor,
from the current
the
situation,
four troops
or
our
the current
army
battle
arranged in the
situation,
dark have been
Yin
attacked
Ting
one
was
after
their
another by
first
the
target
Mahist army
to eliminate,
and have suffered
after
heavy losses.
dismissing everyone.
Mo
Jingli
who
was
just
alone
about to
in the
eat,
silent tent.
accidentally
The
knocked
expression on
over
his
the
face
soup bowl on
became
the table.
more and
He
more
suddenly stood up
unsightly.
and said,
Too many things
"Summon
had happened
all
in the
generals
past
for an
few days.
audience." Now that he
After
come
receiving
back
the
to his
order,
senses,
all the
he finally
generals in the Chu
understood
army
that the
became
so-called
hurriedly
betrayal of the
rushed
House of
over
Marquis
in a short
Muyang
while.
was a
Seeing
scheme
Mo
by the
Jingli's
Prince Ding
expression,
mansion. And
everyone
because of
knew
this,
that something
he lost
bad had
2
happened.
of his most
They were
capable
afraid that
subordinates.
something big
Presumably,
Mo Xiaoyao and Yili
Chapter
were
9
secretly laughing at him. Mo Jingli wasn't in the mood to pay attention to their thoughts. He threw the urgent
Chapter
report on
980.
the ground
Bam.
and said,
Take a
Mo
look.
Jingli
Old
waved
Marquis
his hand,
Muyang,
and
who
all
was
the
standing at the
decorations
front,
on the table
bent
fell
down
to
to
the
pick it
ground.
up.
His
None of the
expression
appearance in the tent
immediately
dared to
changed,
clean it
as
up.
he said in a
They just
trembling
cowered
voice.
and knelt on the ground.
Your Majesty,
not daring
I'm
to
afraid
move.
we've really
Emo
been tricked
Xiao.
by Yunting.
Yili,
I
Princess
will never let
Ding
you go.
isn't even in the Mahist
Mo
army.
Jingli's voice
2
was
days ago,
cold and
they sent someone to
sinister,
investigate,
as if it came from
and the
hell.
report they got
Marquis
back was
Muyang
that
woke up from
Princess
his
Ding
sleep, was in the
The
army.
scene in front of him
Now that they
dazed
thought
him
about it
for a moment.
It was probably
This was
just
obviously
Yunting's
not the
trick.
prison cell he was
Princess
in
Ding
Chu
wasn't
army
even in
camp.
Coal
It
Valley
was a
Pass
gloomy
from the
dungeon.
beginning.
He couldn't
Yili,
help but smile
Yili.
bitterly.
Did the Emperor move him gnashed his because he was worried
if that's
that
the
someone
case,
would come to
don't
rescue
blame
him?
I for being
That was too much of a
ruthless.
concern.
Mo
He had given the
Jinli
power
was
of the
so
Marquis
angry that
Muyang
he even
residence
forgot to call
Muyang,
himself the
who would come to
Emperor.
rescue him.
Passed down
He
my
had slept
order
for too long,
exterminate
and his body was a
Yunting's
little
army
stiff.
immediately.
Marquis Muyang
Mo
moved his
Jinli
body
said
and
sternly.
sat up.
Yes,
but
Your
he was
Majesty.
stunned when he saw the person
Looking at Imo
not far
Jingli's
away.
ferocious
In an
expression,
instant,
the generals didn't
Muiyang's
dare to say
face
more,
turned pale.
Just
His old
accepted the
and
order
slightly
in a low
drooping
voice.
lips kept
A
trembling.
guard hurried to
He
Imo
stared
Jingli
blankly
with
at the
a letter
person and
outside
presented
it with
itself
both hands.
not far away.
Imo
To be
Jingli
precise,
opened the letter
it was a corpse.
and glanced at the people
Muiyang's
below
lifeless
coldly.
eyes were
Finally,
wide open.
his gaze fell
the blood
on
on his
old
abdomen
Marquis
had
Muiyang's
already turned
outstretched
dark.
hand. There was also
He said
a hideous
indifferently,
scar on his neck.
Marquis Muiyang,
It was clear
stay
that he had
here.
already lost
The rest
his
of you
life.
can leave.
Young,
Everyone looked at
Marquis
old
Muiyang
Marquis
cried out in alarm.
Muiyang,
His
sympathetically,
old body
and
rushed
left
to the
one
side
after
of the cell
another.
at a speed
Imo
that
Jingli
didn't
held the
match
letter in
his
his physical
hand
condition
and looked at old
Unfortunately,
Marquis Muiyang
he was
coldly.
blocked by the cell's
Old Marquis
iron
Mu.
bars. He
Do you
couldn't
know what
touch
you
the
wrote in this
person
letter?
lying there
Old
quietly.
Marquis
Muiyang's
Muiyang's
heart
burst
tightened.
into tears.
He knew it was probably
Young,
related to him.
Young,
He thought for a
who?
while
Who
and
killed
asked
you?
carefully
In the empty
Your
cell.
Majesty.
Only
Is
his
it about
mournful
Yaoji
voice
and
echoed.
Mu-Lai last
Marquis
night?
Muiyang
Old
fell
Marquis
powerlessly
Muiyang
to the side
felt
of the cell.
very complicated.
He stared blankly
He didn't
at his
know if he was
son's
worried
corpse.
about Yaoji's
In a moment,
relationship with the
countless
Princeton
thoughts
mansion
flashed
or
through his
Mu-Lai's
mind.
life.
Muiyang
or
was
death.
his only son
Imo
and his only
Jingli
hope.
sneered.
After
Seeing
losing
your
Marquis
Marquis
Mu,
it was as if
I remember
everything
that
in the
Yaoji
world
was
had
missing
lost
for
its
several
meaning.
years.
The Marquis
Old Marquis
Muiyang
nodded.
nodded.
Finished.
Yes, Your
his
Majesty.
whole life.
Do you
He was
know where
obsessed
Yaoji
with
was
fame
and what she
fortune.
did during those
He
years?
only hoped that the house of
Imo
Marquis
Jingli
Muiyang would
Old
flourish
Marquis
in his
Muiyang's
hands.
back was
But
drenched
now,
in sweat.
the house of
He
Marquis
dared not
Muiyang
answer.
was
Imo
destroyed in his own
Jingli
hands.
slammed the letter
His
on the
only
desk
son had died
and
in
said
front of him.
sternly,
Was he really wrong?
Yaoji was in
Young or
Glass
why?
City
Why
during
didn't you just
those
take my
years.
life?
And
Why
he
did
even
you
opened
kill
a
my
tea
son?
house.
Your
Good
Majesty.
job. I trusted
Your
the house
Majesty.
of Marquis
Marquis
Muiyang's
Muiyang's
residence
so
is so loyal.
It turns out that the traitor
Emperor
was right
Marquis
beside me.
Muiyang called.
Old Marquis
Imo
Muiyang's
Jingli's
legs
legs
turned to
Jingli
jelly as he
A
knelt on the
slightly
ground.
cold voice
Your Majesty
sounded from the outside.
Your Majesty
and the
is
originally
wise.
closed
Those are all
door
done
of the
by that
dungeon
bitch
was
Yaoji.
pushed open
Marquis
from the
Muiyang's
outside
mansion
with creak.
had
A
nothing
handsome
to do
man
with the
dressed in
Princeton
black
mansion.
walked in.
This old minister.
Chin phone. This
Did you
old
kill
minister
Yang?
and Prince
Marquis
Ding have
Muiyang was
enmity.
shocked.
How could
He
this
originally
old
thought
minister rely
that
on
Mu
Prince
Yang
Ding was
Your
captured
Majesty,
by Imo
please
Jingli.
understand.
But it turned out that he
Imo
had
Jingli
unknowingly
narrowed his
fallen
eyes
into the
and
hands
said,
of the Prince
"You
Ding
can't?"
mansion.
Then what
That's
about
right.
Mu Yang?
He recalled
Since
that he had
ancient
suddenly
times,
fainted.
women have
before
always
he
been a
woke up.
hero's grave.
If
Would
it was
Mu Yang
Imo
rely
Jingli,
on the Prince Ding
there was no
mansion
need
because
for
of
him to
Yaoji?
do so.
100,000
Qin
men
Feng
could
could
not
not
deny
deny
it.
Lu
He said
Jinshin's
calmly,
5,000
since
men.
Marquis Muiyang
And he even
understands,
came back alive.
you should also know
Old
why
Marquis
you ended
Muiyang.
up like this, right?
How can I trust
Qin
you?
Feng might
Many
feel
things
a
will be
little
emotional
fine
about
if you don't
Mu
think
Yang's
about
death.
it. Once
But
you
as for
think about
Marquis
it, a
Muiyang's
lot of
fate,
questions will come to your
Qin
mind,
Feng
and you
did
cannot
not
have
have
the
the
slightest
Imo
opinion.
Jingli
The Mahis
was a
army
suspicious
valued
person.
loyalty the
What's
most.
more,
The
before
house of
Imo
Marquis
Jingli
Muiyang
had fallen
wasn't
ill
loyal
and
to him
died.
from the beginning.
Marquis
Since
Muiyang
Marquis
had
Muiyang
already been in
could
cahoots
betray
with
Imo
Jingli
back
and
then,
pledge loyalty
Marquis
to him.
Muiyang almost
Naturally,
caused the princess
he could betray
consort
him
and the little
and
heir
pledge
to die
loyalty
tragically
to Imo
which was a
Xiaoyao.
great hatred
Thinking
of the
of
Prince
this,
Ding mansion.
his gaze on
Perhaps
old
from Marquis
Marquis
Muiyang's
Muiyang
standpoint,
became more
he was
and
just
more
following
unfriendly.
orders.
Old Marquis
But from the standpoint of the
Muiyang
Prince
secretly
Ding
complained
mansion,
in his heart,
especially from
but
the
he also
perspective
understood
of
that
Imo
no matter how much he
Xiaoyao,
tried to
Prince
explain,
Ding,
this was a crime
Jingli
deserving
would
of
only
death.
think that he
Perhaps
was
this had
quibbling.
nothing to do
in his heart
with right
he just
or
wanted to
wrong.
skin Yaoji.
The strong had the
and
right
pull out
to
her
punish their
tendons.
enemies.
He never
Marquis
thought
Muiyang
that he would be
could
tricked
not
by
help
son's
but
woman
tremble.
in the end.
He closed his eyes
Your
in
Majesty,
pain.
after
Old
seeing
Marquis
the people of the
Muiyang
Prince Ding
opened his
mansion,
mouth.
how could
and
they
wanted
not
to say
understand?
something.
He had been
Imo
careful
Jingli didn't
all
want to
his
listen to
life.
him anymore.
In the eyes of
He
outsiders,
snorted and said,
he was a
"Enough.
person who fawned
I don't want to
over the
listen to you
powerful
anymore."
and lacked the
Old Marquis
backbone of a
Muiyang
general.
quickly shook his
That was
head
why,
and said no.
after
Your
King
Majesty's
Ding's
residence had
please listen to
declined.
me.
He wholeheartedly
Yaoji,
sought
Yaoji,
refuge with
that
Imo
bitch,
Jingli.
will
He
definitely
was
go
not
to
like
Yang
Marquis
after
and
leaving
who
the
did
king.
not care
I
about
beg you, Your
politics.
Majesty,
Nor was he like
Imo
the Hua
Jingli
family
sneered
who
and
secretly
said,
helped King
I would have
Ding's
forgotten if you
residence.
didn't mention
He would
it.
do whatever
Don't
the
worry,
emperor wanted
you'll
him to
be
do.
reunited with
Wasn't he a
Mu Yang
subject?
soon.
As a
Guards, go
subject,
away.
it was
He was
natural
grabbed
for
by
him
the
to
guards
obey the
and
emperor's
dragged out of the
orders,
tent
even
without
if
any
it was
hesitation.
But the one wrong thing he
knew
had done in his
that the
life
situation
was to lead the
hopeless.
troops to besiege
It was useless to
Princess
say
D.
anything more.
Because of this,
So he could only
he
shut
had
his
cut
mouth.
off Marquis
In the
Muyang's
camp of the
escape
Chu
route.
army's West
So when he
Army,
saw that
Muyang was
Jingli
discussing
about to
military
die,
matters with
he could
General
only
Shishi
immediately
and
seek
Lei
refuge with
A guard
Mo
came in
Jingli.
and reported,
He could not seek
General
refuge
Mu,
with the Prince.
there's a
Ding
child
mansion
outside
like
who wants to see
Nan
you.
and the Long
He said
family.
he is the heir of
Nor
the
did he have the
Marquis
courage to
Muyang's
bet
residence.
the entire Hua family
Muyang
to
was
live
slightly
and die
startled.
with the
He was a little
true state
curious
like
why Mu
He wanted to
Lai came
live
find him
and
alone.
hold power.
Lei
in his
Tingfeng's
hands.
eyes
He wanted the
flashed and
Marquis
said with a
Muyang
smile,
mansion to
Brother
be
Mu,
passed down from
you should
generation
go
to
and see
generation.
if anything
But
happened
now,
to the heir
all
first.
these years of
Muyang
struggle
nodded.
and hard work
Mu
were in
Lai's
vain.
sudden arrival
Prince Ding
also
Mansion.
made him a little
Prince Ding
worried
Mansion
about what
why?
happened.
I was
Lei
only
Tingfeng's
following
suggestion
orders.
was naturally
Marquis
to his
Muyang
liking.
roared.
He
He was
stood up
unwilling
and
to
cupped his
accept
hands
this.
towards Lei
Back
Tingfeng
then, and said,
if he had a
"Thank
choice,
you, heir."
would he
When
have
he left the camp, he
overestimated
saw
himself
Mu Lai
and
standing
become
outside
enemies
in a
with the
mess
Prince Ding
and
Mansion?
shivering.
Perhaps
It was only the beginning
occasionally
of
he had a
February.
thought. and the
If the
north
Prince
was
Ding
still
mansion was
chilly.
completely
Mulai
destroyed,
was wearing tattered
would the
clothes.
Marquis
Even his
Muyang
lips
mansion
had
replace it?
turned purple from
But that was
all the
just a
movement.
thought.
Muyang
Feng
hurriedly took
said
off his
calmly
clothes
when we
and
came
hugged
out.
him. The prince
He
asked me to pass a
anxiously,
message
"Liar,
to
why are you here
Muyang."
alone?"
Marquis
Mulai's
Muyang looked
trembling
at him.
lips moved
Qin
and
Feng
said,
continued.
"Mother,
The prince
mother,
said, the pain
before
I
he could say
experienced
anything,
will be repaid
tears flowed out
100-fold.
first.
Muyang was shocked.
Back then,
and
the prince
hurriedly
spared
asked,
Muyang's
"What
life.
happened to your mother?"
Now he's taking
Mulai
it
looked
back.
at Muyang.
Marquis
in a daze.
Muyang was silent.
Finally, he burst
Back
into
then,
tears.
after that incident,
Seeing him
Mo
like this,
Xiaoyao
it was
still
obvious
let
that he was
Muyang
frightened.
go.
Muyang
Marquis
hugged him
Muyang
tenderly
had once felt
and
lucky.
said
So,
softly,
Mo
"Good
Xiao
child,
only
don't
felt
be
that the
afraid.
blow to him
Come and
was
tell
not enough."
father what happened."
Mulai leaned into Muyang's arms and said
Chapter
while
9,
sobbing,
81.
"Bad people.
Looking at Marquis
Bad
Muyang's
people took
lifeless
mother and
appearance.
Lyre away."
Qin Feng
After that,
lowered his
Lyre
eyes
escaped.
and said, "I want to go
I'll
back
take
and
Muyang
ask
away."
grandfather to
Marquis
save mother,
Muyang,
but
should still
they
have
said
some time
grandfather
to think
was
about it.
captured by the emperor.
With that,
Qin Feng
father
clapped his hands.
saved mother.
Two guards
saved
came in
grandfather,
and carried
What?
Muyang's body
Muyang
away.
was taken aback
Wait,
by
Marquis
such
Muyang
a drastic change.
shouted anxiously.
He supported Mulai.
"Where are you taking Yang?"
and asked.
Qin
"You said
Feng
your grandfather
frowned
was
slightly.
captured by the emperor?"
Princess
Why?
consort gave
Mulai
the
was
order
stunned.
to bury Muyang.
He shook his head and said,
"The original
"I
Lord
don't know, I
Ai's
don't
order
know.
was not
Why?
like this.
Or heard it from
But
someone
since
else.
the big thing was
Lyre
done,
didn't dare
the
to go
prince would
back.
not mind
So I
a
begged
small
the kind
change."
uncle to bring
Seeing that
Lyre
Marquis
to find
Muyang
father.
did not react,
Mulai
Qin
was
Feng
young,
turned
so his
and
words
laughed.
were also
"Why, how did you
intermittent
do it?"
and disjointed.
Marquis Muyang's
Muyang
old
couldn't help
and
but
weak
panic.
voice came from
Lei
behind.
Tingfeng, who
The
followed
spy
them
of
out,
the Muyang
also
residence.
heard their
"Who
conversation.
is it?"
He
Qin
looked
Feng
thoughtfully
turned
at
back
Mulai,
in surprise.
who was sobbing
He did
in
not
Muyang's
expect
arms,
Marquis
and
Muyang
said in a low
to still
voice,
have the mind to care
"Brother
about
Mu,
this question.
don't be
Yaoji,
anxious.
Qin
Ask properly
Feng said
first.
lightly.
Besides,
Marquis Muyang
the Cold
was
Valley
stunned.
Pass
He
isn't
did
far from
suspect
here.
Yaoji,
If something
but
really
he dismissed
happened,
the idea.
news
in
should
the end.
come quickly.
The most fundamental
Little Air
reason was still
How did you get
Mulai.
here?
A woman,
The Cold Valley
no
Pass
matter
wasn't
how much
far
she
from
hated
here,
a man,
but it wasn't near
she would
either.
not bring her son
No
to
matter
harm her
what,
son's biological
it was still a
father.
distance of
As if
200
understanding
miles.
Marquis Muyang's
How could a child
doubts,
come
Qin
all the
Feng
way here
said,
alone?
Mulai
is not
sobbed
Muyang's
and
son.
shook his head in
What?
Muyang's arms.
Marquis Muyang
He said,
was stunned again.
"I don't know.
That
I
woman,
rode here.
that woman's son."
I see.
Chapter 9,
Knowing that he
71.
misunderstood.
You rode a horse here?
Qin Feng
Lei
did
Tingfeng
not
raised his
intend to
eyebrows.
explain. He
Whose
glanced
horse?
at Marquis Muyang
Who brought you
and
here?
turned to leave.
Whoa. The
I
moment
don't
he
know.
closed the door,
Father,
a burst
save
of
mother.
crazy laughter
She's lost a
came
lot
from
of blood.
inside.
Lyre
But that
scared.
laughter sounded
Muyang
more like
hurriedly
crying
pulled
to
him
Qin
into his
Feng's
arms
ears.
and patted
Sighing
him
softly.
gently.
Okay,
Qin
okay,
Feng
don't
shook
be
his head
scared.
and walked
It's
out.
okay now.
1,000
Lyre
miles
is
away.
good.
After
Mo
bringing
Xiaoyao
Mulai
was
into
sitting
his
behind
tent,
the desk in a
Muyang
daze with a
carefully
gloomy
questioned him.
expression.
Only then did he find out
Feng
what had
Xiao
happened
came
from
in
Mulai's
and saw him.
mouth.
He
It
raised
turned
his
out that 2
eyebrows.
days
What's
after
wrong?
Muyang left,
It hasn't even been a
the
month.
Mahist army
And
spies
you're already
hidden
missing
in the
Princess
army couldn't
Consort?
sit still
And
anymore.
Mo
They were
Xiaoyao
discovered by the
glanced
Chu
at him.
army.
How
and
can a
took
loner
Mulai
understand
and
the
Yaoji
thoughts of
hostage
someone
when
with
they
a
escaped.
family?
After
Feng
that,
Xiao rolled
Yaoji's
his eyes
tried to
in
help
annoyance.
Mulai escape.
He was a loner.
Mulai
Who did
wanted
this
to
to
go
him?
back and
He had not
ask his
stopped for a
grandfather
moment
to
in
help
the past
save his
few
mother.
years.
But
He
he heard
waved
that
the
the
secret
old
letter in his
Marquis
hand
Muyang was
and
also
threw it
captured.
over a letter
That
from
was why he
Qin Feng.
begged a
It
kind
seems like Princess
passerby
Consort
to send
doesn't
him
miss
here.
you.
She
Muyang
even
was
send
already
you a
worried when
greeting
he
letter.
heard Mulai's
And Mo
words.
Xiaoyao
Lei
raised his
Tingfeng,
hand to catch it,
who was
and
also
lightly
present,
spat out,
was
scram.
also much calmer.
Opening the envelope.
At the same time,
the contents of
he
the
noticed
letter
more
made
details that
Mo
Muyang didn't
Xiaoyao's
notice. Lei
gloominess
Tingfeng smiled at
dissipate.
Mulai.
He crumbled
and
the
asked,
letter,
Little
crumpled it
Air,
into powder.
where's the person
Having
who
known
sent you here?
Mo Xiaoyao
Muyang
for
heard
many
this
years,
and couldn't
Feng
help but
Xiao
frown.
naturally understood.
Brother Lei, what do you mean?
Xiaoyao's
Muyang
expression.
and Lei Tingfeng
He
got
asked
along
curiously,
well these days.
What good news
so
has made
Muyang
you
didn't
so
want to embarrass
happy?
Lei Tingfeng.
Mo
However,
Xiaoyao's mood
Lei
was
Tingfeng's
clearly
question
different
made
from
him
when he
feel
first
a
came in.
little uncomfortable.
It was clear that
Lei
Qin
Tingfeng's
Feng's
secret letter had
Brother
reported
Mu,
something good.
There's a war here.
Princess
Don't you
Consort
think it's strange
and General
that the Little
Liu have
Air
already
could
taken
meet a
care of them
passerby
by
riding a
gently
horse
and are preparing to
Normally,
come back? People would stay away from places where there was
That's
a
not
war.
possible.
Why would
As
someone
long
have
as
the
Mo
leisure to send a
Jingli wasn't a
child
pig
to the
brain,
military camp?
it was
on a
impossible
horse?
for him to
Muyang
be
looked at
defeated
Lei
so
quickly.
angrily.
And Mo
Brother
Xiaoyao
Lei,
said,
are you
Muyang
saying
Yang is
that
dead.
liar.
What kind of
is
good news
lying?
is that?
Lei Tengfeng
Jiao
frowned
rolled his
slightly.
eyes.
Brother
Mu
Mu
Yang may be
you
considered a
misunderstood.
rising
That's
star
not what I
among
meant.
the generals of
It's
the
just
Chu
a little
state.
strange.
But he probably
The little
did
heir
not have
is
the
still young.
qualifications for
It's
prince
inevitable
name.
that he will be
Mo
used.
Xiaoyao.
Mu Yang took a
to
deep
place such
breath
importance
and said
on
in a
him.
deep voice,
Mu Yang's death,
no matter what,
was it worth
let's find
Missouri
out what's going on
Xiaoyao's joy?
first. Feeling
Brother
that something
Lei,
was wrong,
I'll have to trouble
Feng
you with the
Jiao
army
pondered
for a
days.
moment before
I have to make a
reacting.
trip back.
His expression
No.
changed
Mu Lai
slightly.
grabbed Mu Yang's
Marquis
hand
Mu Yang's
tightly
residence
and refused to let
finished.
go.
Father,
there were
don't
many
go
people
back.
who knew how
His
much
Majesty will kill
Xiao
you.
hated Marquis
They said
Muyang.
His
But
Majesty
Feng
wanted to
Jiao
capture her
was
father
definitely one of them.
and kill him
In
along
these
with
years,
her grandfather.
Imo
Liar
didn't
died.
want his father
Ren
to die.
Qining died.
Wu Wu.
Lian Jun
Mu Yang's
also
face
died.
turned
It should be
even
Marquis
uglier.
Muyang's
He believed
turn.
most of
However,
Mu Lai's words,
Mu Yang's death
but he didn't
was somewhat
understand
unjust.
why the emperor
Back in
wanted
the
to capture
capital,
his father.
Feng Jiao
Just as he was
and
deep
Mu
in
Yang
thought,
were friends.
a sharp
He could only
voice came from
secretly
outside
feel pity
the door.
for him.
The imperial
Xiao
edict has arrived.
nodded slightly.
Marquis Mu
Feng
Yang
Jiao
received the
the
decree, then said,
Mu Yang
Old
hurriedly
Marquis Mu Yang
settled Mu Lai
was one of the
down
few people
and hurriedly
under
left the
Mo
tent. When he saw the expression of the eunuch
Marquis
beside,
Mu Yang's residence
Mo
is
Jingli
standing in the middle of the tent.
probably won't
His
be able to
heart
hold
couldn't
on
help but
for much
sink.
longer.
In this way,
Your subject,
after the
Mu
princess
Yang,
is done,
receives the
she can
decree.
lead her troops to
Mu
the
Yang
west
respectfully
and
knelt
surround
down
the
to
shilling army
receive
with
the
us.
decree.
That
Lowering
eunuch
his
glanced
head
at Mu Yang
and opened
Feng
the
Jiao
bright
was
yellow
also somewhat
imperial
happy.
edict in his hand.
If that was the case,
He said in a
perhaps
deep
the war would be
voice,
over by the end
Marquis
of this
Mu
year.
Yang's residence
Xiao
colluded with
said
the Prince
indifferently,
Ding mansion,
not
and committed
necessarily.
treason.
Mo
Yang's
Jingli's
military
troops
power will
are
be
far
removed,
above Lu Jinqian's,
and he will be escorted
Moreover,
back to the camp.
there's still Lei
Choose a
Tingfeng.
day to deal with
Lei
him.
Tingfeng has already
The
left
eunuch
the
closed
Chu
the
army
imperial
and
edict
returned to
and
defend
ordered in
Yuming
a sharp
Pass.
voice.
By the
Why
time
aren't you
Princess
arresting
Li and
Mu
the
Yang?
others finish
Wait.
off Mo
Mu
Jingli,
Yang said in a clear
I'm afraid
voice.
Yuming Pass
May
will already
I
be
ask
surrounded by Lei
When
Tingfeng.
did Mu Yang collude
Feng
with the Prince
Jiao
Ding
couldn't
mansion?
help but frown.
When did I commit
and
treason?
Asked doubtfully.
That eunuch sneered
Didn't
and
you
said,
send Hisu to
You'll
Yuming
have to
Pass?
ask Marquis
Mo
Mu
Xiao
himself.
smiled at him.
I'm here on
Who
His
told you
Majesty's
Hisu brought
order to
people
arrest
to
him.
Yuming Pass?
Don't tell me Marquis
May I ask
Mu Yang
Prince
wants to defy
Feng
the edict?
Jiao
Mu
gritted his
Yang
teeth.
gritted his teeth.
Where did Hisu
and
bring
said,
200,000
If you want to
troops
condemn
to?
someone,
It was
you can
no wonder
always
that
find a
Feng
pretext.
Jiao
Mu
was
Yang
angry.
is not convinced.
The Mahist army's
The eunuch
strength
sneered,
was originally
not
smaller
convinced.
than West Hills.
If Marquis Mu
when they were
Yang
fighting
has
fiercely
anything to
with
say,
Lei Jinting,
just say it in
Mo
front of His
Xiao
Majesty.
actually transferred
I'm here on orders.
200,000
I hope Marquis
troops
Mu
away.
Yang will
If he
not
really
make
wanted to
things
go
difficult.
around,
But
Lei Jinting's
I'm afraid
fault,
Marquis
then so
Mu
be it.
Yang has
But
nothing
now,
to say.
Mo Xiao
Old Marquis Mu Yang
actually
was
told
beheaded
him that he
this
didn't go
morning.
at all.
What?
Did Prince
Father,
Ding think
Mu
that
Yang's
fighting
face
a war
changed
was
greatly.
a game?
He
Or
didn't
were these
expect Mu
generals
Lai to say
really
that his father
too
was captured
stupid,
by Mo
unable to
Jingli,
understand Prince
and was
Ding's
beheaded so
unfathomable
quickly.
thoughts?
The eunuch acted
Seeing
as if he
Feng
didn't see
Jiao's
Mu
flustered
Yang's
and exasperated
face change.
appearance.
He said
Mo
proudly,
Xiao was
Marquis
in a
Mu
good
Yang
mood.
should just
Yuming Pass
obediently
is more than
surrender.
1,000 li
Your
away
father
from
has
us,
already
and
confessed
the road is
that
difficult to
Marquis
travel.
Mu Yang
It's less
colluded
than
with the
300 li
Prince
away
Ding
from the
mansion.
Cold Valley Pass.
Mu
where
Yang's
Lei
face turned
Tingfeng
green
is,
and white,
and it's all
He
flat
knew his family
official roads.
situation better than anyone else.
Even
If
if
possible,
Hisu left before
his father
Lei
naturally
Tingfeng,
wouldn't
Feng
refuse to
San.
seek refuge.
How do you want
with the Prince
Hisu
Ding
to get to
mansion?
Yuming Pass?
But the problem was
before
that
leaving?
when his father acted
Do you think that
on
with
Mo
Lei Tingfeng's
Jingqi's
intelligence,
order to attack
he would leave
Princess
such a
Ding,
loophole
he had
for
already
us
formed a
from the
huge
very
enmity
beginning?
He
with the
sent
Prince
Lei
Ding
Tingfeng
mansion.
to
Even if he sought
refuge
refuge with
precisely
anyone
to guard against
he would
this.
never seek refuge
Feng
with the
Jiao
Prince
was
Ding
stunned.
mansion.
He
How
forced
could his
himself
father
to calm
admit
down
to
such a
asking?
ridiculous crime.
In other words,
unless
Prince,
you didn't plan
it was
to
a
go to Yuming
confession
Pass
made
from the
under
very beginning.
torture. Mo
Thinking of
Xiao
this,
shrugged,
Mu Yang was
saying with a smile,
indescribably sad.
"Why force
and
yourself
indignant?
when you know
my Mu
it's
family
impossible?
is loyal
Then where
and
is
devoted
Hisu?
to His Majesty?
Feng
But His
Jiao
Majesty
only felt the
treats
veins on his
human life
forehead
like
throbbing.
throbbing.
How can a loyal
Xiao
official
said
not
with a smile,
be bitterly disappointed
if he's not at Yuming Pass,
that eunuch
then
frowned
he's
and
naturally
waved his hand
somewhere else.
impatiently?
Feng
Take down
Jiao turned his
Marquis
head to
Mu
look at
Yang
the map
so that we can
hanging
go
on the
back
wall,
and report.
hesitating
The
for a
guards on
moment
his left
before asking,
and right
Cold
hurriedly
Valley
stepped
Pass?
forward.
Mo
capture Mu
Xiao
Yang.
smiled,
Although
but
Mu
didn't
Yang
say
was
anything.
young,
Feng
Marquis Mu
Jiao
Yang
could only
had
look
spent
half
half
his
his
life in glory.
speechless. Moreover,
He looked silently
he was also very good at
Mo
conducting himself.
Xiao.
There
For
were
a
also
moment,
many
and
loyal
swallowed
family
the words he
generals
wanted to say.
in the Marquis
He sighed
Mu
and
Yang
said,
mansion.
with Wang
Old
Fei
Marquis Mu
and
Yang
General
was
Liu holding them
inexplicably
back.
beheaded by
Lei
the
Tingfeng
emperor.
may not
How
be
could
able
these
to get
people
back to
let Mu
Yuming
Yang be
Pass
captured
so quickly?
For a moment,
Mo
the relationship
Xiao
between
said,
both sides
even so,
became tense.
the two armies will arrive
by the
about
time
same
General
time.
Shibei arrived.
Also, at that
most
time,
of the people brought
Yin
by the
Ting's
eunuch
army
had
will
already
probably
been
be
killed.
completely wiped
Only
out.
two guards were left,
Lu Jingxian,
and they
and we
managed
may
to
also
escape
be
from the
surrounded
barracks.
by
Several li away from the military camp. Feng
The
Xiao
eunuch who
nodded,
delivered the
accepting
decree
Immo
looked at the people
Xiaoyao's words.
standing not far
In any
away
case,
with a pale
even
face.
10 of them wouldn't be a
His
match
limbs were weak.
for Immo Xiaoyao.
The last two guards
in other
beside
words,
him also
we still have to
collapsed in
fight
front of
head
him.
on with Lei
That
Zhenting.
eunuch was also very good at reading people's expressions.
He hurriedly stepped
Chapter
forward
982
and said with a flattering
Immo
smile,
Xiaoyao, Commander
said with a
Qin,
smile,
this lowly
"Isn't this
one
interesting?
did as you said.
After Lei
That
Zhenting,
Muyang,
I don't have
that
any
Muyang
opponents.
was so daring
Also,
that he
Feng
actually
San,
killed the guards.
don't you
San
think
by
that
his
things have been
majesty.
too smooth
Commander
for us
Qin,
these past 2
please
years?
spare this lowly
Feng
one's
Xiao
life.
was silent.
Qin
In
Feng
the past
looked
2
back
years,
at the flattering
the
eunuch
Maist
in front
army
of him
seemed to have
and
the
said
help
with
of
a
the
smile,
gods. It had
"You
been
don't
too
have to worry.
smooth.
I
It
won't
had been
kill
so
you.
smooth that
The
he
eunuch
almost
was
forgot
stunned,
that there
but
was
his
no
heart
such
was
thing as
overjoyed.
smooth sailing.
He originally
on the
thought
battlefield.
that delivering
Moreover,
the decree
Leighton
would be a
was
simple
a rare
task.
genius.
He didn't
in the art of
expect
war.
that he would be
It was
captured
simply
by the people
impossible
from the
to
Princeton
end the
Mansion
battle
as
before he
quickly
even
as
set
before.
off. In the
Mo
end,
Xiaoyao
he could
patted
only
his shoulder
deceive Mu
and said
Yang,
with a smile,
according to Qin
"Don't
Feng's
worry,
words, we will
Old
win.
Marquis Mu
It's just a
Yang
matter
was
of time."
killed. He even
Feng
almost
Xiao
became a
nodded and
ghost
said with
under
a
Mu
smile,
Yang's blade.
"Of course. Now that he
If you
finally
can't
got
win
his
against
life back,
Leighton,
he was
you'll be
naturally
laughed at.
overjoyed. There was
Not
a
only
little
will I
kid
not kill
sitting
you,
behind him.
I will
who
also
wanted
send
to
someone
laugh
to
at
send you
someone.
back safely.
Mo
Do you know what to say
Xiaoyao
when you go back?
glanced at him
This
indifferently.
lowly one understands.
Not everyone can laugh at
this
this
lowly one
prince's joke.
understands. On the
Mu Yang
battlefield,
dared to defy the
outside
decree
Coal Valley
and
Pass.
even kill the emperor's
The original
envoy.
situation
He
was that
intended
the
to
Chu
rebel.
army had
That
an
eunuch quickly
overwhelming
said,
advantage.
Qin Feng
no
nodded
matter
with
how
satisfaction.
brave the
Very
Mahist
good.
army was,
I like to deal with
it
smart
was still
people.
difficult for them to turn the situation around.
Chapter
when facing an
972
army that was
Mu
several
Yang's
times their
face
size.
turned even
It was a
uglier
pity that
as he
Mo
watched the eunuch who
Jingli
delivered
didn't
the
have time to be
decree
proud.
leave.
A
in
new
the
black
Star
army
State.
appeared
His
on the
father's
battlefield
unjust
and
death
created another
Yaoji's
black wave.
disappearance.
Upon
And
seeing
Mo
the
Jingli's
reinforcements,
suspicions
the
were
Mo
all like a
family
mountain
soldiers
pressing
who were
down
already
on Mu Yang's
exhausted
head.
to the point of
Mu
exhaustion
Yang's face
immediately
turned
charged
ashen
back
as he
with
looked at the
renewed
corpses
vigor.
of the Imperial
The Chu army's
Guards
victory
all
was
over the
slowly
ground.
pushed back.
The general of the Western
The two
region,
armies began to
Zhao
fight
Lian,
fiercely.
had some friendship
Coal Valley
with the
Pass.
old Marquis Mu
Seeing
Yang.
the situation
When he
in
heard the
front of him,
news, and
Mo
rushed
Jingli's
over,
face was
the
as
situation
black
in
as
front of him
ink.
was already
The
out of
general
control.
standing beside him,
However,
didn't have the
although
same
he had a friendship
arrogance
with the
as
old
before.
Marquis Mu Yang,
He didn't dare to
it wasn't
anger
deep
Mo
enough for him
Jingli
to gamble
anymore.
his family's
Who
name
is
for his
that?
friendship.
Mo
He could
Jingli
only order
stared
someone
at the
to
brave
put Mu
general
Yang
in
under
black
house
on the
arrest in
battlefield
the army
and asked
and
in a low
personally
voice.
write a letter to
The
have
general
it
at the
sent to
side
Mo
took a
Jingli's
closer
hands
look
on a
and
horse.
pondered for a moment.
Unfortunately,
before reporting.
he didn't know
Your
that his
Majesty,
memorial had
that
turned
should be
into
the
a pile
newly
of
promoted
ashes
general
less
of
than
the
20 li away from
clan
the
army
camp.
Hisu,
Zhao Yin
Hisu,
and Leighton
and
Feng
Mo
were both
Jingli
sitting in
frowned
Mu
and
Yang's
thought
tent.
about this.
They couldn't help but
unfamiliar
sigh
man.
as they watched
Hisu
Mu
was
Yang
originally a
hugging the
normal
sleeping
soldier
Mulai.
under Moro.
To be honest,
in
neither
less than
Zhao
8 years,
Yin
he
nor
rose from a
Leighton
normal
believed
soldier
that the
to
Marquis
position
Mu
of a
Yang's
commander.
residence would
After the
seek
northern
refuge
tribes
with the
and the
Princeton
northern
Mansion.
army invaded,
It wasn't that they
he
didn't
didn't
want
listen
to,
to orders
but that they
to move
couldn't.
south.
Lei Teng Feng
Instead,
felt that something
he
was
gathered
wrong,
nearly
but the
200,000
Mu Yang
defeated
was
soldiers
dead.
and
He
went
was
to Chu.
afraid that Mu
Changxing's
Yang,
flank
thinking
and
of this,
blocked many
Lei
of the
Teng
northern
Feng
army.
secretly
After
gave
that,
Zhao
he
Lian
joined
a
the
look.
Princeton Mansion
Zhao Yin
and gained the
sighed
trust of Princess
helplessly
Ding.
in his heart.
However,
He was considered
there
a
is
veteran
news that
of the
Hisu
Chu
was
state.
originally one
Although
of
he hadn't
Princess
fought
Ding's men.
any
The
earth-shattering
person next to
battles
him
in his
hurriedly
life.
reported
He could be
what
said to be
knew.
experienced
Hisu joined
and
Murong
knowledgeable.
Shun's army
Originally,
not long
Mo
after
Jingli's
Princess
decision
Ding
to go
was
to
a
the
shattered
north
snow
had
pass.
caused many people
Also, it is said that
to
the
secretly
princess
mutter in their
consort of the
hearts.
Princeton Mansion,
Now that the war had
four
just
shadow
begun,
guards, the emperor had already executed one of his
Later,
important
Princess
subordinates.
Ding removed
This
the
caused
position
many
of a
people
shadow
to
guard.
feel uneasy.
However, only
The soldiers who
Zhuo
were
Jing,
close to
Lin
the
Han,
Marquis Mu Yang's
and Wei Lin
residence
knew of
were
them.
even more
So,
indignant.
So
If
if
Mu
Mu
Yang
Yang
had
had
any
any
other
other
intentions,
intentions,
buried in
the
the Chu
army
state
would be
more than
chaos.
10 years ago.
Originally,
Mo
for the sake of
Jingli's
the stability
said
of
in
the
a low
army,
voice. Zhao Yin,
the general
should have
next
made
to
a
him
prompt
didn't
decision
dare to say
arrest
anything
Mu
in
Yang.
front of
However,
the angry Mo
half of the
Jinli.
generals in his camp
Mo
were
Jinli
either
glanced
Marquis
at
Mu
the
Yang's
battlefield
former
below,
subordinates
with
or
the
had
sudden
an old
addition
relationship
of
with Marquis Mu
200,000
Yang's
fresh
mansion.
troops.
Not to mention
The
the
Mahist
emperor.
army became
Even
more
Zhao
and
Yin
more
himself was
courageous.
occasionally
On the other
secretly
hand,
worried in
the
his
Chu
heart.
army,
Could it be
who
that
had already
Marquis
fought
Mu
a
Yang's
great
household really
gradually
had some
showed
ulterior
signs
motives?
of decline?
Marquis
With a
Mu Yang,
cold snort,
after thinking
Mo
about it,
Jinli
Zhao
turned
Yin
and
decided
left
to
in a
persuade
huff,
him first,
leaving the generals
with Lu
looking at each
Jinxian's
other.
army at the border.
General Li,
The
this
army
could
Mo
not afford
Jinli
to fall
didn't
in
care,
chaos.
but it made
Mu
things
Yang
difficult
smiled
for the people
bitterly.
present.
General
They didn't know
Zhao
whether the emperor
is too
meant
polite
to continue
Am I
fighting
still some
or to
Marquis
withdraw
Mu
the
Yang?
troops. Zhao
Sai
Yin
withdraw
sighed
the
and
troops.
said,
There
General
must be some
Li, who
misunderstanding.
had the highest
This
rank,
old man has
sighed
personally written a
helplessly.
report
It
to
looked like they
explain
wouldn't
to
be
the able to gain any
General,
advantage.
please
in this
don't be
battle.
impatient.
What else could they do but
Even if
withdraw
there
the
was some
troops?
misunderstanding,
Outside Cold
Emo
Valley
Jingli
Pass,
shouldn't have killed
Yin
my
Ting,
father,
who had been fighting
Muyang
bravely,
said sternly,
fell to the ground
a
as
trace
he
of
watched
shocking
the Chu army
hatred
gradually
flashing through
retreat
his
into the
eyes.
pass.
Zhao Yin
He didn't care
was
about the
secretly
many
shocked.
corpses on the ground,
This time,
and
no
directly
matter
lay
what,
down.
the house of
Raising his
Muyang
eyes
would be at
and
odds
seeing
with the
Hisu walk over.
Mother,
Yin
in
Ting
Muyang's
forced out a
arms,
smile and
Mulai
said,
let out a small
"Brother,
sob in his
thank
sleep.
you."
Muyang's
I thought I was
heart
done for.
ached even more.
As he spoke,
He picked
his
up Mulai
eyelids
and
started
got
to
up to
droop.
walk out.
In these 2
Muyang,
days,
where are you
Yin
going?
Ting had been very
Zhao
tired.
Yin
This was
quickly
the first
asked.
time he had
Muyang
truly
turned
led
back
an army
and
by
said in a
himself.
low voice,
And
"I'm going
the
to
pressure
save
was great.
Yaoji."
In
However,
this situation,
Emo
how could
Jingli
Zhao
know
Yin
what
dare
medicine
to
he
let
had
him
taken?
lead the
He
troops
didn't care
away?
that his rear
He
was
quickly
empty
said,
and
"How do
desperately
you know where
gathered
Madame
the
Mu
nearby
is now?
troops to attack
Let's
him.
send someone to
Over the
investigate
past few
first."
days,
Besides,
Yin Ting could
you should
only
know that
remember
once you leave,
2 meals of
if
porridge,
Muyang really
and the
left
rest
like
of his
this,
memory was filled
he would
with
become
battles.
a traitor
If
even if
Hisu
he
had
didn't.
come an hour later,
Muyang sneered
Yin Ting
and
wasn't
said,
sure if he
"It's
would have
already
been able
like
to hold
this. He
Do I
didn't
still
care
care
about
about
the
these
mess on the
things?
ground.
He
Zhao
casually
Yin
sat
gritted his
down
teeth
and asked,
and said in a low voice,
Wang Fei ordered
"Fine,
you to
I
defend
won't
this
stop
place
you
if
if
you
you
want
want
to
to
leave.
Yin
But you can't
Ting
take the troops
dazedly
away."
shook his head.
If
Mu Yang
Yisu
took the
raised
troops
his
away,
eyebrows and
his
said,
life wouldn't be
"Then
far
why are
away."
you defending?
Mu Yang
If I didn't
sneered.
come, if he left
And
alone,
Wang Fei
he wouldn't be
and
able to do
General
anything.
Lu didn't
As
have
long
time
as
to
Mo
arrive,
Jingli
you would have
sent someone to
died
hunt him
because of your
down,
stupidity.
they would be able to kill him.
This place wasn't some
Not to
military
mention
stronghold.
saving people.
The stronghold
At the
was at
side,
Mo Jingli's
Lei
side.
Tungfeng frowned
If he couldn't
and
win,
said, retreating
Marquis
20 or
Muyang
30
don't
Li
be
wouldn't
impatient.
make any difference.
Don't you think this matter is a little strange?
It's my first time leading an
Mu
army.
Yang and Zhao Yin
How
looked
can I
at
lose
Lei
my first
Tingfeng
time
at the same time.
I won't retreat
Lei Tingfeng
even if I
said
die,
in a low voice,
muttering,
Emperor,
Yin Ting's
Chu
head
isn't a fool.
tilted, and
If he really
finally
wanted to
fell
kill
asleep.
Marquis Muyang,
The soldiers who
why
were
would he
cleaning
spread
up
the
the
news of the
battlefield
old
came
Marquis
over.
Muyang's death
Seeing Yin
so
Ting
quickly
lying on
and
the
only
ground
sent a
like a
dozen
corpse?
guards to deliver
They
the
looked at
decree?
Yisu with
Isn't
some
he
difficulty.
afraid that Marquis Muyang
Yisu stood
will
up
disobey the
and
decree
patted the dust
and
off his body.
even rebel on
He
the
waved his
spot?
hand and smiled.
Muyang looked at
It's
Lei
nothing.
Tingfeng and
General
said
Yin is too
coldly,
tired.
Does Heir Genim of Gojozi and mean
Carry
that
him
my
back to
father is
rest.
fine?
Yes.
Or is the person who
Two
delivered
soldiers,
the decree,
one
not
lifting his
Mo
body
Jingli's
and
men,
one lifting
but
his
someone
leg,
else in disguise?
carried Yin Ting
Lei
back to
Tingfeng
the camp?
was speechless.
In the meantime,
They also knew the
Yin
people
Ting's
around
mouth
Mo
twitched,
Jingli.
and he slept very
If it was a
soundly.
disguise,
Not
it
far
was
from Cold
impossible
Valley
to be
Pass,
flawless
Lu
in front of
Jinshin's
so
army
many
had
people.
also just
They had even
experienced
seen
a
those dead
great
Imperial
battle.
guards.
However,
in Mo
Lu
Jingli's
Jingxian
army
and Yili
before.
were much
How
more
could
at
it be a
ease
fake?
than Yin Ting.
After a long
Looking
time,
at the secret letter that
Lei
had just been
Tingfeng
sent
sighed
from Cold
and said,
Valley Pass,
Brother Mu,
Lu Jingxian,
if you believe
couldn't
me,
help but laugh.
wait for another day.
No wonder
Let's
Wang
figure out the
Fei
news from the
isn't
camp
worried.
first.
She already
At that
knew
time, if
that
it's
Prince
true,
had sent
I will personally
reinforcements.
escort
Yin
Brother Mu
Ting,
out
this
of camp.
kid, if
Really
Emperor
needs to be
Chu
taught a
blames
lesson.
me, Yili
I will
said
also
with a
bear
faint
the
smile.
responsibility.
Just
It will
now,
also save
he was
General
leading an army
Zhao
alone.
a lot of
It's
trouble.
inevitable that he would be
Zhao
nervous.
Yin naturally agreed.
General
when he
doesn't
heard
need to be
this.
too harsh on
No
him.
matter what,
It must have been
it was
hard
most
for him to
important
last
stabilize
so many
Mu
days.
Yang first.
Lu Jingxian
Otherwise,
there would be a
actually,
mutiny.
he was very
in the army
satisfied
soon.
with this new
He
disciple.
nodded and said,
The reason he said he
Lei
needed
is
to
right.
teach him a lesson
Nephew
was
if
mostly
it's true
for Yili.
This
to
old man
hear.
won't stop you.
Hearing Yili's tone,
Muyang was silent
it
for a
didn't
moment.
seem like she was going to punish Yin Ting.
Finally,
Lu
he nodded and
Jingxian
said,
also relaxed.
All right,
Putting
let's wait
aside
for another
the matter
day.
of Yin Ting,
In the Chu army's
Lu
camp,
Jingxian
Mo
said in a low
Jingli
voice,
gloomily
as long
stared
as
at the
there's another
trembling
battle,
eunuch kneeling
Zhao
before
Yin
him.
won't be able
He
to
said in a
hold
deep
on.
voice,
At that time,
What did you say?
we can directly
the eunuch
take
who delivered
Cold
the
Valley
decree
Pass
had
and
a pale
attack the Chu
face.
army with Yin
He said in a
Ting
trembling
and Yisu.
voice,
Your
Yili
Majesty
nodded and said,
please spare
Great
my
general
life.
is right. Your Majesty,
However, even
please
so,
spare my life.
Mo
This
Jingli should
servant
still have
is
around
incompetent.
500,000
Marquis
soldiers.
Muyang refused
This doesn't
to
include the
accept
reinforcements
decree
that will
and
come
even
later.
said,
It won't
Marquis
be easy to
Muyang's
deal with
household
him in a
is
short period
loyal
of time
and devoted to the
Lu
Chu
Jingxian
state.
said
Your
with a
Majesty
smile,
is
Wang
Muddlehead
Fei doesn't
and
need to
harm the
worry.
loyal.
As long as we
He
can
killed
control
all
the
Imperial
overall
guards
situation,
sent by your
we don't need to
Majesty.
care about how many soldiers
Fortunately, General Shishi arrived
previously
in time and
we let him
saved
take the
this
initiative.
servant's life.
Now that
While
we have
speaking,
taken back the
the
initiative,
eunuch was already
we don't need to be
sobbing.
afraid of
He had
him,
a frightened
even if he
and
has
timid
a million
appearance.
soldiers.
Mo Jingli
Moreover,
stared at him
when they
for
met
a
up
long
with Yin
time.
Ting,
He saw that the
their
eunuch's
total
clean
military
clothes were
strength
stained
would
with
be
blood
around
and
500,000.
dust. His
There was no need
expression
to
was
worry
also
about
full
Mo
of
Jingli.
exhaustion and fear, as well as pain. It was obvious that he had also suffered
Chapter
some
983.
Good.
Yili
Good
smiled
Marquis Muyang.
apologetically.
Good Muyang. I was too
Bring Mu
impatient.
Jingming here for
She
me.
actually didn't have
Mu
much
Jingming
experience in
was
real
old
battles.
Marquis Muyang's
The few
real
times
name.
she had fought,
However,
she had
he was
ended
conferred the
battle
title
quickly.
of Marquis
Lu
Muyang
Jinshin's current
when he was
plan
young.
was to slowly
Therefore,
grind away.
there were very
at
few
Mo
people who
Jingli.
called him by his real
This made
name.
Yili,
Not long
who was
after,
used to winning in one
old
strike,
Marquis Muyang
feel slightly
was
escorted into the
uncomfortable
tent.
by the
However,
Imperial Guards.
she quickly understood
It had
her
only
problem
been 2 days,
and tried her best to
but
adjust.
old Marquis
Lu
Muyang,
Jingxian
who was
smiled.
originally full of
Wang
energy,
Fei
had
is
aged
too
a lot.
serious.
His originally
If we used
white
all
hair
our strength
was a
to
little
severely
messy,
injure
and his
Mo
pair of
Jingli.
sharp eyes had
It is
also
possible.
become a little dim.
But if we want to
Life
achieve the
in
same
prison
result
naturally
as we
wouldn't be
did in
that good.
Hui Feng Valley,
He looked old
it
and
will be very
powerless.
difficult.
Mu
If we let
Jingming,
the remnants
what
of
else
the
do you
Chu
have to
army
say?
escape,
Mo
I'm
Jingli
afraid that they
asked
will
come back soon. Old Marquis Muyang was startled. It was better to take He didn't understand what had happened to make. They would fight until Jingli couldn't fight anymore. He glanced at the eunuch who was kneeling in a sorry state. Thank you, General, for your reminder. Old Marquis Muyang's heart shook, Jingxian quickly seemed to have understood something. Yili had a smile has been wronged, but in her Majesty, she started to think that it was time to use the chess already guessed what had happened. She had set up in Old Marquis Muyang couldn't admit it. Rather than rushing for quick success and giving Jingli a chance to come back, you said that it was better to put in some effort and finish the battle in one go. But he dared to kill the Imperial guards that I sent to deliver the Imperial edict, who was reading through reports. He dared to scold me for being muddle-headed. A trace of confusion by Marquis Muyang's across his dark face. Loyal and he pulled at the bright yellow cloak on his body. 2 days later, The Mahist
Chapter
Army
9,
and the Chu Army's Western
Your
Army
Majesty,
had another
this must
decisive
be
battle.
a misunderstanding.
The Chu Army finally
My son
couldn't
would
hold
never
up
be
against
so
the
rude.
Mahist Army's attacks.
Old Marquis Muyang
The situation was
said anxiously.
unsalvageable.
He knew
The
Muyang's
commander of the
character.
Western Army,
He would never
Zhao
act so
Lian,
impulsively.
was heavily injured.
Moreover,
and
he was
captured.
still in the Chu Army's
fighting
camp.
against the Chu
Even if
Army
Muyang was
afraid
different
of
from
breaking
fighting
the bases.
against the Western
He would
tomb
never
northern
rashly
militants.
kill the
In the
person
end,
the emperor sent
other than the
to deliver
conflicts
the
between the
decree.
upper
The eunuch
echelons
kneeling
of
at the
power,
side had a
the
thought
ordinary
and
Chu
screamed.
army soldiers,
Old
and
Marquis
Mahist army
Mu,
soldiers,
are you
as
saying
well as
that
the
we are
people of the
lying
Chu
to the
state?
emperor?
Are we
no
framing
different
Marquis
from the
Muyang?
people of the Northwest?
Your Majesty,
They also
this
never
servant has
thought
been wrong.
that after the Mahist
Please send someone you
Army
trust
and
to
the Chu
investigate,
state broke
so
off
this
relations,
servant will not
they
be
would
wrong.
become mortal
Thousands
enemies.
of soldiers
So when
witnessed
so many Chu
Marquis
state citizens
Muyang
fled
killing
to
the
the
guards
Northwest,
sent by
the
your
people of the
Majesty.
Northwest
This servant
accepted
does not
them without
believe
any
that
ill
Marquis
feelings.
Muyang
It
can
was
shut
because they were
so many
one
people's
family
mouths.
to begin with.
Moreover,
Just like the people in the
although
Northwest,
General
had
Shilu
never thought
only
that
arrived
the Prince
after
Ding
the
mansion
incident,
would stay
Heir Genom
in that small
Bogosian
corner of the
was
Northwest
present from the beginning to
the people
end.
of the Chu state
Your Majesty
never thought that the
please
Prince Ding
investigate.
mansion and the Mahist
Seeing the
army
eunuch's
would abandon
grief
them.
and
Therefore,
indignation,
in this battle, both sides still held back some of their
even
strength.
more.
Killing
Moreover,
each other was not
he had already
something that
suspected
made
the
people
house
happy.
of Marquis Muyang.
Whether it was the Mahist
people below
army
were
or the
only
Chu
adding
army,
fuel
they
to the
usually would
fire.
not kill
With a sneer,
prisoners or
Mo
heavily
Jingli
injured
said,
soldiers.
"Of course I will investigate." Gao Ming.
And
when
when
the
the
Chu
Chu
army
army
could
could
not
not
defeat
defeat
the
the
Mahist
Mahist
army
army
after
after
trying their
to bring
best,
Muyang to
the
me.
soldiers at the
If he
bottom
disobeys,
had no
execute
qualms
him on the
about
spot.
putting down their weapons.
A general
and
stepped
surrendering.
out.
And
Zhao
cupped
Yan's
his
failure
hands.
made
This general
Mo
obeys.
Jingli
This
very
general will
irritable.
definitely bring
Facing the
Muyang
approaching
back
Mahist
to
army
beg
led
for
by Lu
forgiveness.
Jingxian and
Mo
Yi Li.
Jingli snorted.
Mo
He was not
Jingli
interested
very
in whether
decisively
Muyang would
abandon
beg
his
for
troops to
forgiveness
guard
or
Cold
not.
Valley Pass.
He was only
and
worried
escape
that
before Yi
Muyang
Li
would bring
and
the
the others
hundreds of
arrived.
thousands
This
of
made the
soldiers under
Mahist
him
army
for breakfast.
speechless.
After all,
Yinting
the
could
Mu
not think
family
straight
still had some
and would
influence
rather
in the
die
Chu
than
state's army.
retreat
After
half a
thinking
step.
for a while,
And
Mo
Jingli
Jingli
retreated
said,
too quickly.
"I will give you another
With a natural
50,000
defense
elite
of
soldiers
Cold
to
Valley
assist
Pass.
General
If the command was
Shilu
right,
in defending
it would not be a
against the
problem
Lu
to guard it
Jingxian
for at
troops.
least 2 to 3
Yes,
months.
thank you, Your
At that
Majesty."
time,
The
Gao
Chu
Ming
army's
thanked him
reinforcements
loudly.
would arrive.
Of course.
Although
He
Mo
understood
Jingli's
Mo
abandonment of Cold
Jingli's
Valley
meaning.
Pass,
These
dealt a
50,000
heavy blow
elite
to the
soldiers
Chu
were not
army's
really
morale.
for him.
It
to
also brought a
defend
lot of
against
trouble
Lu
to Yi
Jingxian
Li
and the
If
others.
Muyang had
If
any
Mo
strange
Jingli ran
ran
back to
he would be able to join
and did not
forces
come out
with
without
General
Shilu
But with Mo
to suppress
Jingli's
him.
temper,
Old Marquis
he would
Muyang
definitely
looked at the
hide
tall
and
and
wait for
upright
reinforcements
Gao
to
Ming,
arrive,
who seemed to be
before
full of
coming out to
righteousness,
cause trouble.
and felt
This
a
would
sense of despair
imperceptibly
in his
prolong
heart.
the time.
It was
that the
impossible
Mahist
for
army
anyone to
and the
only
Chu
have
army
friends
fought.
and
As
not have
expected,
enemies.
in less than half a
Coincidentally,
month,
Gao Ming
when the
and
Chu
the Mu
army's
family had
reinforcements
always
near
been
the
at
north,
odds.
the Mu
Mo
family
Jingli
was a family
appeared
of
again.
generals.
This time,
Gao Ming,
compared to the
and
ambiguous
Muyang were
alliance
close in
with
age.
Shieling to
But
attack the
Muyang's
Mahist
family
army,
background was
and
far
Mo
from
Jingli
what Gao Ming,
directly
who came
issued
from
a
humble
decree
background as the
could compare
emperor
with.
of the Chu state.
Therefore,
He announced
even
to the
though Gao
world
Ming
that
had
the
followed
Prince Ding
Mo
mansion had betrayed
Jingli
the Chu
since
state,
he was still a prince
and that
with no real
Mo
power.
Xiaoyao,
After Mo
intended to
Jingli
destroy
ascended
the
the
Chu
throne,
state, his status
then
was
ascend
still
the throne.
far inferior.
He
to
also
Mo
listed
Jingli.
Mo Xiaoyao's 49
It could be said that the
crimes to show
entire
that the
Chu
Chu
army
state's
knew that
attack
the two
on
of them
Prince
were
Ding
not on
mansion
good terms.
was righteous
And Mo
and
Jingli
in
sent him
accordance
over
with the will of
Although
the
he might have
heavens.
been worried
These
that
things naturally
Muyang
did
would
not
be
affect
merciful
the Mahist
because of his
army.
good relationship
Yi Li
with him.
only casually
However,
glanced at the
sending
decree
Gao
that was
Ming
sent to the
was
Mahist
equivalent
army
to cutting
before
off the
handing it
house
to
of
Yinting.
Marquis Muyang.
Yinting
Old Marquis
snorted
Muyang
disdainfully
fell to
after
the ground
reading it
dejectedly,
and used it to prop up
and Mo
the foot of the
Jingli didn't
table.
even bother to
If the
look at
prince
him
was interested
and
in the
left him
throne,
off. He would
the
have
eunuch who had been
ascended
kneeling at the
throne
side
long ago.
hurriedly got up.
Did he need to wait
and
for
ordered
Mo
people to
Jingli
bring old
to issue a
Marquis
decree?
Muyang
Also,
back to
did
the
Mo
prison to
Jingli
be
think that the
closely
world
guarded.
was blind?
Old Marquis
The Mahist
Muyang
army
glared
had
fiercely
never
at the
taken an
eunuch.
inch of land.
He
from
keenly
the
felt
hands
that there
of the
must be
Chu
something
state.
wrong.
The Mahist
However,
army had
he was
already
currently
cut ties
imprisoned
with
by
the Chu
Mo
state for a
Jingli.
long time.
Even if he
No
wanted
matter
to
how
one looked at truth, the Princeton mansion had a solid foundation. That eunuch looked around to make sure there was no one around. Couldn't help but sigh at the prince's foresight. He approached old Marquis Muyon. It had to be known that the Central Plains were not barbarians. He lowered his voice and said, "They called themselves the land of etiquette. Don't blame. No matter if it was the court officials who told you to offend someone you shouldn't, the common people. It really is you. They all placed great importance on etiquette." Scolded harshly. "What are you still standing there for? If the Princeton mansion had directly and guarding him properly, if the Princeton Mahist army had conquered the land, none of us will be able to live. With the relationship between the Princeton waved his hand and the Deschutes said sharply, Princeton would be criticized in the history was dragged out without any resistance. A secret letter from Master Feng said, the news that came made just as everyone was mocking Mo Jingli's actions, reporting to the voice of the guard came from outside the tent. The emperor ordered General Gao Ming slightly frowned and said, 50,000 elite troops to assist the great general. Feng Jiao was the tent was instantly filled under normal circumstances. The general of the
Marquis
would not
Muyang's
write a letter
expression
to her alone,
was extremely
unless
ugly.
something had
Muyang
happened
sneered.
that Feng Jiao
50,000
could
elite
not
troops
control
to
to
assist
assist
General
General
Zhao.
Zhao.
His
Yili's
words
heart
were full
sank
of
slightly.
mockery.
Everyone
She raised
present
her hand
understood what he
to take
meant
the letter
by
that the
help.
guard presented.
What could
The
50,000
letter
men
was
do?
sealed with wax.
Right now,
on
there
the
were
seal,
more than
there was the
100,000
highest level
soldiers
seal
of the
of the
Western
permanent
Army in the
mansion.
camp.
It
Muyang
showed that
had
the contents of the letter were
100,000
not
soldiers,
ordinary.
and Lei
Calming her
Tingfei
mind,
had more
Yili
than
opened the letter
100,000
and scanned
soldiers.
it. The
The
total
hand
military
holding the letter
strength was
trembled
more than
slightly,
400,000,
and the letter
the
fell to
military
ground.
strength was
Yili's
already
body
twice
couldn't
that
help
of
but
Lu
soften
Jingxian
as she fell
right
into the
now,
chair.
these 50,000
Yin Ting
soldiers
and the
were
others
probably
sitting on the
not
side
used to deal with
jumped
Lu
in fright
Jingxian,
and
they were
quickly
used
came
to guard
forward.
against Muyang.
Wang Fei,
Zhao
on a
Yan
white
let out
letter,
a long sigh.
Feng
and
Jiao's
asked,
handwriting was
"Where is
messy
General
and
Gao?"
anxious.
The soldier reported.
There were only a few
General
words.
Gao's army
The prince
is already
is heavily
30 li
injured.
away.
In
Return
addition,
quickly. General Gao sent an order. Marquis Muyang intends to rebel. Chapter
General,
984.
please take him down
Wang
immediately.
Fei.
When
Everyone
General
looked
Gao
in shock
arrives,
at Yili.
he can be
not
escorted
knowing
back
what
to the
happened.
camp for the
It had to be
Emperor
known
deal
that
with.
even though Princess
As soon as the
Ding
words
Dade was
came
not
out,
older
the
than
generals of the
anyone
Marquis
present, but
Muyang's
that
residence
calmness of
all
hers
stood
was
up
something that
and
even a
stared at
veteran like
everyone
Lu
with an
Jingxian, who had been
expression.
through hundreds
Just
of
when
battles
Zhao
in life,
Yin was
to
in a
be able to
dilemma.
make Wang
The sound of
Fei
war
like
drums
this,
came from
the
outside
matter
the
was
camp.
probably Zhao Yin was shocked.
Ting went forward.
He quickly
to pick
made
up
a
the letter.
decision, and
When he looked
said in
down,
a
he
deep
almost
voice,
screamed, "Wang,
"The Mahist
shut up."
army is calling for a
Yili
fight."
quickly recovered and cut off
Generals,
Yin Ting's words.
follow this general
She closed
out
her
of the
eyes
camp to
when she
meet
opened
them.
them again.
After that,
Her eyes had
he walked
recovered
out
their
directly
calmness
without
and
caring about
indifference.
Muyang. and
Yili
the
reached
others.
out. Lei
Yin
Tingfei stood
Ting
up
suppressed
and
his
looked at
shock
Muyang,
and
who was
handed the
standing on
letter
the
to
side.
Yili.
He
with
sighed
both
and shook his
hands.
head and
Yili
followed
took the
out.
letter
In
and
the
read
tent,
again.
the
Then
remaining
she asked,
generals of the Marquis
"Where's the
Muyang's
person who
residence?"
delivered the
asked
letter?
in a low
Let him in."
voice.
A short
Marquis
while later,
Muyang
a
closed
young
his
man
eyes
with red
and said
eyes and
decisively,
travel-worn walked in.
"Those who are
Wang
willing to
Fei,
stay,
a
followed
Ajin,
General
Yili
Zhao
said in a
out of
deep
the camp
voice.
to meet them.
Ajin
Those
was
who are
Mo
willing to follow
Xiuyao's
me.
most
We will
loyal
leave
person.
now."
At the
Among
same
the
time,
people present,
he was the person
few
who
silently
rarely appeared in
left
front of
and
others
followed
and was the
Zhao Yin
least
out.
likely to
The rest
attract
were
attention.
all willing
Feng
to follow
Jiao
Muyang.
choosing Ajin
Although their
to personally
choices were
deliver the
different,
letter, no one was in the
Yili
mood to
to have some
despise
bad
anyone
thoughts.
at this time.
Focusing,
It was
Yili
not an
asked
easy
softly
path to follow
Ajin,
Muyang.
what
The
happened,
Marquis
Prince?
Muyang's residence
Ajin bit his
was
lip
not as
and
powerful
looked anxiously
as
at
the
Yili.
Princeton mansion.
He said,
"It was
"Prince,
not like you could become
Prince
a
is
king
unconscious
just because you brought an army
Feng
with you.
Sengongzi wants me
Those
to
who were
ask
willing
Wang
to follow
Fei
Muyang to
could be
quickly
said
return.
to be the confidence
Ajin knew
of the
that he was
Marquis
not
Muyang's
smart,
residence.
so he was more loyal
If not,
than other people. They were the saviors of the
Furthermore,
His
Marquis
Highness and Princess
Muyang's
consorts
residence
didn't
Muyang
despise him
glanced at the
because
crowd
he wasn't
and
smart.
said in a deep
Instead,
voice,
they trusted
Muyang
him.
thanks
This was
everyone.
why Feng
Go back and gather
Gongzi
your
had him
troops.
personally
We will
deliver
leave
the letter
immediately.
Otherwise,
Therefore,
when the prince was
outside the
seriously
camp,
injured,
two groups
even
of
if it was
troops
Feng
left the
Sam
camp one
Gongzi's
after the
orders,
other.
he
But
would
they went to
not
different
leave the
places.
prince's side. When Muyang
Yili's
came,
heart trembled
he brought
slightly.
100,000
She nodded and
troops
said,
with
"I
him.
understand.
However,
You go and rest
only
first.
30,000
We'll leave
to
tonight."
40,000
Ajin
people
nodded
followed him.
heavily.
Looking
Although
at the
young
direction
Master
Muyang
Feng
left with his troops,
San had suppressed
Zhao
the news
Yin
of
sighed
Princess coma.
slightly.
Young
There was a hint
Master
of
Feng
regret.
San
in his
couldn't
somewhat
suppress it for
bleak
long.
eyes.
If the prince
Muyang
didn't appear
probably
in front
wouldn't
of
be able to
people.
go far in
If
the
Princess
future.
Consort
Originally,
could hurry back
if he was given
as
time,
soon as possible,
Muyang would
the
become
situation would be
general
much
not
easier
inferior
to
to his
handle.
father.
After sending
But now,
Ajin out,
Muyang
Zhuijing
only had
and the
30
others at the
to
side
40,000
spoke.
men.
Wang Fei
He
now
had neither
with
rations
Yili raised a
nor
hand to
reinforcements.
stop him from asking.
It could be said that his
Taking a
future
deep
was
breath,
already
she
sealed.
said,
Lei Tingfei
"Qing
stood
Feng,
beside
I will write a
Zhao
letter for
Yin
you to
and
personally
asked
go
faintly,
and deliver
General
to
Zhao.
General Lu.
Won't you regret
Zhuijing,
letting him
Lin
go
Han,
just like
pack
that?"
up.
Zhao
Zhao set
Yin
off
sighed and
immediately.
said, "This
Yes,
old man has done his
Wang
best.
Fei.
It's better than a
Zhuijing
mutiny." And the other two
Lei
said
Tingfei
in
nodded
unison.
in agreement.
Then,
They
letting
quickly
Muyang
left
to
the
take
tent
30,000
to
to
make their
40,000
own
people away
Yili
would
looked
not
at
be
Hisu
a big
and
hindrance
Yun
to the
Ting,
army.
who were left
However,
behind, and said,
if Muyang was
"After I
really
recaptured
captured
or
the
killed,
Mahist army's
the
actions
generals
against
who were
the Chu
originally
army will
on
be
good
under
terms
General
with
Lu's
the
command.
Marquis Muyang's
You two
residence would
must listen to
inevitably
General
feel
Lu's
sympathy.
orders.
At
Do
that
you
time,
understand?
if they were were instigated by someone with ulterior motives, and the loss would not be limited to these 30,000 to 40,000 people. Seeing Yi Li's slightly absent-minded appearance, Chapter 974 couldn't help but
However,
say, how are you going to explain
Prince's
this
good
Emperor
fortune
Chu?
fills the
Mo
heavens.
Jingli was not
He
a
will
magnanimous
definitely turn
person
misfortune
who cared
into
about
good
the big
fortune.
picture. Wang
He
Fei,
probably wouldn't be
please
able to see
assured.
Zhao
Yi Li
Yin
smiled
retreat
faintly
for the
and
sake
nodded.
of the army's
I
safety.
understand.
He would
Mo
only see
Xiao's
Zhao's
life
life
was
disobeying
very
the
strong.
decree
How would he
and
die?
letting Mu Yang
Yi Li
go.
smiled faintly.
Zhao Yin
but Yin
smiled
Ting
bitterly
and he
and
Su
said,
became even
"This
more
old
worried.
man will do his
The
best."
two exchanged a
Moreover,
look, and then
I might
could
die
only
on the
leave
battlefield
helplessly
at any time.
In a certain
What's the
camp
point
of
of
the Chu
thinking
army
so much?
Mo
To be
Jingli
honest,
was
this
lying
old man really
comfortably
doesn't
on a chair
have much
covered in thick
confidence in
fur
dealing
in a
with
grand
Lu
Jinxian.
He was enjoying
Seeing
the
how the
dance of
Marquis
the
Mu
dancers
Yang
in front
was
of him.
dealt with.
He was holding
Zhao
an
Yan's
enchanting
heart
woman in
was
his
not
arms,
completely
and his
unaffected.
usually
However,
gloomy
as a
face was
subject,
filled with
if the emperor wants the
complacency.
subject to
A general
die,
came in
the
and looked at
subject
the
must
singing
die,
and
General
dancing in
is
front of him.
righteous.
He frowned
Leiting Feng
almost
praised
imperceptibly.
sincerely. On the other hand,
Mu Yang had
raised
only
an
left the
eyebrow and
camp
asked,
for
"What is
4
it?"
hours before
The general
he met
lowered
with
his
Gao Ming's
eyes
army.
and respectfully
Originally,
presented a
the
secret
two armies
letter.
would not
Mo
meet
Jingli
so
opened
quickly.
it and read.
However,
He
when
immediately
Gao Ming
roared
was
with
about to
laughter.
reach the camp,
He sat up
he received
and held the
news
woman's
that Mu
slender
Yang
waist
had
with
already
one hand.
escaped with his
He held the
army.
letter
He
in his
immediately
hand
turned
with
his
the
troops
other.
around.
He was in a very
and
good
chased
mood.
after them.
Good.
At the same
It really
time,
is good.
he quickly
It
sent
really
a letter
wasn't
to
a waste
Mo
of
Jingli's
Zhang
camp,
General Li,
stating that
passed
Mu
down the
Yang
word.
had already
Put
led
down
his
light
army
cards
to
on the
betray
roads
him.
leading to
He even did
Feihong
not
Pass
forget to complain
and
about
stop Yili.
Zhao Yan.
That's right.
Gao Ming
Don't
always
hurt
felt
her.
that he had worked
Bring her to
so
see
hard
Zhen.
for Mo
Zhen wants
Jingli
to
all
see
these
who will
years.
have the last laugh.
However, he was
General
always
Li
suppressed
frowned
by these
slightly.
generals from
After a
large
moment of
families.
silence, he
Now
reported,
that he had the opportunity,
"Emperor, how could he
please
let it go?
reconsider.
When the two armies
If Princess
met,
Ding
Gao
was
Ming
preparing to
immediately
return
gave
to
the order
Feihong
to
Pass,
charge forward.
there will be Qi
Amidst the
Lin
chaos,
protecting her along
there were
the way.
countless casualties.
It's already not easy to
Just
kill
as
her.
Gao Ming
If
was
you want to
feeling
capture her
pleased with
alive,
himself,
I'm
he saw a
afraid
group of
it
black
wasn't that he was
soldiers
looking
charging
down
out
on
from
himself
and
but
surrounding
against
the
the
two
Qi
armies that
Lin
were
that
fighting.
made the nobles
Gao
of the
Ming
various
saw the
countries
black
tremble
flag
in fear.
fluttering in the wind,
Even the
and
right
was so
people
scared that he
might
almost
not be
fell
enough.
off his horse.
But the emperor
He
wanted
shouted
to
in
increase the
Mahist
difficulty.
army.
He requested
Black
that
Cloud
Princess
cavalry.
Ding not be
Mu
harmed.
Yang's face
Mo
also
Jingli's
darkened.
face
He vaguely
darkened
felt
with
that something was
displeasure.
wrong.
He coldly
The Black
said,
Cloud cavalry
"You can't do
strength
it."
was
Generally
naturally not
hesitated
something
for
that
a
these
moment.
normal Chu
In the
army
end, he
soldiers
secretly
could compare
sighed.
to.
It was
After
fine.
a series of
The
rampage,
possibility of killing
the Chu army's
Ding
formation
Wangfei
was
so
immediately
low
shattered.
that it was
The leading
negligible.
black-clothed
If he let
man
Princess
said in a
Ding
deep
escape
voice,
because
if
he
you're
showed
willing to
mercy,
submit to the Prince
it would
Ding
be
mansion,
easier for the
then
emperor
stop
to blame him.
immediately.
This
The
subordinate
black-clothed
understands.
man's voice
Mo
carried a
Jingli
deep
nodded in
internal energy
satisfaction,
that spread
seeing that
in all
General Li
directions.
still had a trace
These
of
soldiers were
confusion on his
already
face.
dizzy from the
Mo
sudden
Jingli
infighting.
raised his
Now,
eyebrows and
they were
smiled.
frightened by the
You want to
Black
know why
Cloud
Yi Li
cavalry.
is suddenly
Originally,
in a hurry to go
these
back?
soldiers did not
Emperor,
have any
please
ill
tell me.
feelings towards
General
the
Li
Mahist
respectfully
army.
said.
They even had
Princess
some
Ding
fear
leaving
and
was naturally a good
dissatisfaction
thing for
towards
them.
the battle
But with
the
Princess
Ding
Ding
mansion.
suddenly
At
leaving
this time,
and the
under the
emperor's
lead of someone,
overflowing joy,
many people quickly
generally
put
knew
down
that
their
something
weapons
must
and
have happened at Feihong
Soon,
Pass. Many peoples to put down their weapons,
and
and
Mo
even protect
Jingli
them
said
from
with a clear
swords
smile,
and swords.
"For us,
it is indeed a good thing.
to protect them, to
Mo
protect,
Xiaoyao
is
to
going to
protect.
die.
Isn't
In
that a
less
good
than
thing?"
half an hour,
Hearing this,
the entire
General Li was
battlefield
shocked.
had quieted
The words
down.
"is going to die."
The number of
didn't
soldiers
seem
who
to
chose
use
to
throw
Prince
down
Ding.
their weapons.
How
and
many people in the
surrender
world
to
cursed
Prince
Ding's
Ding's
residence
to die
was as
early.
high as tens
But
of
after
thousands.
so many years,
Both Mu
the
Yang's
Prince
and
Ding
Gao
mansion's
Ming's
men
rose and
were
fell.
present. Prince Ding
Mu
was
Yang
still protected
smiling
by a few
proudly in the
loyal
world.
guards.
To
As he
General
continued
Li,
to resist
the words
the
"Prince
Mahist
Ding
army.
is going to die"
Gao Ming had already
more like a
fallen
daydream.
into the hands
Although
of the
he was
Mahist
thinking
army.
wildly
The
in his heart.
black-clothed
His
general
face
carried
was still
Gao
very
Ming forward
respectful
and said in
He
a
didn't
deep
even forget to
voice,
match it
"Stand
with a
down."
shocked expression.
The Black Cloud
Seeing his
cavalry
subordinates
soldiers that were
shocked
originally
expression,
surrounding
Mo
Mu Yang
Jingli's mood
immediately
became
even
stopped
more joyful
and respectfully
He couldn't wait
moved to
to
the
see
side.
Yi
Mu Yang
Li's
stare at the
expression,
black
or
clothed
Lei
man in front of him
Jinting
for a
and
while.
Lei Tingfeng.
He finally said
This pair
with a
of father
frown,
and son who
"You
burned the
earned
bridge
Qin
after
Feng,
crossing the river.
Mu Yang and
Qin
Qin
Feng
Feng
had only met a few
Xiaoyao
times.
also died at his hands.
However,
Mu
Mu
Yang
Yang still remembered the
Majesty.
silent man who was
It's
said
best
to
to
be the
confirm this
commander
matter.
of the Prince Ding
After all,
mansion's
Prince Ding
most
is
mysterious
Generally
Qin Lin.
coughed.
Qin Feng
reminded
nodded his head
Mo
without a care.
Jingli implicitly.
He casually threw
That
Gao
year,
Ming.
Prince
Mu
Ding's
Yang's
injuries
feet.
were so severe
Gao
that
Ming
the
stood
entire
up with a
world
dispirited
thought he was
expression.
crippled.
He looked
But
at
in less
Qin
than
Feng
10
with
years,
some fear.
Prince
He
Ding
only
led
felt
the
that he was
Mahist
very
army and
unlucky.
swept through the
He had
world
always been
again,
suppressed by
causing
Mu Yang.
people to
Now
tremble that Mu
fear.
Yang was about
Seeing
to be
Mo
unlucky,
Jingli's proud
he was sent by
expression
the emperor
generally
to
couldn't
capture
help
Mu Yang.
but remind
However,
him to be more careful.
he still ended up being captured
There were some
by the
people in the
Maist army
world
along
that were
with Mu Yang.
best
At this
not to
moment,
provoke.
Gao Ming
If you already
truly
felt
felt that
them,
Mu Yang
then you had to
was
be
his
even more
nemesis.
careful.
Unless you
the
saw his
traitor of the
corpse with
Prince
your
Ding
own
mansion.
eyes, you couldn't
dare
let
you?
your guard down.
This general
Otherwise,
is a general
the
of the
unlucky one
Chu
would be
state.
you. Mo
Gao Ming
Jingli
looked at
narrowed his
Qin
eyes
Feng, who didn't
and
care about
thought
him at
for a
all.
moment.
He roared
It was
fiercely.
rare that he actually
The general
listened to
beside
his subordinate's
Qin
words.
Feng
He
twitched
nodded
his
and
mouth.
said,
He
"You're
couldn't
right.
help but lower
We should
his
investigate
head
this
and
matter
cough
to
lightly.
avoid any
Commander
mistakes."
Qin, is there
Mo
something wrong
Xiaoyao,
with this guy?
We don't believe
Was the
that you're that
status
lucky.
of a general
You didn't
of the
die last
Chu
time,
state something
but you
to be
won't
proud
die
of?
this time, especially now that the two armies were fighting against each other, and they had already become prisoners.
Chapter 985.
Qin Feng raised
In
his
the dark
eyebrows
night,
and smiled.
a few fast
So
horses
what if he's a
galloped
general
on
of the
official
Chu
road,
state, kicking
now
up
that the
dust
two
along the
armies
way?
are facing
Yili
each other?
rode on the back of
Wouldn't
a
the more
horse
generals of
and
the
kept
Chu
whipping her
state that I
whip
killed
as she
the
galloped
greater the
forward.
merit?
Because she
Hearing
had the
this,
memories of
Gao
2
Ming's
lifetimes
face
and
instantly
was
paled.
not an impulsive
He didn't
person.
dare to say anything
Yili had
else.
always been calm.
Mu Yang
and
stared at Qin
unruffled,
Feng and
but this
frowned.
time,
She
Princess
could not
Ding's
help
methods
but
are good.
lose her
It
sense
seems
of
that Princess
propriety.
Ding had
She
already
allowed the
predicted
cold
that this
wind to
one
blow
and General
against her
Gao
cheeks
would meet
and
here.
messed up the hair.
Please
on
ask
her
Princess
temples.
Ding to come
Zhuge
out
Jing
and
and
meet
the
me.
others follow behind
Qin Feng
Yili
said
and were
indifferently.
also galloping
The princess
without stopping.
consort isn't
The
here
sudden
right now.
accident in the
I'm
originally
afraid
smooth
that Marquis
battle
Mu
caught
Yang
everyone
won't be
off
able
guard.
to do as he wishes.
Suddenly,
The
Mu
horse that
Yang
Yili
frowned.
was sitting on
I
let out
wonder
a
if my
neigh
humble
and
wife
reared
was
up.
taken away
Princess
by Commander
consort,
Qin's
be
men.
careful.
She's just
Yili
an innocent
jumped
girl.
up from the horse's
As a
back.
general,
When
Commander
she landed
Qin
on the ground,
probably wouldn't make
the
things
galloping
difficult
horse
for a weak
also
girl
fell
who
to the
doesn't know
ground.
anything.
Whoosh, whoosh,
Doesn't know
whoosh.
anything.
A
Qin Feng's
rain of
expression
arrows came
was a
from
bit
both sides of the
strange.
road.
A murderous look flashed
Yang
across
nodded.
That's right.
Li's beautiful
This one was
eyes.
defeated by
She
Commander
said in a
Qin.
low voice,
Even if I
"They've
die,
all been dealt with.
I have no regrets.
In the darkness,
However,
countless men in
my humble
black
wife
rushed
and
out from
servant
shadows,
have nothing to do with
killing
this
the
matter.
archers on both
Please be
sides of the
magnanimous
road.
and let them
Yili,
go.
on the other hand,
Qin Feng looked
had
at Mu
already
Yang
mounted
and
another
shook his head,
horse and
saying
galloped
indifferently,
forward.
"What
Behind
pity.
Yili,
Actually,
Lin Han,
Mu Yang
and
himself
Zhuge
wasn't a
Jing
hateful
and
person.
Ajin did not
If
pay
Marquis
attention
Mu
to
Yang's
the killing in
mansion
front of them.
didn't offend
They
Prince
followed
Ding,
Yi
he
Li's
wouldn't
back.
be so
On
unlucky.
the ancient road,
Even at this
in the
point,
bleak
he still
moonlit
didn't
night,
forget to
a
plead
tall
for
man
Yaoji.
stood silently
He could be
by the side
considered
of the
loyal.
road.
He raised his head and looked
they
at
all
the new
served
moon
their
in
own
the sky.
masters.
His
stood
blue
on
cotton
different
clothes
sides.
looked even
However,
darker in the
Mu
dark.
Yang had to die.
It also
Commander
added a
Qin,
coldness and
Mu Yang's
scruples that he
expression
did not
changed
usually
slightly.
have. The
Qin
man held a
Feng
heavy
said
sword in his
casually,
hand. Of course,
It was
I
as if
won't
he had
hurt
just been
Yaoji
standing
and
there,
Mu Lai,
but also
because
as if he had been
Mu
standing
Yang
there
stared at Qin
since
Feng,
ancient times.
not knowing what he
On the
wanted to
road
say.
in the distance,
Suddenly,
the sound of
he felt a
horses
cold pain
galloping
in his
could be
abdomen.
heard.
He looked
A
down
woman
in
in
astonishment
black and a young man
and
in
saw
green
Mu Lai's
appeared
big
beside the
smiling
man.
eyes.
The
as
woman in
arms.
black frowned.
There was
and
actually
said,
an obedient,
"Big brother,
and innocent smile.
Are we really going to do
Mu
this?"
Lai said with a
The
grin.
man in green
Because I'm a
disagreed
member of
and
the Prince
said,
Ding mansion.
"Big brother, offending the Prince Ding mansion is not a wise thing to do."
Chapter 9.
The middle-aged man glanced
This sudden turn of
sideways at
events
his sister-in-law
stunned everyone,
and said
while Mu
indifferently,
Yang was
"This
in
is
a
my
daze,
business."
Mu Lai,
You two
who
leave
was originally
immediately.
sitting in his arms,
A trace of
flew up
impatience
and pounced
flashed
toward
across
Qin
the
Feng.
young man's
But because
sinister
everyone was
face,
shocked
and
by
he
this
said
sudden
snappily,
change, none of the
"Big
guard
brother,
beside Mu
if something
Yang
really
actually
happens
stopped
to
him,
Yili here,
allowing him to
do
fall
you
to
think the
Qin
Prince
Feng's
Ding
side.
mansion will let us
After
off?
being father
Since
and
that's
son
the
for a
case,
few years,
what's the difference
Mu
between
Yang
you
realized that
and
he
the three
didn't
of us?"
understand his son at all.
The middle-aged
At
man
least
said,
he didn't know
"This is my
that he had
personal
such
matter.
good Qingong.
Go back, this is
Mu
in
Lai
order."
stood beside Qin
But
Feng,
the woman in
and smiled
black
as he waved the
frowned.
dagger in his
"Unless
hand.
you don't recognize
Godfather,
me as
how
your
is
big
it?
brother."
Qin Feng
Leaped
patted
Mu
Mu
Lai's
Lai's
head with
The
praise,
middle-aged man said,
causing Mu
the
Lai
black-clothed
to smile
woman
happily.
helplessly
Qin
stomped her
Feng's
feet
praise wasn't
and
just
pulled
the
the green-clothed
green-clothed
father
man
to his son,
disappearing
but more
into the night.
importantly, it was the praise of a Qi Lin
The
commander.
two of them had
to a
just
future
left when
member.
the sound of
Mu
horse
Lai,
hooves,
who had
which
made it
was
his
still
life's
very
goal to
far
become
away,
the youngest
had already
official
reached
member
them.
of Qi Lin.
The leader was a woman
and
naturally
white with a
very
cloak
happy.
draped
Mu Yang
over her
painfully
shoulders.
covered his
Seeing the
abdomen,
middle-aged
which was
man
bleeding
waiting
by the side of the
profusely,
road,
and bent
a trace
over
of
on the horse's
surprise
back.
flashed
He looked
across
in
the woman's
disbelief
face,
at his son,
and she pulled
who was
on the
very
reins.
familiar.
Under the
Yet
night sky,
strangely, everyone was
unfamiliar.
silent for a while.
Well, Mu Lai looked
Yili
at
said
Mu Yang and
indifferently,
sighed helplessly.
I never thought
He
that
said
one of the people who
faintly,
came to make
"Do you
things
still not
difficult for
understand?
me would be the
I'm not your
master
son."
of the Yanwang
What?
Chamber of Commerce.
Mu Yang shook his
The
head.
middle-aged man was
absent-mindedly.
one of the four
He felt that
great
everything
experts
in
the
front
world
of him
the
was
master of the
ridiculous.
Yanwang Chamber
He even
of
thought that he was
Commerce,
hallucinating
Ling Tai,
because he was
Mu
too
Qin
tired
Song had
these
been missing
days.
for a long time.
After a while,
and
he looked up at
Leijing
Mu
was
Lai
getting
and
older.
said,
Ling
"You're not
Tai,
Lai, then who are you?
Mo
What'd you do to Lai?"
were the two people
Mu
with
Lai
the highest
said,
martial
"I
arts
am
in
Mu
the
Lai.
world. Moreover,
Your son's name
Leijing,
isn't Mu Lai,
who had spent his
Back
life
then,
studying martial
you didn't even
arts,
ask what
was
Yaoji
definitely
named the child.
not as easy to
Mu
deal
Yang
with
couldn't hold on
as
any
Mu
longer,
Qin
and
the moment
finally
they
fell
saw
from
him,
the horse's back.
Zhuge Jing,
The guard
and
beside
the
him
other two
quickly
immediately
supported
stepped
him
forward
and glared angrily at Mu
behind
Lai.
them.
As
Who
for
was
their
beside
actions,
Qin Feng,
Ling
Mu Lai
Tai
shrugged
didn't pay any
innocently
attention to them.
Seeing
He just
Mu
looked at
Yang's
Yili
pale
faintly.
face due to pain
A trace
and
of
shock,
regret that flashed across his resolute and calm face. Muyang really didn't. I also didn't expect this day to come. Whether it was his appreciation harmed by his wife a few times, his friendship didn't have some shameful private or his pure admiration for this woman. Unfortunately, Taion had never the house of Marquis Muyang had offended someone they shouldn't have. Unfortunately, back when they arrived, Zhuge Jing stood in front of Yili. Prince Ding had already decided the end for Pavilion Master Ling. You are in peaceful days of the past few years. Are you not afraid that the world will laugh at you? You're from Prince Ding Mansion. Muyang gritted his teeth and looked at Jing with a half smile. "Where's my son?" said indifferently. Mulai's Marquis, the subordinates of the Prince Ding Mansion house of Marquis, all Muyang's Marquis. Don't tell me you don't know. Could it be that Ding Wang Fu The Yanwan Chamber of Commerce was an organization of assassins. Thinking of this possibility, who would talk about fairness, Mu Yang's heart could not help asking but an assassin. Perhaps his son was long dead when Ling Taihan, and the one he doted on all his martial arts had yet to be a spy planted by Princess. As an ordinary assassin at the lowest level, he had used many. If it wasn't me who stayed in the house of assassinate his all these years, as the pavilion master of the Yanwan Chamber of Commerce, Mulai curled his lips. Ling Taihan had never placed much importance on his reputation. If it was really Yao Jing and a child that didn't know anything, he felt that it was ridiculous to talk about morality. That child would have reputation with someone who used to be an assassin. Mulai was a little resentful that pavilion master Ling's accusation. And Jinim of Gojozi Mu Yang was stunned for a long time against each other. Then he suddenly laughed out loud, indifferently, looking at Mulai. Mo Jingli alone, he said, wouldn't be able to. Were you the one who leaked the defense, so it could only be secrets of the battle? Ling Taihan denied. The Princeton Mansion is really something. But even so, even a child, I'm still from West Hill. Mulai pursed his lips, looked down, smiled, frowned, but didn't answer. Speaking of which, the excessive blood loss people know made Mu Yang Pavilion Master Ling's background. Perhaps he also understood that he couldn't escape today. Pavilion Master Ling force himself. Is also a member of the Emperor of Shiling's family. He broke free from his subordinate support, looked at Yi Li and let himself fall to the ground. After a while, after resting for a moment, and said, Mu Yang opened his eyes and is indeed extraordinary. Even if you're not her son, helplessly, she's been good to you. If Pavilion Master Ling, you can't appear here. Mulai was a little embarrassed and didn't speak. Although there were many people who guessed he originally hoped that Mu Yang wouldn't ask this question. Usually didn't have. It would be less painful if he didn't know anything. He hadn't interacted with the Emperor of Shilling from dealing with the current situation, so it was naturally difficult for people to guess his background. Mulai looked up at eliminated all the possibilities, and looked at Ling Taihan help Lei Jinting. A clear female voice came from behind the crowd. The bad relationship between Ling Taihan, the Mahist and Lei Jinting wasn't just an act, and Yao to make Ling Taihan from behind, put aside the prejudice looking at them so many years to help. Mu Yang looked at Yao Ji. Ling Taihan could only be a member of the Emperor of Shiling's and the white fox cloak, the long ancient robe seemed cold and lonely. She was different from her usual glamorous self. After a while, although she didn't wear the luxurious clothes of the House of Marquis, used to be the imperial concubine of the late emperor and elegant. Yi Li raised her eyebrows. She didn't suffer much these days. And looking at the woman in front of him, Ling Taihan was the prince of the late emperor's smile. But he only said that he had a grudge against Ling Taihan. What else didn't he understand? And not the Emperor of Shiling's family. Yaoji. It was likely that the early death of Ling Taihan's Mu Yang looked at the woman in front of him in Jianghu, as if Yaoji's appearance was more painful than the stab where Lei Jinting's mother's family just now. Yi Li vaguely remembered him indifferently. That there was an extremely favored. Do you still remember the letter I left behind when I fled with the child? She seemed to have been killed by the late Emperor after a while. But it was really too long ago. I remember. So naturally, you said that you didn't want to see me or even Yi Li herself. Only glanced at Lei Jinting's file. But later, you came back with. She didn't even remember the name. Yao Ji's smile was a little bitter. Yi Li sighed. You never took my words seriously. She also understood. I've understood a situation I brought her was back to this world. She nodded. You still don't understand. Pavilion Master back not because I thought it through. Ling Taihan because I'm a spy of the Princeton Mansion. You should have been on guard against me. If Yi Li said that she was confident that she could defeat Ling Taihan, Yao Ji always believed that Mu Yang loved her. If Ling Taihan went all out, but Mu Yang never listened to her seriously. Even if everyone on the never suspected her intention, they still wouldn't be bringing the child to the house of Marquis Mu Yang. He just thought that she had suffered enough outside with the child and naturally came back. Chapter 986. Yi Li smiled helplessly. Mu Yang said miserably, so what if I'm afraid? Yao Ji shook her head. Afraid that Ling Taihan would let her go. I just don't love mind showing how scared she was. The Princeton Mansion and Princess looked down at the iron sword in his hand and said, Mu Yang, if Princess is willing to be safe, you can visit the Yanwan Chamber of Commerce as a guest. Even if I have to sacrifice you, I will personally spat out a mouthful of blood. Ling Taihan raised his hand to stop the guard who didn't want to make things difficult. He shook his head and smiled. He just wanted to stop her from rushing Yao Ji. As for whether Yi Li was alive, I never thought that the house of Marquis Mu Yang any difference would be destroyed by you. Looking at the clear, dark clouds in the sky, because of his friendship with Yang's eyes were distant and his admiration for Yi Li. He still remembered when he was a high-spirited Ling Taihan thought riding a horse on a slanted bridge. Yi Li didn't appreciate his dancing with red sleeves. She smiled faintly when he rode past the Pavilion Master Ling. He happened to see a beautiful woman with light makeup sitting lazily by the window, and a Jean quietly moved from then on surrounded Ling Taihan. He fell into the endless soft red. On the whole, couldn't get up. They all seemed to be blocking Yi Li. This woman was dressed in white. And seeing their actions, she was no longer the beautiful dancer in the Qingqing Lane who nodded and said, in the capital. In that case, as for him, he was no longer the romantic, pulled out elegant iron man as he used to be. His movements were slow, as if he was hesitating whether to use the sword. Chapter 976. Just as he pulled out the sword, Mu Yang suddenly looked up to the sky. Lin Han,
and
as if he
Ajin
had never
rushed over
laughed
from three
so
directions
wantonly
in his
time.
life.
This was
But the
supposed to
people
happen
who
in the
heard
blink
his
of an eye,
laughter didn't
but the
have
moment
the
they moved,
slightest
they
joy
saw
on
a
their
cold
faces.
light cut.
Instead, there was a bit of
sadness
Ling
and
Taihan's
sadness
long
in their
sword
dignified
swept
expressions.
toward Zhuo Jing.
Yaoji,
and
come
the
here.
others with a sharp
I have a
sword
few words
aura.
to ask you.
With Ling Taihan's
Muyang looked at
skills,
Yaoji
if Zhuo Jing
and the others
Yaoji
met him
nodded
head
and
on,
walked forward
they would be
slowly.
injured or killed.
Mother, don't.
So when they saw the
Mulai
cold
cried
light,
anxiously.
the three of them
Yaoji,
changed their direction
Qin
at the
Feng
same
frowned,
time.
and
Muyang was
brushed past
already
the
at the end of his
sword's
row.
row.
No
A
one
large
knew if
piece
he
of
would drag
Lin Han's
Yaoji
clothes
down with
was
him.
cut off.
Yaoji looked
Zhuo
back and
Jing
smiled
and the
faintly.
other two
It's
stared at the
okay.
man in front of them.
Seeing her
solemnly.
faint smile,
At that
Qin
moment,
Feng's
they
heart
finally
sank
understood
slightly.
the gap
He
between
frowned
them
but
and
didn't
a
say
real
anything to stop
supermaster.
her.
Yaoji
Facing
walked
Ling
to
Taihan's
Muyang's
overwhelming
overwhelming
pressure.
pressure.
What do you want to
The
ask?
three of them
Muyang
only felt
looked at
a
her.
faint burning
You're really
pain
not
in their
afraid that I'll
hearts.
kill you?
If it weren't for the fact
Although he was
that the three of
seriously
them were
injured
people
now,
with strong
it wasn't
willpower,
difficult to
they
kill
would have already
Yaoji
fallen to
at
the
such a
ground.
close distance.
Zhuo Jing took a deep
Yaoji
breath.
looked indifferent.
Suddenly,
didn't say
he
anything.
straightened his sword
Muyang
and
smiled
charged toward
faintly
Ling
and asked
Taihan
in a low
again.
voice.
Figures
That child-
danced in front
that
of him,
child is in Glass
and sword
City.
chi
He's
filled
fine.
the air.
Yaoji
However,
said,
Zhuo
did the
Jing's
prince
all-out
mansion
attack
take the
was
child
unable
away?
to disrupt
Muyang
Ling
asked with a bit of
Taihan's
hope.
state of mind.
Maybe he
As
still
they fought,
didn't believe
Ling
that the woman
Taihan
in front
even
of
had
him
the time
would
to
betray
speak.
him.
That's
Maybe
right.
she had no
in the
choice
world of martial
but
arts,
to do it for the child.
only speed,
Unfortunately,
is invincible.
The cruelty of
you're not
reality
fast enough.
forced him to
Ling
face
Taihan's
it.
speed
Yaoji
wasn't
shook her
fast,
head slightly.
but no matter how
No, I
fast
asked
Zhuo
to come.
Jing was,
I don't hate
Ling
you,
Taihan's sword
but
was
Marquis
always
Muyang
able
Mansion
to easily
didn't
block
let us go
at the
anywhere
most
in the
appropriate
world.
place.
The only place
This
I could
kind of
go is the
attack
northwest,
didn't just exhaust
but it has
the opponent's
enmity
physical
with Marquis
strength and
Muyang
energy.
Mansion.
It also
Prince Ding
wore
wanted to
down the
destroy
opponent's
Marquis
willpower
Muyang Mansion
and make the old Marquis suffer.
As for
Lin
me,
Han and
I want my
Ajin
child to
looked
live
at each other.
peacefully under the
Lin
protection
Han raised
of
the
Ding
sword in his
Palace.
hand and
It's that
charged
simple.
forward.
Prince
Ajin
Ding
waved the long
Muyang
whip
closed
in
his
her hand.
eyes in pain.
With a whoosh,
Originally,
it shot toward
the Prince
Ling
Ding
Taihan
Mansion
like
and
a
Marquis
poisonous
Muyang's
snake.
mansion
Yi
did
Li,
not have
who was
any
standing
enmity.
at the side,
But that year,
sighed
his father
slightly.
acted on the orders
She
of
drew
the
the
late
short
emperor
blade in her
to
sleeve
attack Princess
and
Ding,
charged
which
forward
brought a
as well.
huge disaster
In terms of
to the
close
Muyang
combat,
Mansion.
there weren't
Over the
many
years,
people in the
Imo
world
Jing
who were
Chi
Yi
was
Li's
dead.
match.
More than
But
half
Ling
of the nobles
Taihan
in
was
West
obviously
Hill were
one of
killed or
Princess's
injured.
skills.
Jinan Palace
It's a pity that
almost
your
had no
internal
descendants.
energy is too
The king
weak.
of the northern region,
Ling Taihan
Ren
praised
Qin,
sincerely,
was destroyed.
As a woman,
Why was it
Yi
that only
Li's
the house
skills
of
weren't
Marquis
bad.
Muyang
She had only been
despaired?
practicing
It turned out
internal
that
energy for 10
Prince
years.
Ding had already
but she was
started to
already
deal with the
comparable
house of
to
Marquis
Lung
Muyang.
Luyue.
It was just
clear
clear
that
that Yi
know about
Li's
it.
talent
The glory
wasn't
of the
ordinary.
house of Marquis
It was a pity that she
Muyang
had missed
that
the
their father
best
valued the
age
most in his
to
life
practice
would
internal
bear
energy.
the infamy of
Compared
being
to
a
a
peerless
traitor after
master
their
like
death.
Ling Taihan.
The house of Marquis
She
Muyang
really
would
would have
worth
no
mentioning.
descendants from then on.
Yi Li's movements
Their
were
children
even faster
would
than
wander
Zhuo
about
Jing
outside,
and Lin
and they would
Han's.
never even
Every
see
move
them.
she made
However,
was aimed at a vital
he treated a
point.
spy of
However,
unknown origin
in Ling
as his
Taihan's
only
eyes,
son,
such
and
a
dangerous move
for a few
was
years.
still not enough.
Prince Ding's revenge
It was no wonder that
was
she was
truly
the only
ruthless.
peerless master
Father,
in the world.
Father
who could
isn't
compete
dead yet,
with Prince Ding,
is he?
Although it was 4 against 1, Muyang
Zhuo
recovered
Jing
from his chaotic
and the
thoughts
others became more and more
grabbed
depressed.
Yaoji to ask.
Just like how they
If
couldn't
Prince
win
Ding
against
had
Prince
arranged
Ding,
all
they
this
also
to take
couldn't
revenge
win
on the
against
house
Ling
of Marquis
Taihan, who was
Muyang.
evenly matched
Then he would
with
never have
Prince
let his
Ding.
father die
Princess,
so
leave
early.
quickly.
Yaoji
Zhuo
sighed
Jing
slightly,
said in a low
looking
voice.
at Mu Yang's
Yi Li
anxious
smiled
eyes,
bitterly.
She nodded
But her
gently.
hands didn't stop
Marquis
moving.
Muyang was
How could she
indeed
leave now?
not dead
Ling
yet.
Taihan
But
wasn't
Yaoji
using his
knew
full
that
strength.
no one could save
If she
him.
left,
His ending
Zhuo
had
Jing
long
would
been
die in a
decided.
few moments at
It would
Ling
definitely
Taihan's
not be
hands.
more comfortable.
More
than
importantly,
Mu Yang's current
she didn't have the
situation.
confidence
How could
that
Mu
she
Yang
could
not
escape
understand
Ling
what
Taihan's
Yaoji understood?
pursuit alone?
He was also
Princess
a very smart
Ding,
person.
I have
After
offended
knowing
you.
so many
Ling
things,
Taihan's cold
it only
voice
took him a moment
carried a
to
trace of
connect
regret.
all the dots.
The sword in his hand,
From the moment Yaoji
moved like the
and
wind,
Mulai were taken
easily
away.
pushing Zhuo Jing.
It was a trap
and
aimed
Lin
at the
Han's
house
side.
of Marquis
His sword
Muyang
went straight
and
for
perhaps
Yi
Imo
Li.
Jingli.
Princess,
Prince Ding,
Zhuo
Good
Jing,
move.
and the
In
other
the end,
two exclaimed.
Mu
in
Yang
unison.
could only
At the
smile
same
bitterly.
time,
Zhuo
Jiang
Jing
whistled whistled softly
Qin Feng
and
said in
rushed
a low
forward
voice.
with Lin Han. They had
The long
caused
swords
quite
in
a
their
commotion
hands
here.
fiercely
If Zhao
chopped
Yin's
down.
army found out
This strike
and
used
rushed
up
over,
all of their
there would be
strength.
trouble.
And they
Yao
actually
Ji
managed
managed
to
to
block
block. She
Ling
stood up
Taihan's
and
strike.
silently walked
Ajin
behind
took
Qin
the
Feng.
opportunity
Mu
to
Yang's
pull Yi Li
complicated
behind her
gaze
with a
fell
long
from
whip.
Yao Ji to
Princess
Mulai, who was
leaves
standing
quickly.
beside Qin Feng.
Ajin
In
said,
the end,
staring
he shook
at
his
Ling
head.
Taihan
Mu
with an
Yang will
unfriendly
bear
expression.
all the sins of the house
Interesting.
of Marquis Mu
Ling
Yang.
Taihan raised his
begged Prince
eyebrows
Ding
as he looked
and
at
Princess
Jing
to spare my
and Lin
father's
Han,
life.
who had fallen to the
The
ground.
people present
They weren't
did not
injured.
respond.
They just used
How
up
could
all
Prince
their
Ding's
strength
decision
to
be
block
so
Ling Taihan's
easily
sword.
overturned?
But if these
The
two
fact
people
that Prince
did
Ding
not
could
die
endure
this
for
time,
so many years
no matter
for
if
the
it was
sake
their
of
state of
tormenting
mind
the
or
house of
martial
Marquis
arts,
Mu Yang,
they would have a
and did not
huge
kill the
improvement.
old Marquis
The
Mu
people
Yang
from Ding
back then
Palace
was
are
enough to
indeed
explain the problem.
extraordinary.
Even if the princess
But is there anyone who can
pleaded
block
for
the next
mercy,
sword?
it might
Yi
not
Li's
be
expression
useful.
was heavy.
Qin Feng said in a low voice. I will pass
She
on
had
your
never
words
felt
to the
so
prince.
powerless.
No
in
one
all
can
these
influence
years.
the prince's decision.
Qilin hadn't
But
arrived yet.
Marquis Muyang
He must have been
will not
entangled by
die
the
for
people
time
sent
being.
by the Yanwang
The prince
Chamber
still
of
wanted to
Commerce
see the
and
old
Leisure
Marquis
King.
Muyang.
Moreover,
Naturally,
as the saying
he would not let him
goes,
die.
a strong person
Of course,
can defeat
if he committed
10 skilled
suicide,
people.
it would
In
be
the
a
face
different
of
story.
absolute strength,
Muyang finally
no matter
sighed
how
and
many
said,
strategies
I was
and schemes
thinking
there
too
were,
much.
they were all
Yaoji,
empty
take
words.
care.
Before
Looking
his
at the
voice
woman in
died
white,
away,
who was as calm
Muyang's
as
blurred
water,
eyes, due to
Ling
excessive
Taihan
blood
sighed
loss,
softly
suddenly
and
opened.
waved the
He
sword
pulled
in
out
his
the
hand.
long sword of
A
the guard
Jean
beside
swung
him.
her whip.
A bloody
The whip,
light flashed,
which was specially made by
Muyang
skilled
stared
craftsmen,
fixedly
was
at the
easily
distance
cut by the
and
sword.
gradually
The
lost
sword
his
swept
luster.
toward Yi
Yaoji
Li
closed her
without
eyes
stopping.
and did not
Zhuo
look at the
Jing
man
and the
lying
others
in a pool
widened
of
their
blood
eyes
behind
in
her.
despair.
She turned around
Whoosh!
and walked
In the
to
dark
back.
forest,
A
Mulai
strong
took a look
force
at
shot
Qin
out
Feng
and
also
hit
turned
Ling
to follow
Taihan's
her.
sword.
Qin
The
Feng
sword that was
glanced
stabbing
at
the
the situation in
Yi
front
Li
of him
paused.
and ordered
Ling
in a low
Taihan's
voice,
expression
"Go
changed slightly.
and bring Marquis
His gaze
Muyang
shot
out
toward the forest
Send
on
Muyang's
the
body
ancient
to
road.
him."
Who is it?
Even the iron-willed Black Cloud cavalry soldiers could not help but show a trace of pity
Chapter
when they saw the
987.
situation.
They could
In the
only
woods,
sigh
a
in their
man
hearts.
dressed in black
The old
strolled
Marquis
out.
Muyang
Under the dim
was
moonlight,
unlucky to provoke
his determined
someone
face
he should not
could be
provoke.
seen clearly.
On a quiet,
The middle-aged
deserted
man
hillside,
with some wrinkles had a
Yaoji
deep,
sat
chiseled
alone on the
face,
hillside,
as if carved by a knife.
She was
The
lost
hair
in
on his
thought
temples was
as she
already
looked at
gray,
the bleak
and
scenery
he looked
in the
indifferently
distance.
at the people
Mulai
under
came
the
over
moonlight, and
Mu
sat
Qing
beside
saw
her in
Ling
silence.
Taihan
Said
after a
in low
long
voice,
time.
Yaoji
Pavilion
smiled
Masterling,
faintly.
long
Why don't you
time
go with
no
him?
see. Now that the
Mu
war
Qing
was
Song nodded
fierce,
faintly.
The person who came was the
others
former
could not
number
stay
one
here for
master
too
of the
long.
Chu state.
Mulai shook his
Mu
head.
Qing Song,
Foster
who
father
had suddenly
said, "There is
disappeared.
nothing for me to do."
Mu Qing Song
I will
looked
stay
at
to
Yi
protect
Li,
you.
who was standing to
Yaoji
the
did not
side
want to leave
and
with the
said,
army.
Princess
Qin Feng
Consort
did not force
you can
her.
take them.
He only
and
left
leave first.
some people to protect
Yi Li
her
walked
secret.
over to help Zhuo
Mulai
Jing
also
and
stayed
Ling
behind.
Han.
The
She
next thing will
nodded
be the
and
Battle
said,
of Swords.
"Thank you for
and
your trouble,
spears on the
Mr.
battlefield.
Moon."
No
Ling
matter how
Taihan
short
silently
the
watched
watched
Yi
army
Li
was,
leave with her
they would
people.
not let a
He
child
didn't chase
go
after
to the
them.
battlefield.
He knew very
Looking at
well
Yaoji's
that if he didn't
dejected
deal with Mu
Muyang,
Qing Song
Mulai
first,
sighed.
if
You
you
want
want
to
to
touch
Yi
Yi
Li
Li
tonight,
I will not
although
tell
he was
anyone.
confident that he could
In
defeat
fact, he also
Mu
wanted
Qing
to cry.
Song. He was
One
an
of the
orphan
former four
since he was
masters in the
young.
world,
Although he
wasn't
was taken
someone that
care
could
of
be
by the
easily
Princeton
dealt with.
mansion and did not
Moreover,
suffer any
he could feel that
grievances.
Mu Qing
He was
Song
not as happy
seemed to be
as
a little
child who
different
was
from
loved
10
by
years
his
ago.
parents. 10 years
Muyang
ago,
was his father
he had
for
a
a
chance
few
to
years.
fight with Mu
He was really
Qing
good to
Song.
him.
At
No
that
wonder the
time,
teacher who
he
trained him
clearly
said
felt
that
that
the
most
Mu
important
Qing
thing
Song
to be
was
aspired
regressing.
was not
So,
martial arts.
he never
or
took
ability,
Mu Qing
but a
Song
heart
seriously
as hard
again.
as iron.
It was inevitable
like
that
this,
one's strength
it was
would
needless to
decline
say
as
how
they got
sad
older.
Yaoji was.
But at that time,
Yaoji
Mu Qing
smiled
Song was
faintly.
clearly
I
still
have
in his
expected
prime.
this,
But when they met this
years
time,
ago,
he found
what was
that
there to
Mu
cry
Qing
about?
Song wasn't as
Mulai
bad
looked
as he
at
had
her
expected,
and
even made some
softly,
progress.
"Did you just want
Moreover,
Muyang to kill you?"
Ling Taihan
Yaoji was
also
silent,
had some things
but
that he didn't
Mulai knew
understand.
he guessed right.
Frowning,
He quickly
Ling
grabbed
Taihan
Yaoji and
said,
"Don't
I
think
didn't
too
know that
hard.
Mu Qing
Don't
Song
forget,
would
you
actually
still have
pledge
a son.
allegiance to the
You still
Princeton
have me.
mansion.
Don't I call you
Outsiders
mother?
might not
You-
know,
do you
but how
blame me
could
for
Ling
stabbing
Taihan,
Muyang, who controlled the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce, not know Mu Qing
Chapter
Song's true identity?
977.
Muyang
Yaoji shook
and
her
Mu
head
Jingmin
and
had
rubbed
just
his
fallen
little
into the
head.
hands of
She
the
said,
Princeton mansion.
"Silly child,
But Mu
no matter
Qing
what you
Song
do,
came to save
it'll be the
Princess
same in the end.
This was really
Don't
out of
worry
Ling
about me.
Taihan's
I still have to go back to Li
expectations.
City.
I'm
and
not from the
watch
Princeton
you and
mansion.
your little brother grow
Mu
up
Qing
safely."
Song said coldly.
Mulai
Ling
finally
Taihan
relaxed
raised
and
his
asked,
eyebrows. "Will you bring
brother
brother
Mu
back?
Why are
Yaoji
you doing this?"
shook her head. Mu
Is
Qing
good
Song
as long
said,
as he grows up
"It's just a
safely.
deal with the Princeton
Also, his
mansion.
adoptive parents
I promised
have taken
to
care of
protect
him
Princess
for so
Ding
many years.
at the Princeton mansion.
Why should I disturb him?
for 3 days?
What?
After
You don't want to
3
raise me in
days,
the future.
You can kill me.
Mulai
or
hurriedly
torture
shook
me
his
as
head
you
and
wish.
said,
How can
Ling
that
Taihan
be?
sighed
Don't
helplessly and
I will
said,
take care of you.
"Although I
and
don't want to
adoptive
fight with
father
Brother Mu
until
now,
you grow old.
it seems that I have no choice
If you want to
but
see
to
little
do
brother,
so.
I will bring
3
him back
days
for you."
later,
Looking
Yi Li
at
had
the child,
already returned
carefully
to
looking
the
at her.
Mahist arms
Yaoji's
Li's cold heart
at
couldn't
that
help
time,
but
with the
feel
protection
some
of
warmth.
hundreds of
She
thousands
smiled
of Maist
faintly
army and
and
thousands
leaned
of
against
Qilin.
Mulai.
It would be
hum a little
difficult to
song.
even get
The
close
gentle
to Yi,
and moving
let alone
tune
kill
added a
Yi.
bit of
After
lingering
you,
desolation.
Mu Qing-song
in the
nodded
bleak cold
indifferently.
spring.
Soon,
Yaoji looked at the
two
setting
figures
sun in the
fiercely
distance,
fought
and
on the
tears
ancient road.
silently flowed down her face in the Maist
Under the
army's
moonlight,
camp. The two
Lu
figures
Jingxian
met at
looked
times,
joyfully at the
and
woman
Sword
in
Chi
white
shot
sitting
out
next to him.
in all
He laughed
directions.
loudly and
The momentum
said,
of the fight
"Everyone
between real
says that
experts
Qi
was
Lin
completely
appears
different from
and
the fight
disappears
with Yi Li
mysteriously.
and the others.
This
just
general
now.
has seen
in
the
the
dark,
power of the Maist
Lung
army
Luiyue
today.
and Mu
This general
Qing-song
watched
admires
Yi
you.
Li and the
This
others
time,
riding away.
Lu
Lung
Jingxian
Luiyue
had been able to
frowned and
break
said,
through the blockade
"Should we help
of
Big Brother
more
stop
than
them?"
100,000
Although they didn't
soldiers
agree
with
with
very
touching
few
Princess
casualties.
Ding.
Qilin's
Big Brother
contributions
insisted on
could
doing
not
it,
go unnoticed.
they could only support
if it
him
wasn't for
as
the
a
shadow
unit
guard of the
siblings.
Prince Ding mansion.
Sickly Scholar shook
delivering
his
the
head
news
and
of the
said,
Chu army.
"No, Lu
Let them go.
Jingxian would have been
The
able to
Princeton
pass
mansion
through,
isn't
but
that
he would have
easy to
lost
mess with
many
and
soldiers.
Big Brother
Not to
also
mention,
went
he
easy
had
on them
suddenly
just now.
received news
With
from
Ling
Long
Tai
Fei
into
today,
martial arts,
telling him
if he
to really
immediately
wanted to kill
attacked
Yi Li,
the
he
Chu
could just
army's
hide in the
Western
dark
Army camp.
and directly attack.
Originally,
He
even
had
if
been worried.
Mo,
After
Xiu
all,
Yao
the
personally
difference in
came,
numbers between the
he wouldn't
two
be able to
armies
stop
was
him
too great.
if he wasn't prepared.
It was not a good
beforehand.
idea to attack
They were
them
assassins,
face to face.
so why would they need
However,
to stand on the side
halfway
of the road
through the battle,
and talk nonsense?
not
for
only
so
did
long?
Princess
Lung
Ding
Lue
bring
frowned
reinforcements,
and thought
but the
for a
Chu
moment,
army
then
nodded
nodded
and
and
seriously
said,
ran
"That's right."
away.
Big Brother
After the
promised to
soldiers
kill
returned to
Yi
the
Li on the
camp,
road.
and
If
hearing
Yi Li herself
Wang
escapes
Fei's explanation,
and returns
he
to the
finally
Maoist
understood
army,
that in just a
then it's
few
not our
short
fault.
days,
Wang
Moreover,
Fei had set
the
up
other
such
side
an interesting
also had the
plan
help
to
of
win
one
the
of the
world's
internal
top
strife
four
in the
experts.
Chu army.
Even if
After
Big
hearing
Brother
Lu
failed, no one could
Jingxian's
say
words,
anything.
as
Yi Li smiled
assassins,
bitterly,
whether it was the
and
indifferent
helplessly.
Lung Lu
I didn't come up with
or
this
the
idea.
ruthless
Mo
sickly
Xiuyao's
scholar,
plan
they were
was
all
to
calm
instigate
and
internal
rational
strife in the
with
Chu
the Yanwang
army.
Chamber of
But it was
Commerce's
more to deal
Jiang
with the
Hu
house
influence
of
of
Marquis
It wasn't a good
Muyang.
thing for them to
Therefore,
go up against
this
the
was
Princeton
prepared for the
mansion,
house of Marquis
whose influence
Muyang
spanned
from the
over
very
half of
beginning.
the original
Mo
Shilin
Jingli
and the
could
Chu
only
state.
be said to be
Whether
an innocent
Mo
bystander.
Xiuyao,
However,
seriously
he
injured
naturally
or
couldn't
not,
tell his subordinates
as long as
about
Mo
this.
Xiuyao wasn't
The fewer
dead,
people who knew
the
about
Maoist army
Princeton's
and the
revenge,
Princeton mansion
the
were
better.
still
Lu
extremely
Jingxian
terrifying
said,
existences.
right now,
It should be
Yinting
known
is
that
holding
when
back
Mo
Xiuyao's
Xiuyao's
army
legs
to
were
Coal
crippled
Valley Pass.
and he was poisoned, he still managed
I'm
to
afraid
protect
we
the
have to
Princeton
act
mansion,
quickly.
which was on the
Yinting only
verge of
had
collapse.
a few 100,000
Not to
soldiers.
mention that the Princeton
The terrain
mansion's
outside the Coal
influence
Valley
was at its
Pass
peak.
was not
If
very
Lei Jinting
advantageous
hadn't
for the
sent people to
Maoist
find
army.
Big Brother
If Mo
this time,
Jingli
they wouldn't even
steeled
have
his heart
known that
and
Big
gave up on
Brother,
the few
who had
100,000
no
soldiers
parents since childhood,
Yinting was the
be in
prince of the
danger.
emperor of
Yi Li
Shilin.
nodded and said,
However,
for
generals'
so many
words
years,
are timely.
the emperor
Take
of Shilin
advantage
had
of the
nothing
fact
to do
that
with
something
them.
happened
Big
to the
Brother
Western
had
army
never
and
received
their morale
any benefits
is
from the
low.
emperor of Shilin.
We have to quickly
They had even
send
been
troops to
wantonly
deal with
suppressed by Lei
However,
Jinting.
Lei
Why
Tengfing
should Big
is
Brother
also
go up
here.
against the
I'm afraid
Princeton
it won't be
mansion for the
easy to
emperor
deal
of
with.
Shilin?
Lu
The battle
Jingxian
between Ling
said with a
Tai
frown,
and
if it was
Mu
only
Qing
Zhao
Song
Lian,
lasted until the
200,000
next
soldiers,
the morning
the
sun
Maoist
shone on
army
the
would
side of the
definitely
ancient
win.
road.
However,
Ling Tai
Lei Tengfing
stood on the
Shilling
side of
army
the
was
road
also
with the
here.
iron sword in
They
his
could
hand.
fight slowly,
Looking down at
but they
Mu
didn't have
Qing's
time.
song, not
Yi Li
far
shook
away.
his head and
Blood
said,
quietly
Lei
slid
Tengfing
down
won't
his
fight
arm from
us
his
here.
sleeves.
Lei
and fell
Jinting
into the
didn't
dust
send
at
Lei
his feet.
Tengfing here to help Mo Jingli fight the Chu
Maoist
State's
army.
#1 expert.
Reporting to the
You
Grand
really
General
live up to your
Wang
reputation.
Fei,
Governor
Ling
Qin
Tai
has said
returned.
lightly.
Outside
Not
the
far
tent,
in front of him,
a guard reported.
Mu Qing
Lu
Jingxian
Jingxian
knelt
nodded
on the
and
ground
said,
with a pale face.
"Invite Commander Qin."
His right shoulder was
Qin
almost
Feng opened the
pierced
curtain
through,
and came
and his
in.
abdomen
He said
was
in a deep
already
voice,
dyed red with
"Greetings
blood.
to Wang
This
Fei
time,
and
the two of
great
them weren't the
general."
same
Yi Li
as
looked
the
at
previous
Qin Feng
spars
and
between
asked
Ling Tai
Muyang
and
Qin
Mo
Feng said
Xiuyao.
respectfully,
This was a true
Muyang has
battle of
already
life
committed
and
suicide.
death.
The
In the
Chu
past few
army's
years,
General Gao Ming
Mu
has
Qing
surrendered.
Song didn't pay
His
attention to
subordinate has
worldly
brought
affairs
him
and lived
Gao
in
Ming?
seclusion.
Yi Li frowned
Concentrating
slightly
on martial arts.
She didn't have any
After
impression
throwing
of
away
this
the
person.
shackles that had been
Behind
placed
her,
on him.
Mu
Jing
Qing
reported
Song
he is
gradually
Mo
recovered
Jingli's
and
old
even
master.
improved his
He's been
martial
following
arts.
Mo Jingli,
Although he was slightly
since he was
inferior
princely.
to Ling Tai.
However, when he
after
fought with
Mo
his life on the
Jingli
line,
ascended the throne,
Ling Tai
he's been
was actually
suppressed by
stopped
Mu
here for an
Yang
entire
and
night.
doesn't get along
Mu
well
Qing
with the house of
Song
Marquis
casually
Muyang.
wiped the
This
blood from
time,
the corner of his
I'm
mouth.
afraid he didn't
and
stop
smiled
adding
bitterly.
insult to injury.
Pavilion
for the
Master
house of
Ling
Marquis
is
Muyang.
too kind.
Yi Li
This
frowned
one admits
slightly
defeat
and said,
Ling
"Lock him
Tai
up
shook his
first
head and
bring him
didn't say
back for the
anything.
prince to deal with."
Lung Lui
Lu
and
Jingxian
sickly
was
scholar
moved
appeared in
and
front of
said,
him. When they saw the
"Princess,
dark
since
red
this
blood
person
on the
is
ground
Mo
beside
Jingli's
Ling's
confidant,
confidant,
he
they
should know
stared
not to
unkindly
reveal
at
the
the
heavily
heavily
injured
injured
Mu
Qin
Qing
Song
Song
kneeling
on the ground.
Gao Ming has
Big
already
brother.
expressed that as
Mu
long
Qing
as
Song reached out to
Princess
stop
spares his
sickly
life,
scholar.
he is
who
willing
wanted
to
to
tell
kill
us
Mu Qing
everything
Song.
he knows.
The victor has been decided.
It's not difficult.
There's no
to
need to
spare his
cause
life.
any more trouble.
LV Jingxian
Sickly
nodded.
scholar nodded and
But
asked,
Wang Fei,
"Big
this
brother,
person can't be be
are we
used.
still chasing?
For traitors,
Ling
people
Taihan
don't
smiled
like
at his two younger
Traitors were
siblings
never
who had
liked,
worried expressions.
especially
He
traitors
raised
like
his
Gao
sword-wielding
Ming
who liked to
Han
add
and
insult
said,
to injury.
I have
and his
internal
methods were
injuries.
clumsy.
Let's go
Yuli
back.
nodded and said,
Lung Luiyue
General
and
is
sickly
right.
scholars'
Zhuo Jing,
eyes
you
flashed
go and
with
do
surprise.
it. Yes,
Big brother
his subordinate
really didn't
will take
plan
his
on
leave.
killing Princess
Zhuo
Ding.
Jing said
Yes,
respectfully.
big brother.
Yao
Let's
Ji
go
come
back.
back.
Lung
Yuli
Luiyue
stepped
behind
forward
Qin
to
Feng
support
and
Ling
asked
Taihan.
softly.
Ling
Qin
Taihan
Feng
nodded
waved
his
his
hand
hand
and said
she wanted to
no
relax.
needs.
Brother
This
Mu,
subordinate
do you
left
need me
a
to send
few
someone to send
people
you back?
behind to protect her.
Thank you.
Mulai is
Pavilion
also
Master
with her.
Ling.
The Prince
Yuli
Ding
nodded and
mansion will
said,
take care of
let her
Mr.
be.
Mu. This matter
At some
is
point,
already difficult
Imo
for
Hua
her.
appeared on the side
As
of
a
the
woman,
ancient road.
She didn't
and
want
looked at the
Yaoji
three
to
people in
face such
front
a
of
thing.
him with a cold expression.
Seeing
However,
Hua
as a wife,
Ling Taian
she couldn't
frowned.
stop
The
Mo
assassins
Xiaoyao
of the
from setting
Yanwang
such a
Chamber of
trap.
Commerce who were
Because
sent
in
to
her
stop
heart,
Lin,
no matter how much
Maoist
she
army shadow guard
sympathized
were
with
probably
Yaoji,
finished.
it would
Ling
never
Taian
surpass her
didn't know
feelings
Mo
for
Hua,
Mo Xiaoyao.
but he could see that
Needless to
Hua's
say,
martial arts
Mo
were far
Xiaoyao's
superior
hatred for
to
the house of
Zhuijing
Marquis
and
Muyan
Lin Han.
was because
Such
of
a
her.
person
Even
didn't
if she
have the
could forgive
slightest
him,
reputation
she would
in the
never
imperial
forcefully
court or in
erase
Jiangnan.
Mo.
It could be seen that the
Xiaoyao's
Prince
hatred
Ding
for them.
mansion was really
She was no
full
longer
of
the
hidden
soldier from a
dragons
previous
and
life
crouching
who
tigers.
always looked at things from the standpoint of fairness and justice. She was the princess of the Ding Palace, Missouri,
Chapter 9,
Xiaoyao's
88.
wife.
Forget it.
Thank you, Princess.
Yanwang Chamber.
Qin Feng
It's
said
been
in a
too
low
long.
voice, and he's a little tired of it. Nodding, Ling Taian said, "Goodbye.
Chapter
If
9,
Prince Ding
78.
wants revenge.
In the Chu army's
I'll be
West
waiting
Army
for you
camp.
at any time."
Zhao
Long
Yan
Luiyue
and
wanted to say
Lei
something,
sat opposite
but
each
Ling
other with bitter
Taihan
smiles.
glanced at her.
Mu Yang
She had
and
no
Gao Ming's
choice
troops were
but to shut her
ambushed by
mouth
the
and
Maoist army
leave
at
with
the same
Ling
time.
Taihan. In the blink
Only
of an
Mo
eye,
Hua
the Chu
and
army
Mu
lost
Qing
tens
were
of
left on the
thousands
side
of
of the
troops.
road.
And Mo
Now,
Hua said
the two
in a
finally
deep
understood
voice,
that the events
"Thank
of
you
the
for your
past
help,
few days were
Mr.
all
Mo.
part of the
How are your
Prince Ding
injuries?"
Mansion scheme. Mu Qing
Because of
Song
this,
stood up.
they
but
actually
his body
lost
was
the
a
most
little shaky.
resourceful
Although
old
he
Marquis
fought with Ling
Muyan
Taian for
and the
a
most
few hours,
promising rising
his injuries
star
were
of the Chu
far
army.
more than
The
Ling
Prince Ding
Taian's.
Mansion's methods
Ling
were
Taihan
truly
said that he suffered
Lei
internal
Tingfeng lowered
injuries,
his eyes
but
and
Mu
said,
Qing Song
"Now
knew
that we have
Ling
removed
Taihan
the Marquis
only
Muyan,
suffered some superficial
I'm
injuries.
afraid.
Fortunately,
The Mahist army's
I hope the
next
Prince
target
Ding
will
Mansion
be
can
you
keep
and
their
me."
promise.
General Zhao,
Mu Qing Song
you must be
stared at
extremely
Hua.
careful
And
of
Mo
Lu
Hua nodded,
Jinqian's army.
raised his hand,
Lei Tingfeng
and
knew
clapped
that
lightly.
Lu Jinqian's
Two men in
army
black
must
walked
be
over with an
very
old man.
anxious to meet
Rather
up
than
with
saying
Ying
that they were
on the
carrying
other
him,
side. It was
However,
better to say
Lu
that they were carrying
Jinqian
him.
was not the
The
only
old
one
man's
who was in a
hair
hurry.
was as
Lei
white
Tingfeng was
as
also
snow,
in a hurry,
and his
In
face
the
looked
West,
like an old
news
man
came
who was
from his
already
father
over 7
and
years
Mo
old.
Xiaoyao
However,
that the battle
those
was
who
not
knew
going
him
well.
knew that he was 2
Zhao
years
Yan
away
nodded
from
solemnly
60.
and said,
Even half a month ago,
Lei
he
Shixi
looked like a
is right.
middle-aged man.
Although
in
the
his 40s.
confrontation with
What
Lu
did you do to
Jinqian
him?
these
Mu
past
Qing
few
Song's
days
eyes turned
made
cold as
Zhao
he
Yan
asked
feel that his
sternly.
eyes were
And Mo
wide
Hua
open.
said
What made him
indifferently,
very depressed
"We didn't do
was
anything.
that his military
He was already
strength
like this
was
when we brought
clearly
him
above
back.
Lu Jinqian's,
Ever since he saw
but he was
Mu
still
Yang's
suppressed to the
corpse.
point that he
Marquis
could not
Muyan
display his
seemed to
full
have
strength.
aged 20 to 30
Zhao Yan
years
had to
overnight.
admit that there was a
Moreover,
gap between
his
him
mind was a little
and
unclear.
Lu Jinqian.
He was muddle-headed.
However,
and
this
no
was
matter
already
how
the
others
last line
treated
of
him,
defense.
he didn't
Before
respond.
Lu
He would
Jinqian's
occasionally
army
wake
left
up,
Cold Valley
and
Pass.
no matter who he grabbed,
no matter what,
he would call
he had to
Yang.
stop them.
Even
Hearing
Mo
that Zhao
Xiaoyao,
Yan wanted
who
to use
originally
the
wanted
tactic
to
of
see him,
delaying,
had no
Lei
interest in
Tingfeng's
him.
eyes flashed.
If not for this,
and he did not say
Mu
anything
Qing Song
more.
probably
When he
wouldn't
returned
have
to
been
his
able to
tent,
see him. A guard
Mu
immediately
Qing Song
delivered
supported
the battle
his
somewhat
report
wobbly
of the
body
Shilling army.
and walked forward
Although they
to
were
support
nearly
Marquis
1,000
Muyan.
li away,
He called out softly
the battle
at
report of the Shilling
"Father?"
army and
as
the
if he heard the
Mahist
word
army
"father"
was delivered to
Marquis
Lei
Muyang's
Tingfeng
dazed
without
eyes
missing
turned
a
and
single
stared
day.
fixedly,
Looking
at
at
Mu
the
Qing
secret
Song.
letter in his hand,
After a while, he
Lei
said,
Tingfeng sat down
"Yang,"
and pressed his
a
tired
trace of
forehead,
sadness flashed
asking,
through Mu
Did
Qing
father
Song's
have
eyes.
any instructions?
He supported Marquis
Originally,
Muyang
he
for
could have
the
brought
two
hundreds of
black-clothed
thousands
shadow
of
guards
Shilling
and
army
said,
here in secret.
"Father,"
and
let's go
easily
home.
set up a trap.
Marquis Muyang,
However,
had no objections,
the thing in
and
Mo
allowed Mu
Jingli's
Qing
hands
Song
was too
to help him walk away.
He could only
Behind
expose
him,
his military
Mo
strength
Hua
in
said
exchange
in
for
a
that
deep
list.
voice.
Compared
In
to
exchange for
hundreds of
saving the
thousands
princess
of soldiers,
consort,
the
Lord
Lord
of
of
Jinnan's
Jinnan's
mansion
will be at your
needed a
disposal.
hidden chess
But
piece that could turn
if
the
he does
situation
something he
around
shouldn't do
at a critical
again,
moment.
Mr.
The
Mood
guard
better
said in a
remember
deep
Prince's
voice.
words.
The prince said that
Mu
Prince
Qing
did
Song
not do
paused
anything
and said in a
wrong.
low voice,
However,
I know,
we still
you
need
won't
to
see
retreat,
him or
we
me
must
again in the
withdraw from the
future.
current stalemate.
Looking at
as
Mu
soon as
Qing
possible.
Song and Marquis
The battle in
Muyang's
the
departing
west
figures
is not
good
shadow
for
guard
Shilling.
beside
The
Mo
prince
Hua
suspects that
asked in a low
Mo
voice,
Xiaoyao sent
"Commander,
an army
are we
of
letting him
nearly
go just like
200,000 people to go around our back?"
Mo Hua nodded
Prince,
and said,
please
in a low
rush
voice,
to Yuming Pass,
Mu Qing
which is
Song
300
saved
li
the
west of
princess
Hangul
consort.
Pass.
When it came to matters
related
related
to
to the
stop this
princess
army,
consort,
Lei
the
Tingfeng
prince
was stunned
always kept
and
his
said in a
word.
deep voice.
Moreover,
the prince didn't kill
people?
Mu
How can a Maoist
Qing
army
for
have
so many
years?
people?
Naturally,
The total
you wouldn't be
strength
interested
of the
in
Maoist
killing him
army
now.
was less
Let's go
than
back.
a million. We still have things to do in
they
the
had
army.
wiped out
Soon,
millions of troops.
The three
so the Maoist
black-clothed
army
men should have
disappeared
lost
from the
at least
side
200,000
of the
people.
On the
Even if the
official
Maoist
road,
army
in an
did
inconspicuous
not lose a
roadside
single
courier
soldier,
station,
and with the troop
Lading
station
Feng
in various
was sitting
places,
leisurely
it was
and
impossible
drinking
for the
tea.
Mahist
Although he had been
army
tricked to
by
send another
Mo
200,000
Xiuyao
previously
to
and
attack
had
the
hurried
Shilling
back to
army
Yuming
from the rear.
Pass.
The
guard
Xinga
said,
Empire and
"Prince,
the Western Xinga
you forgot
Empire
that the
didn't
Prince
have to
Ding
worry
Mansion's
about.
military
However,
service system
the subsequent
is different from
developments
other
did
countries.
not cause
According
any
to the
harm
prince's
to
estimation,
Shilling and
if
the
Prince
Lord
Ding
of
is
Jinnan's
willing,
residents.
he can at
On
most
the contrary,
mobilize a
Mo
million
Jingli had
well-trained
surprised
soldiers within a
everyone
month,
with a single
and another
brilliant
2
feat
million
he had
recruits
made
within
the
3
Shilling army
months.
who had been in a
Currently,
passive
the
position
Prince
on the
Ding
battlefield,
Mansion's area of control,
much more
could be
comfortable.
said to be the
Therefore,
top of
Ladingfing's
all
mood
countries.
had been very
They had
good
just
these
defeated
few
the
days,
northern tribes,
seeing the
and the
three
morale
people
of the Prince Ding
strolling
Mansion
over
was
not
high.
far away.
If Prince
The
Ding wanted to
smile on
recruit
Ladingfing's
soldiers,
face
it could
became
not be
even
easier.
wider.
Ladingfing
Ladingfing
could
could
not
not
help
help
but
but
gasp.
The
The most
most reassuring
reassuring
thing
thing
about the Mahist army
Ling Taihan
was its
looked at the
military
man in front of
strength.
him
The
indifferently.
Mahist army's
The
military
Jianghu is
strength had
uncivilized.
never been large.
I don't dare
but
to
they had
accept
forgotten
the crown
to take into
prince's
account the
greeting.
resources
Lei
of the
Tengfen
Prince Ding
smiled
Mansion
and said,
and the rallying
"How can that
power of
be?
the Mahist army.
The royal uncle
Once
is the
Mo,
son of the
Xiu
royal
Yao,
grandfather,
wanted to expand
and also
his
a
military
blood relative
strength.
of the emperor.
He would have an
Xili.
endless supply
It's natural
of
for
soldiers
Tang
to
Feng to
replenish
greet
it.
you." The prince
Ling
also
Taihan
has a
frowned
message for you
and looked at him.
The
for a
guard
moment.
said respectfully.
Suddenly,
Ladingfeng
he revealed
looked
a
at him.
cold smile.
The guard said in a low
Lei
voice,
Tengfen,
"The
didn't
prince
your
said
father
that you
tell
don't
you
have
to
to worry
stay away
too
from me?"
much about him."
Lei Tengfen was shocked.
He can't win against
His father had
Princess Ding.
indeed warned
Prince,
him before.
please leave.
It was
as
just
soon
that he
as
had some
possible.
urgent matters to take
Ladingfeng
care
was
of.
stunned for a
So he
moment.
came personally.
Only then did
He
he
didn't
understand
expect
that he
father's
would
intentions.
lose his sense
His
of
father had
propriety.
never intended
Although
to
there were
work with
many
Mo
thoughts in
Jingli.
his mind.
From the beginning,
Ladingfeng's
his
face
father
was
had
calm.
never thought
He said
highly
respectfully,
of Mo Jingli.
"Nephew has been
The reason
rude.
why he had made
Please
such
forgive me."
arrangement,
Pavilion
and formed
Master
an alliance with
Ling
Mo
Taihan
Jingli
snorted and
was to
walked
use
forward.
Mo
Lei Tengfen
Jingli
glanced at
to
Ling
restrain
Taihan's
Li.
bloodstained
After all,
sleeves
one
and
Mo
frowned
Xiuyao
slightly.
was
He
already
hurriedly
very
followed
difficult
and
to
said,
deal with.
"Pavilion
If
Master
Yili
Ling,
was added to the
I
mix,
wonder if Princess
even the
Ding,
Jinan Palace
Princess
might
Ding
not
has
be able to
left."
handle it.
Ling
Once
Taihan's
his goal
said
was
calmly,
achieved,
"What?"
Mo Jingli would be
Lei Tengfen
useless.
couldn't help but
Whether
cry
Mo
out.
Jingli
He really didn't
won or
expect
lost,
that
even
even
the Yan
Yanwang
Wang
Chamber's
Chamber's
Pavilion
palace.
Master,
If
couldn't
Jinan
kill
Palace
Yili.
won against the Prince
His father
Ding
had
Mansion,
clearly said
then
that
it would be
Ling
best
Taihan's
if
martial
Mo
arts
Jingli
were
lost.
very likely above
After
his.
that,
How could he
Jinan
not be able
Palace
to
would be
kill
the biggest
Yili,
winner.
whose
If
martial
Jinan
arts weren't
Palace
first
lost,
class?
then
Ling
Mo
Taihan turned
Jingli
around
couldn't be left
and
alive.
glanced at the shocked
He would
man
become a
behind him.
huge
Lei
threat to
Tengfen
Jinan
only
Palace.
felt his scalp
After
go numb.
thinking for a moment,
But he still had to
Lei
resist
Tengfen
Ling
raised his
Taihan's
head
pressure
and
and
said,
"I
Pavilion
understand.
Master Ling,
Go back
you
and
clearly
report to
promised
my
my father.
I will leave this
I said I'll do
battlefield
my
as
best.
soon as possible. Tell my
Ling
father
Taihan
to take
interrupted
care of
him
himself."
and said,
The guard
"I've already
nodded
done my
and
best,
respectfully left.
but
Your
the
subordinate
martial
will
arts
take
of
his
Yi
leave."
Li and the
In the
people
tent,
around her.
Lei Tengfen
was
was
silent
silent
for
for
a
a
long
long
time.
time.
Then
Sickly
he said,
Scholar
"Come."
glanced at Lei
A man who
Tengfen
looked like a
and
guard
said,
appeared at the door.
"Can't you see that
Crown
big brother
Prince
is
sent
already
a letter
injured?
to Princess
If you think
Ding
that
for
anyone
me.
can catch
I
up
want
to
to talk
Yi
to her,
Li
Lei Tengfen
and
said,
kill her."
after
A trace
fighting
of
with
surprise
Mu Qing
flashed
Song.
through the guard's
"Why
eyes.
are you still looking for
But he
Big
still
Brother?"
replied
Mu
respectfully.
Qing Song, your
Lei
subordinate
Tengfen's heart
obeys.
sank. About
Even if
10
they were
miles
scheming,
away from the camps
they
of
didn't
the two
expect
armies,
that there would be another
Yi Li
Mu
was sitting
Qing
by a
Song.
small stream.
The former
She
number
was
one
leisurely
expert of
watching
the
the
Shu
stream
State.
flow by.
After being
Her
silent
expression
for
was
nearly 10
calm.
years,
On the
the
grass
first
by
thing
the
he
stream,
did when he
new
reappeared
green
was
shoots
to
had
ruin the
sprouted from
Prince
the
Ding
withered yellow
Mansion's
weeds.
important
It
matter.
added a trace of
But
warmth, seeing
and
the
hope
three
to the
people
desolate scene.
leisurely stroll.
Qin Feng
and
even
Zhuge
Lei
stood
Tengfen
side by
felt
side,
uncomfortable in
not
his heart,
far behind
no
Yili.
matter how good
They were
his temper
both
was.
thinking about their
With
own
Ling
matters.
Taihan like this,
Suddenly,
who would believe
Qin
that he didn't
Feng
go
and
easy?
Zhuge Jing
Perhaps
looked at the forest
because Lei
behind them.
Tengfen's expression
Qin
was
Feng
too
said,
obvious.
Crown Prince
Ling
Lei,
Taihan frowned
since you're
and
here,
looked at Lei Tengfen
why don't you come
and
out
said,
and meet us?
Lei Tengfen,
Princess Ding
do you
sighed
think
is
that because I'm
indeed
injured,
filled with
I
experts.
won't dare to kill you?
I am impressed.
Lei Tengfen's
Lei Tengfen
expression
walked out of the
changed
forest
slightly
and said with a
He
smile.
lowered his eyes
Yili
and
stood
said,
up. She
"This
turned
little
around
nephew
and said
doesn't
with a
dare.
smile,
Since it's
Crown
like
Prince
this,
Lei
this little
is
nephew
also a
will
rare
take
expert.
his leave."
Unlike
Ling
Yi Li,
Taihan didn't comment,
who doesn't have any
and
skills
only said,
and can
"Go
only bring a
back
few
and tell
people
Lei
with her to
Jinting that I've
avoid any
repaid the
accidents.
favor I owe him."
Lei Tengfen's
In the
mouth
future,
twitched.
it's time
If
to
this
resolve
woman in
the
front of
grudge
him
between
didn't
this
have
lord
any
and him.
skills,
Then
Lei
there weren't many
Tengfen
people in the
said
world who could.
quietly. At the same
This
time,
little nephew
Lei
will
Tengfen was
definitely
also
pass
surprised
the
by Yi
message to
Li's
father.
caution. Lei
Goodbye.
Tengfen rarely
Lei
fought,
Tengfen
and there were
said
not many people
quietly,
in the world who
"This little
understood
nephew
the depth of his
will
skills.
definitely pass
But
the
Yili did
message
not
to
forget
father.
that he had
Goodbye.
a father who was
Although
one of
he
the
didn't
top
know what
4
kind of
experts in
grudge
the
there was
world.
between father
Lei
and
Tingfeng's
Ling
talent was
Taihan.
not bad.
As long as there were no
that
accidents,
the reason why
Lei Tingfeng's martial
really
arts
caused
would
trouble
not be
for Jinan
bad.
Palace
Was
Wang
because
Fei
Ling
is
Taihan
joking.
owed
When
father
encountering
a great favor
Wang
back
Fei.
then. Otherwise,
It is always other
as long
people
as
who
Ling
have
Taihan
accidents.
chose to
Lei
support the
Tingfeng
emperor
said
with
with
a
a faint
feeling,
smile.
coupled with the power
Yili
of
did
the
not care
Yanhuang
about
Chamber
his
of
hidden
Commerce.
mockery.
He could
She
give
smiled
Jinan Palace
faintly
a
and
headache.
said, "Now that the two armies are at war, Crown Prince Lei has privately requested to see Yili."
Chapter
Is it to mock
989.
Yili?
However,
Lei Tingfeng
in the
smiled
eyes of someone like
faintly
Ling
and said,
Taihan, there was
Wang
obviously
Fei
no
is
such
straightforward
thing as
This
erasing
Shitsi will
grudges.
not be long.
Once the favor was
This one knows
repaid,
that Wang
it was
Fei
time to
is in a
collect the
hurry
debt.
to go to Cold
At this
Valley
moment,
Pass to
Lei
meet
Tingfeng
with
couldn't
General
help
Yinte,
but wonder
right?
if his father
Yili
and he
nodded
made a
slightly.
mistake in
Some
asking
things on
Ling
a
Taihan
battlefield
to deal with
could be
Yili.
hidden,
After
but some
bidding
things could
farewell
not be
to
hidden
Ling
from
Taihan,
others.
at
Lei
least
Tingfeng
the
rushed
current
back to the
movements of
Shilling
the
army
Mahist army
without
could
stopping.
not be hidden
Lei
from
Jinting
people
saw
like
his
Lei Tingfeng.
defeated expression and couldn't help but sigh. Without waiting for Lei Tingfeng to speak, he asked, "Ling Taihan failed?" Lei Tingfeng nodded. "Father,
Ling Taihan deliberately let Yili go? Lei Jinting asked with an ugly expression. Although he had considered this possibility when he went to find Ling Taihan had always been a man of his words, and there really wasn't a more suitable candidate than him. He could only choose to believe in Ling Taihan. Lei Tingfeng said with some uncertainty. Ling Taihan was also injured. It was the missing number 1 master of Dechu State, Ling Taihan, who blocked Ling Taihan. The two fought fiercely for an entire night. By the time the victor was decided at dawn, Yi Li and the others had already entered the area controlled by the Prince Ding mansion. He didn't know whether Ling Taihan had gone easy on them or not, but at least Ling Taihan wasn't that enthusiastic about killing Yi Li. Mu Qingtsong? Lei Jinting frowned. Ridiculous. Yi Li had just destroyed the house of Marquis Muyang. Why would Mu Qingtsong save her? Lei Tingfeng said, I sent someone to investigate. The one who suddenly appeared to block Ling Taihan's sword was indeed Mu Qingtsong. After the two fought, Mu Qingtsong was seriously injured and took away an old man from the Prince Ding mansion. According to my subordinate's report, it was very likely the old Marquis Muyang, Mu Jingmin. Originally, Ling Taihan almost killed Yi Li. At this point, Lei Tingfeng also felt a little regretful. Although he admired Yi Li's ability and intelligence, they were still enemies. How could Lei Tingfeng not secretly grieving after losing an opportunity to get rid of such a powerful enemy? Lei Jinting shook his head. God's will. As long as Emo Xiaoyao really couldn't make it, so be it if Yi Li lived. What we should pay attention to now is the situation on the battlefield. Lei Tingfeng nodded and put away the slight depression in his heart. He said in a low voice, Father is right. Now Emo Xiaoyao is seriously injured and can't come out. But looking at the Mahist army's performance these days, Emo Xiaoyao is probably seriously injured. Otherwise, Feng Xiao wouldn't be in a hurry to get Princess Ding back. These days, the Mahist army was no longer as elusive as before on the battlefield, making people tired of dealing with them. It was obvious that the commander had changed. Emo Xiaoyao was seriously injured to the point where he couldn't even manage the military affairs. This was definitely good news for West Hill. Mo Jingli's hundreds of thousands of reinforcements have also arrived in the north. I'm afraid they are preparing to counterattack. As long as we take down the Mahist army here as soon as possible, Lu Jingxian won't be able to come back as reinforcements. Lei Tingfeng said. At the mention of Mo Jingli, Lei Jinting frowned slightly and said, Let him do what he wants. This is the only use he has. But, Tongfeng, Mo Jingli is a narrow-minded person who seeks revenge for the smallest grievance. This time, he will definitely hold a grudge in his heart. If you encounter him on the battlefield, be careful of him. If necessary, think of a way to get rid of him. Father? Lei Tingfeng was startled. He looked at Lei Jinting with a faint sense of uneasiness. Although his father usually taught him a lot of things, he didn't tell him how to deal with the ruler of country. Lei Jinting smiled faintly and said, You are not young anymore. You should have taken charge long ago. When this battle is over, Jinan Palace will be handed over to you. Father. Lei Tingfeng was shocked. He looked at Lei Jinting worriedly. Lei Jinting smiled unconcernedly and waved his hand, saying, Forget it. Let's not worry about these things for now. We must pay attention to the defense of Yuming Pass. After all, in the eyes of the Mahist army, we are the true enemy. If there really is a crisis, Lu Jingxian might give up on Mo Jingli's side and come back with reinforcements. Even if they didn't want to admit it, the Mahist army's enmity towards the Chu army was not as great as their enmity towards the Shi Ling army. Even on the battlefield, the Mahist army and the Chu army's clashes were not as intense as the Shi Ling army's clashes. It wasn't that Lu Jingxian's army wasn't strong enough. It was that both sides still recognized that they were once a family. Therefore, if there really was a crisis at the Prince Ding mansion, Lu Jingxian would most likely give up on everything except Yuming Pass and attack the Shilling army instead. Lei Tingfeng nodded and said, I understand. Lei Jinting nodded with satisfaction and said, Forget it. Go and do your work. Lei Tingfeng thought for a while and asked, Father, Did you already know that Ling Taihan couldn't kill Yili? When he came back to report, although his father was a little unhappy, he wasn't very surprised or angry. Lei Jinting shook his head and said, "It would be best if he could kill her. It doesn't matter if he couldn't." Lei Tingfeng looked at Lei Jinting in confusion and frowned. All these years, it was because Ling Taihan owed his father a favor that he didn't do anything to the Lord of Jinnan's mansion. Now that he had returned the favor, wouldn't the Lord of Jinnan's mansion have one more enemy? Lei Jinting sighed and said, "Even if this didn't happen, I would still think of a way to make him repay that favor." Children are slow. Lei Tingfeng really didn't understand his father's thoughts. "Silly child, Ling Taihan owes me a favor, not you." In Ling Taihan's heart, there was no such thing as erasing the grudge between the two sides, nor was there such a thing as extending the favor to the next generation. However, most of the people who had wronged Ling Taihan in the past were still living under the protection of Jinan Palace. Either he killed Ling Taihan before he died, or he killed all these people before he died. Otherwise, Ling Taihan would still find trouble with Lei Tingfeng in the future. However, neither of these options were very realistic. Lei Tingfeng left in confusion. When he reached the door, he paused and suddenly understood his father's meaning. Lei Tingfeng frowned and gritted his teeth, but he didn't go back in. As expected, he wasn't strong enough. That was why his father was so worried about him. Chapter 990. By the time Yi Li's group arrived at Feihong Pass, it was already the night of the second day. Feng Jiao was already waiting outside Feihong Pass to welcome them. Seeing Yi Li's return, Feng Jiao clearly heaved a sigh of relief. "Princess, you're finally back." Seeing Feng Jiao's expression, Yi Li's heart sank slightly. She asked what happened. Feng Jiao sighed. The prince was ambushed by someone from Infinite Boundless Mountain. How could he be so easily ambushed? Yi Li raised her eyebrows and asked. Putting aside how high Mo Xiuyao's martial arts, Mo Xiuyao had clearly obtained the list of Infinite Boundless Mountain spies in the Prince Ding mansion a long time ago. How could he still be ambushed? Feng Jiao helplessly smiled bitterly. "We were careless. That person suddenly made a move and almost injured the little prince. The prince was also doing this for." Seeing Yi Li's expression change, Feng Jiao hurriedly said, "Don't worry, princess. The little prince was not injured." Seeing the unconcealable fatigue on Feng Jiao's handsome face, Yi Li nodded and said, "You've also worked hard these days. How is Xiuyao?" Feng Jiao frowned and said, Princess, let's go back and talk." Returning to Feihong Pass, because most of the soldiers still did not know that something had happened to Prince Ding, they naturally did not know that Princess had suddenly returned. Those who came to welcome Yi Li were only Yuan Pei, the Southern Marquis, and Murongshan. Mo Xiuyao was temporarily staying in the general's mansion in Feihong Pass. The group of people returned to the mansion and went straight to Mo Xiuyao's courtyard. Entering the room, Yi Li saw everything in front of her and could not help but be stunned. She turned back to look at Feng Jiao and asked, "What happened?" There was indeed a person lying on the bed, covered with a thick blanket that covered most of his face. Only a head of snow-white hair was exposed. Even though Yi Li didn't walk in, she could tell that the person on the bed wasn't Mo Xiuyao. Feng Jiao smiled bitterly. When the person on the bed heard Yi Li's voice, he suddenly sat up and got off the bed. His handsome face scrunched up tightly as he said to Yi Li, "You're finally back. I've been lying here every day, pretending to be dead. I'm so tired." "Han Mingxi?" Yi Li raised her eyebrows, her cold gaze sweeping over Feng Jiao and the others. Feng Jiao said in a low voice, "Prince is missing." "Missing?" Yi Li frowned as she stared at Feng Jiao. Even though she wasn't angry, Feng Jiao felt his scalp go numb. When Wang Fei was truly angry, her power was no less than Prince's. Bracing himself, he nodded. Feng Jiao hurriedly recounted what had happened. Originally, that day, the playful and naughty Mo Xiaobao had been kidnapped. The other party had left a letter for Mo Xiuyao to go alone. Otherwise, they couldn't guarantee Mo Xiaobao's safety.
Mo Xiao naturally could not allow Mo Xiaobao to be harmed, so he went alone to the agreed-upon location. By the time Feng Jiao and the others found the place, they only saw Mo Xiaobao, who was unconscious with his acupoint sealed and the ground full of blood and corpses, but there was no trace of Mo Xiao. After that, Feng Jiao and the others secretly ordered people to search the area within 100 li radius, but they didn't even see Mo Xiao's shadow. Helpless, they could only pretend that Mo Xiao was injured. At least, they had to make people think that Prince Ding was still in the army. Yi Li frowned. Feng Jiao's narration sounded very normal, but made her feel that something was wrong. It was too logical. How did Xiao deal with the name list that I sent back? Name list? Feng Jiao frowned, then remembered. Last time, when Wang Fei went to Jiangnan, she sent someone to send back the name list. Prince looked at it and kept it. Afterwards, he was busy with the war in the northern tribes. Prince he didn't seem to have seen Mo Xiao deal with this matter. If Yi Li's most trusted people were Qin Feng and Zhu Jing, then Mo Xiao's most trusted aide was Feng Jiao. If even Feng Jiao didn't know, that meant that Mo Xiao indeed didn't deal with this matter. But this was clearly illogical. Infinite Boundless Mountain had planted spies in the Mahist army. Ignoring them was definitely not Mo Xiao's style. Unless he had other uses for them. Han Mingxi laughed mockingly. Some people like to think themselves clever and ended up making a fool of themselves. Mingxi, Han Mingwei, who had just entered, had just happened to hear Han Mingxi's words, as she said rather helplessly. Glancing at Yi Li's furrowed brows, Han Mingwei also knew that now was not the time for jokes. She said rather apologetically, "June, Princess, I didn't." Yi Li tugged at the corner of her lips lightly, saying with a mild smile, "I understand. Young Master Mingwei, is there any news?" Han Mingwei shook her head, frowning. According to the news from various sources, apart from ourselves, neither Mo Jingli nor Lei Jinting know that Xiaoyao has gone missing. This also means that Mo Jingli's spy did not return. It is possible that he is already dead or has escaped. In comparison, the possibility of him being dead was higher. If he was still alive, it was impossible for him not to return to find Mo Jingli and then report the news of Mo Xiaoyao. If he had succeeded, there would be even less of a need for him to escape. After killing Prince Ding, Mo Xiaoyao, Mo Jingli's reward would be enough for him to live in luxury for several lifetimes. Moreover, if he escaped alone, he would have to face the pursuit of the Prince Ding mansion. Where could he escape to? Now, whether it was Mo Xiaoyao or this spy, they did not have any news of them. Yi Li thought for a moment before asking, "Who is that person?" Feng Jiao's expression was somewhat ugly as he said, "He is Prince Ding's bodyguard, a member of the Shadow Guard." Prince Ding's martial arts were extremely high, and the amount of time he needed to accompany the Shadow Guard was almost negligible. Furthermore, Mo Xiaoyao had many experts by his side, and there was no need for him to personally train his subordinates like Yi Li. Therefore, compared to the current status of Zhu Jing and the others, the Shadow Guard by Mo Xiaoyao's side could almost be said to be inconspicuous to the extreme. After the role of the Shadow Guard was gradually taken over by Qi Lin, these Shadow Guards were even less noticed. Even so, however, the Shadow Guard was still an extremely important force of the Prince Ding Mansion. Compared to the Mahist Army and the Black Cloud Cavalry, they were even more important because they were closer to Prince Ding in the shadows than the army. Who would have thought that Infinite Boundless Mountain would actually be able to insert someone into the Shadow Guard? Fortunately, Infinite Boundless Mountain had already been destroyed. Otherwise, it would have been even more disadvantageous for the Prince Ding Mansion. "Tell Mo Hua to come see me," Yi Li said in a low voice. "You all go and rest. These few days have been tiring. If there is anything, we can talk about it tomorrow." Everyone looked somewhat worriedly at Yi Li. These few days had indeed not been easy for them. However, having traveled for 2 days and 2 nights, the expression of the princess consort was even more unsightly. Han Mingwei and Feng Jiao exchanged glances. Feng Jiao nodded, saying, Yes, we will take our leave. Princess consort, you should also rest well. Yili nodded, not saying anything else. Everyone quietly retreated, leaving her sitting alone under the lamp, lost in thought. Mother, it was already late at night, but the study was still very quiet, with only the occasional soft sound of candlelight bursting. Yili sat alone behind the desk, her brows lowered as she pondered. From the door of the room came some whispers. Yili raised her head and looked over. Emo Xiaobao was wearing a moon-white inner garment, not even wearing an outer garment as he stood at the door, staring at her. Chapter 991. Although it was the beginning of spring, there was no warmth in the northwest whether it was day or night. Yi Li's eyes darkened. She quickly got up and took the cloak from the side to wrap him up. The adult's cloak was draped over Xiaobao's body and immediately wrapped around him. Yi Li carried him to the side with some difficulty and sat down. Why didn't you put on the cloak properly before running out? Mother, Emo Xiaobao looked at Yi Li, his big round eyes flashing with tears. He sobbed, Mother, Xiaobao didn't do it on purpose. Woo, Xiaobao didn't do it on purpose. Xiaobao knows he was wrong, Mother. Why are you crying? Yi Li raised her hand to gently wipe away the tears hanging on his face. She raised her hand to rub his pink little face and said, Mother knows it's not your fault. Don't be afraid. Your father will be fine. He will be back soon. Emo Xiaobao sniffled and said seriously, Father is back. Xiaobao won't make father angry anymore. Mother, Xiaobao will be good in the future. Yi Li lowered her head and kissed her son's forehead. Mother knows that Xiaobao is a good child. Don't be afraid. Nothing will happen. Emo Xiaobao was smarter than most children. This meant that he knew a lot more than other children his age. Although Feng Jiao and the others didn't say anything in front of him, they didn't even tell him about Emo Xiaoyao's disappearance. But he already knew. It was just that these days, everyone in Ding Palace who knew the situation was worried and busy. No one paid attention to his movements. He also did not tell anyone anything. But no matter how smart he was still a child. Now that his mother was back, he couldn't hold back anymore. He didn't even wear his outer clothes and quietly avoided the shadow guard and ran to the study to find Yi Li. Emo Xiaobao sat in Yi Li's arms, his big watery eyes filled with worry. Mother, will father really be all right? Yi Li faintly smiled. Don't worry, nothing will happen. It's already very late. Xiaobao, go back and sleep, okay? Emo Xiaobao raises his hand to rub his eyes. Xiaobao will accompany Mother. All right, Mother still has something to do. If you're sleepy, why don't you sleep for a while? Yi Li carefully adjusted the cloak on his body and softly said. After Emo Xiaobao nodded in agreement, he sat in Yi Li's arms and looked at the booklet in Yi Li's hand with wide eyes. In the past few days, Emo Xiaoyao had suddenly disappeared. Many matters had piled up in the Mahist army that Emo Xiaoyao or Yi Li had to deal with personally. Yi Li looked at two booklets and then looked down to see that Emo Xiaobao had already closed his eyes and fallen asleep. In the past few days, it wasn't only the adults who had been frightened and tired. Children's hearts were even more sensitive, so Emo Xiaobao was also very tired. Sitting in his mother's arms, he quickly fell asleep. This subordinate Emo Hua requests an audience with Wang Fei. At the door, Emo Hua's faint voice came. The brush in Yi Li's hand paused. Putting down the brush, she softly said, Come in. Emo Hua walked in. Seeing Emo Xiaobao in Yi Li's arms, she was also stunned. Wang Fei, little Shitsi. Yi Li waved her hand and said, Wait. Picking up Emo Xiaobao, she turned and went to the room in the study to rest. Putting him on the bed and covering him with a blanket, Yi Li turned to look at Emo Hua and asked, You brought Mu Qing Song? A trace of surprise flashed through Emo Hua's eyes. She said in a deep voice, This subordinate was a step late and frightened Wang Fei. Wang Fei, please punish me. Yi Li shook her head. Looking at her, she asked, Where did the prince go? This subordinate doesn't know. Emo Hua lowered her eyes. You don't know? Yi Li raised her eyebrows and looked at Emo Hua with a smile that wasn't a smile. If you don't know, How did you know to bring Mu Song to save me? As far as I know, there aren't many people who know Mu Song's whereabouts and can ask him in advance. Among them shouldn't include Commander Mo. In addition, the place where Mu Song is in seclusion is 3 days away from the place where Ling Taihan tried to kill me. From Feihong Pass, it would take more than 2 days to get there. In other words, before the prince was injured, you had already set off. Commander Mo, did you know in advance that the prince would go missing and this consort would be killed by Ling Taihan when she returned? In this world, there weren't many people who could deal with Yi Li and Qi Lin. If it wasn't for Ling Taihan or Lei Jinting personally taking action, there was no need to trouble Mu Song. Even the current Lei Jinting might not be able to do it. Therefore, if there wasn't extremely accurate information or premeditation, Mo Hua wouldn't have time to find Mu Song to save her. Mo Hua was silent. Yi Li looked at him calmly and nodded. I understand. You just need to tell me, is Xiao Yao still alive? Shake your head or nod your head. Although Mo Hua was a bit arrogant, he was a person who abided by the rules. If it wasn't for the fact that he really couldn't say it, he wouldn't refuse Yi Li with such a silent attitude. After a long while, Mo Hua finally nodded slightly. Yi Li heaved a sigh of relief. She was obviously relieved. No matter what, Mo Xiaoyao being alive was the best news. No one knew that even though Yi Li already had some speculations in her heart, when she was waiting for Mo Hua to nod his head, her heart still felt like it was being ruthlessly grasped by someone. She didn't even dare to imagine what would happen to her if Mo Hua's answer wasn't what she thought it would be. Yi Li nodded lightly. Mo Hua didn't want to say more because Mo Xiaoyao ordered him not to. Although she was a bit unhappy that Mo Xiaoyao hid things from her, Yi Li also knew that many things were very important to keep secret. After all, even if she had already gotten the list of names that Dongfang Yu gave to Mo Jingli, but who could guarantee that Dongfang Yu really gave them all? Where did Mu Song go? After confirming that Mo Xiaoyao was fine, Yi Li was in the mood to pay attention to other things. When she spared Mu Song's life back then, she really didn't think that she would be saved by him one day. And Mo Hua respectfully said, Mr. Mu took Marquis Mu Yang and left. What Mo Hua didn't say was that Mu Song's injury was quite serious. He probably wouldn't be able to recover to his current level within 10 years. However, in Mo Hua's view, Mu Song's injury was very valuable to be able to let Wang Fei safely escape from the Yanwang Chamber's master. Ling Taihan. Yi Li frowned. Now that Mo Xiaoyao wasn't here, if Ling Taihan continued to oppose them, it would be very troublesome. Then Yi Li had to find a way to get rid of him first. Even after experiencing a life and death situation, Yi Li still didn't have much malice towards Ling Taihan and didn't want to become enemies with him. It wasn't just because of the friendship between her eldest brother and him. In fact, Yi Li also knew that Ling Taihan didn't intend to kill her. Even if Mu Song didn't feel it that day, in the end, she was most likely to be seriously injured and taken away by Ling Taihan. With Ling Taihan's strength, if he really wanted to kill her, there were many opportunities. And Mo Hua said, Ling Taihan only promised Lei Jinting to kill Wang Fei on her way back to Feihong Pass. Since Wang Fei has returned, Ling Taihan won't make a move anymore. Moreover, according to the news from below, Ling Taihan has already brought people back to Yanwang Chamber. And this time, Yanwang Chamber didn't have no losses. To stop Qi Lin, the most powerful person in the Mahist army, even if it was only for a short while, Yanwang Chamber paid a heavy price. In the next few years, Yanwang Chamber wouldn't be able to deal with assassins anymore, unless Ling Taihan, Lung Luiwei, and Sickly Scholar personally made a move. Chapter 992. Yi Li nodded in satisfaction and said, Very good. You can go back and rest. And Mo Hua respectfully nodded. This subordinate bids farewell. Watching as Mo Hua closed the door and left, Yi Li looked at the flickering candlelight in front of her. A cold smile appeared on her beautiful face. Mo Xiaoyao, have you become addicted to playing games? In a mysterious stronghold in the Prince Ding mansion, The white-robed and white-haired Prince Ding lazily leaned on the bed as he played with a simple and elegant green jade hairpin in his hand. There was a thick layer of white muslin wrapped around his casually draped outer robes. His handsome face was slightly pale, but his energy was very good. Looking at the green jade hairpin in his hand, Imo Xiaoyao sighed regretfully. Yili had returned, but he could not go back to see her. It was too annoying. Achoo! His Highness Prince Ding sneezed in an unglamorous manner as he tugged at the outer robe on his body in confusion. With his martial skills, even if he did not wear clothes, he should not feel cold. Did he catch a cold? The next morning, everyone came early to the study to request an audience with Yili. Even though Wang Fei had returned, there was still no news of the prince. The situation on the battlefield was starting to develop in a direction that was not in their favor. This caused the generals to stay up all night and head to Yi Li's courtyard early in the morning. A short while later, Yi Li came out holding Imo Xiaobao's hand. Imo Xiaobao was dressed in an inky robe embroidered with dragons. Even though he still appeared very young, his extraordinarily handsome face was tense and he looked like a little adult. "Everyone sit," Yi Li said faintly and led Imo Xiaobao to the main seat. Looking at Imo Xiaobao sitting next to Yi Li, Feng Jiao suddenly had a bad feeling. He hesitated before asking, "Wang Fei, this little Shitsi." Feng Jiao wanted to say that they were discussing important matters, and it was not appropriate for the little Shitsi to be here. What if mentioning the prince scared the little Shitsi? Yi Li said, "No need. I've already told you, Chen. He knows what to do." Everyone looked at each other and exchanged looks. Everyone knew that the prince never called the little Shitsi by his full name. Wang Fei, who had insisted in the end, was assimilated by the prince and called the little Shitsi by his nickname. When the princess called out Mo Yuchen's name, it meant that she had made a serious decision. Mo Xiaobao had a handsome face, and he nodded seriously. Feng Jiao's mouth twitched, and he asked, "Wang Fei, what do you mean?" Yi Li said faintly, "Spread the news that Prince Ding's injury has worsened. Send a letter to Li City and ask Mr. Shun to come over as soon as possible. Half a month later, hold the funeral for the prince." Everyone looked in shock at Princess Ding, who was dressed in green and had an indifferent expression. Feng Jiao stuttered, "Wang Fei, this subordinate feels that. Prince, Mo Xiaoyao was that unkillable thing." Even if there was no news now, Feng Jiao would at most guess that he was unlucky and broke his leg again and couldn't crawl back. But he never thought that he would die like this. Moreover, it was hard to accept that Wang Fei, who had always been deeply in love with Mo Xiaoyao, would say something like this. He is seriously injured and unconscious. What's the difference between that and death? Let's do it this way, Yi Li said. Han Minghua looked at Yi Li and raised her eyebrows. She stopped Han Mingxi, who wanted to speak, and said, "Holding a funeral is indeed a good choice. It will be easier to believe if Mr. Shun comes over. I think that neither Mo Jingli nor Jinim of Gojoseon will doubt it." After she said this, everyone suddenly realized that they had missed something. Wang Fei's arrangement didn't mean that Wang Fei believed that the prince was dead, but she wanted others to believe that the prince was dead. Feng Jiao's heart moved. He looked at Yi Li and said, "Wang Fei, you have the prince's whereabouts?" Yi Li shook her head regretfully and said, "Let's not care about the prince for now. Withdraw all the people we sent out to find him. What we need to do now is to stabilize the current situation." Marquis Nin? Marquis Nin stood up and said respectfully, "Previously, our army had fought with the Shilling army several times. Thanks to the prince's divine art of war, our army had always won more than lost. However, ever since the prince, Lei Jinting's attacks have suddenly become much stronger. Our army has found it difficult to deal with. Although the Mahist army was valiant, the Shilling army wasn't bad either. Not to mention that the Shilling army's numbers were far greater than the Mahist armies. Originally, when Mo Xiaoyao was here, they didn't feel anything. Once Mo Xiaoyao was gone, the Mahist army's disadvantage was immediately exposed." Yi Li nodded and said, "You don't have to blame yourselves. It has been hard on you these days. Now that the Shilling army is strong, We don't have to fight them head-on. Let's try to avoid them. Wang Fei, what do you mean? Murong Shen asked. Yi Li said, avoid their sharp points and attack their weak points. Generals, let's split up and fight for ourselves. Feihong Pass will still be guarded by me and General Yuan Pei. Feihong Pass had been constantly strengthened by the Mahist army for more than 10 years. The degree of easy to defend and difficult to attack was definitely not inferior to the Cold Valley Pass, which was known as the impregnable pass of the Central Plains. The Mahist army really didn't have the chips to fight the Shilling army head-on now. But Wang Fei, if Lei Jinting tries his best to attack Feihong Pass, I'm afraid that you and General Yuan, Yi Li smiled and said, so you have to make him unable to do his best. I believe that this is what the Mahist army and the Black Cloud cavalry are good at. In addition, you don't have to worry about Feihong Pass. We have a batch of interesting things that will soon arrive at Feihong Pass. If Lei Jinting still wants to break through Feihong Pass, he can only use human lives to make up for it. I also want to know how many Shilling soldiers he is willing to sacrifice to attack Feihong Pass. Although they were a little curious about what the Wang Fei meant by interesting things. But looking at Yi Li's calm appearance, they couldn't help but feel relieved. They cupped their hands and said in unison, we obey. Chapter 993. Perhaps it was because Yi Li's reputation in the Mahist army was already high enough, or perhaps it was because all of the Mahist army's generals were extremely calm and composed. After the news of Mo Shuyao's heavy injuries spread, the Mahist army did not fall into chaos and low morale as Feng Jiao and the others had feared. In fact, 10 days later, when the news of Mo Shuyao's death spread, the entire Mahist army did not have many problems. Instead, all of the soldiers of the Mo family army felt more hatred towards the enemy and shared a common enemy. When they actually received Mo Shuyao's obituary, everyone couldn't help but be stunned. Even Mo Jingli, who had been full of confidence, and Lei Jinting, who had been somewhat worried, could not believe it. No one could believe that Mo Shuyao, the man who had caused everyone to be jealous of him, the man who had controlled half of the world for 10 years, had actually died just like that. Looking at the letter in front of him, Lei Jinting sighed with a complicated expression. Father! Lei Tingfeng stood to the side, looking at Lei Jinting's expression that seemed to be both happy and sad at the same time. Mo Xiaoyao's death was naturally a good thing, but he did not know why his father had such an expression. This made Lei Tingfeng have a bad feeling. Father, but is there a problem with the news of Mo Xiaoyao's death? In reality, Lei Tingfeng also did not dare to believe that Mo Xiaoyao had died just like that. Mo Xiaoyao's cunning and fickleness had also left a deep impression on Lei Tingfeng, so he couldn't help but suspect that Mo Xiaoyao had faked his death. However, he did not understand why Mo Xiaoyao had faked his death. Originally, this war had already been gradually leaning towards the Prince Ding mansion. As long as nothing unexpected happened, even if the stalemate continued for another 2 or 3 years, the Prince Ding mansion's chances of winning were much higher than Jinan Palace's. Mo Xiaoyao's arrival could be said to have completely given up all of their early advantages. Lei Jinting frowned and shook his head. It doesn't seem like it, but we can't do anything about it. Send someone to investigate again. We must confirm whether Mo Xiaoyao is really dead or not. If Mo Xiaoyao had really faked his death, he definitely had a big plan, and they could not let their guard down. However, in the current situation, if he stood still and did nothing, it was impossible for him to give up on this opportunity for nothing. Your son understands. Lei Tingfeng nodded. Of course, he also understood the importance of this matter. Another person who had the same thoughts as Lei Jinting was Mo Jingli, who was far away outside the Cold Valley Pass. In a secret stronghold somewhere in the Prince Ding mansion, Mo Xiaoyao looked at the secret memorial that his subordinate had presented and did not know whether to laugh or cry. Looking at the memorial filled with his own words, he could not help but mutter softly, "Li must be angry. This is terrible." but this is hard to come by. However, since Lily had announced the news of his death, she must have a way to convince others of the authenticity of this news. This was extremely beneficial for his secret plans. As expected, not hiding it from Li was a good decision. If Feng Jiao and the others were in charge of the situation at Feihong Pass right now, they would have made a fool of themselves. This had nothing to do with ability. It was just that Feng Jiao and the others did not have Li's prestige and status. They also did not have the tacit understanding between them and Mo Xiaoyao that did not require words. Prince, the subordinate standing in front of him, looked at the muttering prince in front of him, saying somewhat uncomprehendingly. Mo Xiaoyao's lips curled up in a smile, saying, "The battlefield will be left to Li and Feng San. We should also go and make preparations." To be able to find such an opportunity to leave the battlefield without being suspected was really not easy. After all, his martial arts were really too strong. If there was no explanation for them working together, even if his corpse was placed in front of Lei Jinting would probably think that it was someone else in disguise. Infinite Boundless Mountain, this was really a good excuse. Since that was the case, he naturally had to make use of this opportunity to give Lei Jinting and Mo Jingli a heaven-shaking, earth-shattering gift. "But Prince, your injuries." Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head and glanced at his chest, waving his hand nonchalantly, saying, "What kind of injury is this? It's no big deal. Go." "Yes, your subordinate will take his leave." Prince Ding's passing was a heaven-shaking, earth-shattering matter. Naturally, it cannot be dealt with carelessly. Therefore, as soon as the news spread, the entire Mahist army camp in Feihong Pass were immediately covered in white cloth. Everywhere was covered with white cloth, the entire army wearing mourning clothes. When the commoners near Feihong Pass received the news, they also wore white clothes, many of them even crying out in pain. In this chaotic world, the commoners of the Northwest had always been living peacefully and peacefully. This was all thanks to the protection of the Prince Ding mansion. Now, the commoners' pain was not only because they were worried about their own future, but also because they were mourning and sorrowful for the death of the Prince Ding, Mo Xiaoyao. "Princess, Jinim of Gojoseon of West Hill has come." Within Feihong Pass, Yili was sitting in the study, reading through the tall pile of memorials on the table in front of her. Mo Xiaoyao's sudden death naturally meant that there were countless things to deal with. Whether it was Feihong Pass or the Prince Ding mansion in Glass City, everyone was extremely busy. Su Hongyu, Su Qingshun, and the others in Glass City were also so busy after sending someone to deliver a letter that they did not have any free time. Yili raised her head and looked at Qin Feng, frowning, saying, "Lei Jinting? What's he doing here?" Qin Feng said, "Naturally, he is here to mourn the prince." Even though the two sides were enemies now, Lei Jinting had come to mourn in the name of West Hill. The Mahist army could not do anything to him. Casually putting the memorials to one side, Yili stood up and said, "Mourn? He is here to investigate, right? I thought he would send Lei Tingfeng." Qin Feng thought for a moment and laughed in a low voice. "Between us subordinates, he is probably afraid that Princess will really kill Lei Tingfeng in a fit of anger." Lei Tingfeng was Lei Jinting's only son, and Lei Jinting was almost 60 now. It was probably too late to raise another son. "Fine, let's go meet him. Get people to prepare. Mo Jingli is probably coming," Yili said. "Mo Jingli?" Qin Feng frowned and said, "Does he dare to come?" Mo Jingli was not a daring person. Going deep into the enemy's camp did not seem like something Mo Jingli would do. Yili walked out as she said, "He should have already received the news. Based on my understanding of Mo Jingli, he will not miss such an opportunity." After all, in Mo Jingli's life, Mo Xiaoyao's death was the first time and possibly the only time. "Understand." Qin Feng nodded and said. In the hall, Lei Jinting sipped his tea while sizing up the entire hall. This mansion was originally the general's mansion in Feihong Pass. It was not particularly big, nor was it very luxurious. After Mo Xiaoyao and the others moved in, they clearly did not put in any effort to decorate. Now that the entire mansion was covered by a plain white cloth, it was even colder and more dignified. Not far away, Feng Jiao, who was in charge of receiving guests, and Leng Haoyu, who had just rushed back from the Chu capital, glared at Lei Jinting with very unfriendly eyes. Being treated like this, Lei Jinting was not angry. He just sat calmly and drank tea. After going to the morning hall to burn incense, Lei Jinting was considering how to personally see Mo Xiaoyao's corpse. In such a heavily guarded mansion, it was obviously not feasible to sneak in and investigate. Chapter 994. This subordinate greets the princess. Yili was wearing a plain white robe, her cloud-like hair casually tied into a simple bun. A white flower was pinned into the bun, making her look even colder and paler. Standing on Yili's left was Mo Xiaobao, who was wearing a black brocade robe and a white muslin robe. As soon as he entered, Mo Xiaobao glared fiercely at Lei Jinting. Looking at Mo Xiaobao, who was glaring at him, Lei Jinting couldn't help but smile. In his heart, he sighed that Mo Xiaoyao had given birth to a good son. Although he was still young, he already had the style of his father. Just by looking at his round and cute eyes that couldn't hide his shrewdness, he knew that this kid was definitely not as cute and obedient as he looked on the surface. Princess Ding, Shitzi, please restrain your grief. Lei Jinting stood up and cupped his hands. Yili nodded slightly and said with a faint smile, I'll have to trouble Jinim of Gojoseon to personally make a trip. Jinim of Gojoseon, please sit. Lei Jinting looked at Yi Li and said with a sincere face, I also feel very sorry for Prince Ding's sudden death. Although the Prince Ding mansion is the enemy of the West Hill, it is also an opponent that I respect. I came this time to mourn Prince Ding and also to discuss the matter of peace with the Prince Ding mansion. Satisfied to see the flash of surprise in Yi Li's eyes, Lei Jinting smiled faintly and didn't say anything. Feng Jiao and Leng Haoyu also stared at Lei Jinting in disbelief. Everyone was well aware of the relationship between the Prince Ding mansion and the West Hill. Once Lei Jinting confirmed that Prince Ding was really gone, he would definitely immediately annex the Prince Ding mansion without hesitation. At this moment, only a fool would believe that he was a gentleman and would not bully a widow and an orphan. Yili raised her eyebrows and looked at Lei Jinting with a faint smile. Peace talks. Lei Jinting nodded and said, That's right. Now that Prince Ding has passed away, I'm sure Princess Ding won't be able to cope for the time being. If the princess agrees, the West Hill is willing to make peace with the Prince Ding mansion. Yili smiled and said, If so, the Prince Ding mansion would be more than happy to oblige. Here, this consort thanks Jinim of Gojoseon. Looking at Yi Li's decent smile, Lei Jinting frowned in his heart. However, there was a trace of exhaustion in her eyes. For a moment, he couldn't tell if Yili was putting on an act or if it was real. Even with his experience in reading people, he couldn't see any flaws in Yi Li. Just now, when he said peace talks, he just wanted to test Yi Li's thoughts and the Chu Jing in the Prince Ding mansion. But Yi Li's attitude made him unable to figure out the situation inside the Prince Ding mansion. Reporting to the princess, the Emperor of Chu is outside the pass asking for an audience. Outside the door, the guard reported loudly. Lei Jinting's eyes flashed slightly, but there was no other expression on his face. He looked sideways at Yili sitting at the head of the table, wanting to see how she planned to deal with it. He heard Yili say indifferently, Emperor Chu has come from afar. Invite him in. Feng San, bring the heir to welcome Emperor Chu. The etiquette of a formal occasion couldn't be neglected because of something. Even though it looked like Jinim of Gojoseon was more powerful than Mo Jingli, Mo Jingli was still the ruler of a country. Sending someone to welcome him was the proper etiquette. This subordinate obeys. Feng Jiao replied in a deep voice. This child obeys. Mo Xiaobao jumped down from the chair next to Yi Li and followed Feng Jiao out. The subordinates of the Prince Ding mansion are truly loyal. Lei Jinting looked at Feng Jiao walking out and said meaningfully, with Feng Jiao's arrogance, Going out to welcome Mo Jingli was enough to show the Prince Ding Mansion's allegiance to Yi Li. It was clear that the Prince Ding Mansion didn't have the slightest bit of chaos in Yi Li's hands. Even if it was true, the loss was only Mo Xiaoyao. Thinking of this, Lei Jinting looked at Yi Li with an even more complicated expression. He secretly regretted that Yi Li had actually escaped Ling Taihan's assassination a few days ago. Lung Haoyu, who was sitting at the side, snorted and said with a smile, "Jinim of Gojoseon is too kind. A loyal subject doesn't serve two masters. We're just doing what we should do." Looking at Lung Haoyu's unkind eyes, Lei Jinting didn't care and smiled faintly. Yi Li glanced at Lung Haoyu with a smile and didn't feel offended at all. Jinim of Gojoseon is right. If it weren't for their help these days, this concubine is really a little powerless. In this case, why doesn't Princess Ding invite young Master Qingshun to preside over the overall situation? Lei Jinting asked. This was also what he was most confused about. Under normal circumstances, if Mo Xiaoyao was really dead, then the Prince Ding Mansion was bound to support Mo Yuchen to take the throne. But now Mo Yuchen was less than 9 years old. Naturally, it was impossible for him to take charge of the Prince Ding Mansion and the Mahist army. Therefore, Yi Li should summon Su Qingxin or Su Hongyu to preside over the overall situation in the Feihong Pass. But now, no one from the Su family appeared, which made Lei Jinting suspicious of Mo Xiaoyao's death. Yi Li smiled bitterly and shook her head. Glass City also needs my eldest brother to preside over the overall situation. What's more, shaking her head, Yi Li didn't say anything more. Undoubtedly, it made people more fanciful. Of course, Lei Jinting knew the importance of the entire Northwest to the Prince Ding Mansion. What's more, after the news of Mo Xiaoyao's death came out, he secretly ordered the troops in Xiling to move to the north. He didn't really want to attack the original emperor of Xiling, but it contained Zhang Qilan's army stationed in the west. There was also the northern tribes. Mo Xiaoyao had just destroyed almost half of the troops of the northern tribes, and a prince had died. Now that he heard the news of Mo Xiaoyao's death, how could the king of the northern tribes not come out to make trouble to save his face? Therefore, at this time, whether the northwest, especially Glass City, could be stabilized was particularly important. As long as the northwest was still there, even if the Mahist army was defeated this time, there was still a place to retreat. When Mo Yuchen grew up in a few years, it was not impossible for the Mahist army to make a comeback. After all, according to Lei Jinting's understanding of the bloodline inheritance of the Prince Ding Mansion, there was almost no doubt that Mo Yuchen could take charge alone when he was a teenager. Of course, Lei Jinting didn't intend to give him this opportunity. Looking at Yi Li's hesitant appearance, Lei Jinting believed the news of Mo Xiaoyao's death even more. Lei Jinting didn't care that Yi Li didn't cry like an ordinary girl, and her beautiful face was pale. After all, Yi Li wasn't an ordinary girl. If she really couldn't control herself at this time, Lei Jinting would suspect her or look down on her. Princess, it's not good." Outside the door, a guard hurried in to report. Yi Li frowned slightly and asked, "What's wrong?" The guard looked at Lei Jinting and said with some difficulty, "Little Prince." Little Prince injured Emperor Chu. Everyone present was stunned. No matter how powerful Mo Xiaobao was, he was only an 8 or 9-year-old child. How could he injure Mo Jingli? The guard saw everyone's doubtful eyes and quickly said, "It's true, Little Prince." Little Prince fiercely bit Emperor Chu. "Is Little Prince okay?" Lung Haoyu quickly asked. He didn't have much hope for Mo Jingli's character. Mo Jingli was a petty person. He wouldn't let Mo Xiaobao off just because he was a child. The guard wiped his sweat and said, "Little Prince is fine, but Little Prince said that he wanted to kill Emperor Chu." Young Master Feng Xin couldn't stop him. "Princess, please go and take a look." Chapter 995. Yi Li lowered her eyes to hide the smile in her eyes. She stood up and said somewhat anxiously to Lei Jinting, "Jinim of Gojoseon, I'm really sorry. This consort will leave first. Enchanting smiled. Wang Fei is too polite. How about I accompany Wang Fei to take a look? Yili hesitated, but in the end, she couldn't resist the worry for her son. She nodded and said, Genom of Gojoseon, please. Wang Fei, please. Yili didn't stand on ceremony with him and hurriedly walked out of the hall. Not far from the Fu's entrance, Mo Jingli's ceremonial guards and the Prince Ding Mansion's guards completely blocked off the narrow street. In the middle of the crowd, Mo Jingli was wearing a bright yellow imperial robe. He was glaring angrily at Mo Xiaobao. There was a bloody wound on his right hand that was placed in front of him. It was clear that the person who had bitten him didn't have any intention of showing mercy. Mo Xiaobao was tightly held in Feng Jiao's arms. But from anger on his little face and the way he was fiercely baring his teeth at Mo Jingli, it was clear that if Feng Jiao hadn't held him tightly, Mo Xiaobao would have immediately charged forward. What happened? Yili walked in from the back of the crowd and asked with a frown. Seeing that Yili had arrived, Feng Jiao clearly let out a sigh of relief. He wasn't afraid that the little Shitzi would bite Mo Jingli, but he was worried that Mo Jingli would hurt Mo Xiaobao in his anger. Nyangqin, Feng Jiao let go of Mo Xiaobao. Mo Xiaobao threw himself into Yi Li's arms, feeling wronged. She rubbed her little face against Yi Li's chest and glared at Mo Jingli with her big round eyes. Her delicate little face was full of grievances, which was very different from the fierce look she had when she was about to pounce on Mo Jingli. Yili held him in her arms and gently patted him. She said softly, What's wrong with Xiaobao? Are you hurt? Mo Xiaobao buried his face in Yi Li's arms and shook his head. Yili heaved a sigh of relief. She patted his little head and said, It's good that you're fine. Be careful. What if you get hurt? He's a bad guy. Xiaobao hates him. Mo Xiaobao said, feeling wronged. His childish voice spread far and wide. Everyone present could not help but glance at Mo Jingli. How bad was he to make the cute little heir of the Prince Ding Mansion hate him so much? Mo Jingli's face immediately darkened. He had almost been bitten by this brat. This brat dared to complain first. Yili, is this how you teach your son? You really don't know the rules. Mo Jingli glared at Yili and said in a cold voice. Yili's eyes darkened slightly. She stood up and looked at Mo Jingli without showing any weakness. She calmly said, How this Fei teaches my son does not need Emperor Chu to care. If Emperor Chu has the time, he should be teaching his own son. Puffed. At the side, Feng Jiao couldn't help but burst out in laughter. Wang Fei had definitely stepped on Mo Jingli's sore spot. Who in the world did not know that King Li was already 30 years old? Not to mention his son. He did not even have a daughter. There were even rumors among the people that King Li had an incurable disease. Of course, Feng Jiao, a confidant of the Prince Ding Mansion, knew better. Because he knew, Feng Jiao almost wanted to sympathize with Mo Jingli. The most painful thing in the world was not to have something, but to have something and then lose it. After regaining it, you found that it was all for naught. Therefore, even if one cursed Mo Jingli 100 times, it would not be as angry as Princess Ding's light words to Mo Jingli. Yili, Mo Jingli shouted harshly. Yili turned around and held Mo Xiaobao's hand to face Mo Jingli. She said in a deep voice, This Fei respects Emperor Chu as the ruler of a country. But if Emperor Chu does not have the slightest etiquette as a guest, then forgive this Fei for not seeing you off. Mo Jingli was so angry that he laughed. He raised his hand and said with a cold smile, Zhen came to offer condolences out of kindness. But just as Zhen closed the door, Zhen was bitten by this brat. Is this how the Prince Ding Mansion treats its guests? Mo Xiaobao stood beside Yili. He raised his delicate little chin and said in a crisp voice, You're not here to offer condolences to father. You're here to cause trouble. People who come to offer condolences to father will not wear clothes like yours. Everyone once again looked at Mo Jingli. Even if Mo Jingli was the emperor, the Prince Ding Mansion status was not inferior to the Chu states. As a guest, they were not required to wear mourning clothes, but they should at least change into plain clothes. They should not be like Mo Jingli, who came in wearing a bright dragon robe. Standing on the side, Lei Jinting, who was wearing a black robe with dark patterns, suddenly felt the Mahist army's eyes looking at him become much friendlier. Mo Jingli's attire did not seem like he was here to offer condolences, but to show off and cause trouble. Mo Jingli was speechless. He really did not come to offer condolences to Mo Xiaoyao. When Mo Xiaoyao died, he wanted to laugh even in his dreams. How could he come to offer condolences? But being exposed by a child in front of so many people, he still felt a bit embarrassed. After a while, Mo Jingli gave a soft snort. He looked at Yi Li and said, "Princess Ding, Jin came from far away. Do you want to stop Jin here?" Yi Li calmly glanced at him and said, "If Emperor Chu truly came to offer condolences to Prince Ding, this consort naturally does not dare to stop you." Mo Jingli proudly said, "Jin naturally came for this reason." Yi Li calmly nodded and said, "Since it's like this, then King Li, please come to the coffin and light a stick of incense." Mo Jingli did not object. He nodded and said, "Perfect. Jin also wants to see Prince Ding's body. After all, we have been friends since childhood. Presumably, Princess Ding will not object, right?" Yi Li was silent for a moment before lightly saying, "Emperor Chu, please." Chapter 996. Mo Jingli's group was quickly led to the morning hall of the general's residence, where Yi Li was temporarily staying. Because it had been placed here temporarily, the morning hall was not large. The entire morning hall was covered by a white cloth and gave people a cold and bleak feeling. Mo Xiaoyao's coffin was placed in the center of the morning hall. There were countless flowers piled around the coffin. In front of the coffin, there was a memorial tablet engraved with the words, "Prince Ding, Mo Xiaoyao's memorial tablet." Standing in the morning hall, both Mo Jingli and Lei Jinting felt a moment of nervousness and excitement. They were about to see Prince Ding's corpse. As his enemy, it was hard not to be excited. Wang Fei. Inside the morning hall, a Jin's eyes were red as he stared warily at Mo Jingli and Lei Jinting in front of him. His gaze towards Mo Jingli was filled with viciousness. If this was not Mo Xiaoyao's morning hall, he would have already leapt forward. Knowing what he had done to Mo Xiaoyao, Mo Jingli felt slightly guilty under a Jin's stare and couldn't help but take a step back. But he quickly became happy again. No matter what he had done, Mo Xiaoyao was dead. After so many years of fighting, he had won in the end. Also, Mo Jingli looked disdainfully at Jin. Just based on this little fool who had followed Mo Xiaoyao since childhood, it would not be easy for him to kill him. Yi Li said coolly, "Emperor Chu and Jinim of Gojoseon want to open the coffin to see Prince." Jin stilled and then glared viciously at Mo Jingli. "No, the prince has already been placed in the coffin. How can it be open again? And he..." What Ajin wanted to say was that he was the murderer of the prince, so how could he allow him to disturb the prince's rest? Lei Jinting understood Jin's thoughts. He took a step forward and said with a smile, "And the others really want to send Prince Ding off. Why don't you let me take a look at Prince Ding, so as not to disturb Prince Ding's peace? What does Wang Fei think?" Yi Li frowned. Her expression was clearly displeased, but she did not object. Mo Jingli didn't object. Although it was a pity that he couldn't see Mo Xiaoyao's corpse with his own eyes, the most important thing right now was to confirm whether Mo Xiaoyao was dead or alive. He believed that Lei Jinting had no reason to lie to him about this matter. Yi Li gently patted Jin's shoulder and said softly, "Let them see the prince, then they won't disturb him again." Jin looked at Yi Li. Ever since Mo Xiaoyao had passed away, other than his uncle, Yi Li was the person Jin trusted the most. Even his fiancée Qin Shuang was ranked behind her. Hearing Yi Li's words, Jin glared fiercely at Mo Jingli. He walked over and carefully pushed the lid of the coffin over. because it needed to be sent back to Glass City before it could be buried. The lid of the coffin had not been nailed shut yet. Ajin only pushed it lightly, and it was pushed open. Mo Jingli and Jenim of Gojoseon didn't mind Ajin's rudeness at all, because their thoughts were on the open coffin. Lei Jinting took a few steps forward and smelled a strong fragrance. This was a kind of perfume used by nobles to preserve their corpses. Usually, only nobles above the rank of prince could use it. There was also the fragrance of Phoebe Jinan wood. Lei Jinting couldn't help but frown slightly. Inside the coffin, a white-haired man dressed in a white robe embroidered with silver dragons and clouds lay quietly. Even though the weather was still cold, the coffin had a preservative perfume, and the coffin itself was still placed on a large piece of ice. Therefore, the corpse hadn't changed much. If it wasn't for the fact that it was deathly pale, it could even be said to be lifelike. Lei Jinting's sharp eyes saw that there was another scar on a man's right hand that was exposed to the air. Even though it had been carefully treated, it was still clearly visible. Thinking about the information he had received from Mo Jingli, Lei Jinting stared at the man's unusually handsome face and frowned. He finally raised his hand and reached into the coffin. Jenim of Gojoseon, what are you doing? Standing at the side, Yili saw his actions and asked in displeasure. Lei Jinting smiled faintly and said, I see that Prince Ding's sleeve is slightly untidy. I have been rude. Lei Jinting calmly pulled on the white sleeve and turned to smile apologetically at Yili. Yili looked down. Is there anything else between Jenim of Gojoseon and Emperor Chu? If there is nothing else, Lei Jinting smiled and said, Wang Fei, please do as you wish. I will not disturb Prince Ding's rest. Many thanks. Ajin, close it. Yili ordered Ajin in a soft voice. Ajin snorted angrily at Lei Jinting and went to close the coffin again. Coming out of the morning hall, Mo Jingli and Lei Jinting were invited to rest in a side courtyard of the General Fu. Feihong Pass was not Li City, and it was not the time for Mo Xiuyao's official funeral, so there were not many people here. The General Fu was not big, but it was still convenient for Lei Jinting and Mo Jingli to live in. Emperor Chu, why don't we have a cup of tea together? Lei Jinting said. Even though they had only come to pay respects, it was already late and they could not avoid staying at Feihong Pass for the night before leaving. Mo Jingli naturally agreed. He also had many questions to ask Lei Jinting. The two went to Lei Jinting's courtyard and waved away the servant girl who had brought tea and snacks. Lei Jinting smiled and said, Congratulations, Emperor Chu. Mo Jingli stilled and quickly realized what Lei Jinting meant. The person lying in the coffin is really Mo Xiuyao? Lei Jinting said, he has lost a lot of blood, but there are no obvious wounds on the outside. He should have injured his heart. There's a scar on his right wrist and a callus on his palm. It is caused by long-term sword practice. Also, this person was an expert when he was alive. His face was not disguised and his hair was not dyed. If there's a person who looks exactly like Mo Xiuyao and is as skilled as Mo Xiuyao, then Mo Xiuyao is not dead. After a while, he heard Mo Jingli murmur, Mo Xiuyao is really, really dead, yes. Lei Jinting sighed softly. Mo Xiuyao is really dead. Such an outstanding person had died, just like that. Lei Jinting's eyes suddenly showed some confusion and melancholy. Mo Jingli was not in the mood to pay attention to Lei Jinting's thoughts. After hearing Lei Jinting's words, he could not help but laugh loudly. That's great. Mo Xiuyao. Mo Xiuyao. You still died in front of me in the end. Ha ha. Seeing Mo Jingli's smug appearance, Lei Jinting's eyes flashed with disdain and anger. He also wanted Mo Xiuyao to die because he was an enemy. But to be treated as an enemy by someone like Mo Xiuyao was an honor. But to be treated as an enemy by someone like Mo Jingli was a disgrace. There had never been a person like Mo Jingli that Lei Jinting recognized as an enemy. He was just a clown. When Mo Jingli was done laughing, he finally seemed to sense Lei Jinting's displeasure. Mo Jingli raised his eyebrows. Mo Xiuyao is dead. Is Genom of Gojosian not happy? Lei Jinting's lips twitched, revealing a mocking smile. Of course not as happy as Emperor Chu. Chapter 997. Hearing this, Mo Jingli could not help but feel a little embarrassed. There were not many people in the world who did not know about the grudges between the Prince Ding mansion and the royal family of the Chu state. His reaction just now was seen by Lei Jinting. No matter how thick-skinned Mo Jingli was, he could not help but blush. He snorted and said harshly, Mo Xiaoyao betrayed the country first. This kind of traitor naturally deserves to die. Lei Jinting took a sip of tea and said indifferently, I do not intend to discuss with Emperor Chu whether Prince Ding deserves to die or not. Prince Ding's death is naturally beneficial to I. Mo Jingli's eyes flashed with anger and disbelief. He said dryly, in that case, Genom of Gojosian, please say it. There was a kind of person who was born stunning. He was the focus of the world's attention. Even his enemies would admire and respect him. Mo Xiaoyao was such a person. It was also because of this that Mo Jingli was crazily jealous. Lei Jinting leisurely looked at Mo Jingli, who was a little unsteady, and said calmly, did Emperor Chu notice that the main generals in the Mahist army are not here? Mo Jingli hesitated. From the beginning, he focused on Yi Li and Mo Xiaobao. Naturally, he did not notice who was not in the Prince Ding mansion. Hearing Lei Jinting's words, he finally had some impression. He nodded and said, yes, Murong Shun and Marquis Nan are not here. They should have been sent out by Yi Li, Lei Jinting said. Mo Jingli frowned and said, sent out? Yi Li doesn't want to guard Fei Hong Pass anymore? Lei Jinting glanced at him and said, it's really because she wants to guard Fu Fei Hong Pass that she sent people out. Genom of Gojosian, what do you mean by that? Mo Jingli did not like Lei Jinting's tone. It was as if he was calling him an idiot. However, he really couldn't understand Yi Li's thoughts, so he had no choice but to hold back his anger and listen to Lei Jinting. Fei Hong Pass is only so big. Even if all the generals are here, what difference would it make? But if Murong Shun, Marquis Nan, and the others were sent out, they were all famous veterans on the battlefield. They don't need to confront us face to face. As long as they want to cause us some trouble, it will be easy. Furthermore, the Black Cloud cavalry of the Mahist army was adept at long-distance raids. When the time came, I'm afraid that both sides will have a headache. Lei Jinting said. Mo Jingli gritted his teeth and said, is it really Yi Li's idea? How cunning. Lei Jinting smiled with appreciation and said, Princess Ding can stabilize the situation of the entire Prince Ding mansion as a woman at this time. Naturally, she is not an ordinary person. If Princess Ding is a man, I'm afraid. Lei Jinting shook his head and smiled faintly without saying a word. Mo Jingli snorted and asked, what does Genom of Gojosian want to discuss with me? Lei Jinting looked at Mo Jingli and said, give up Cold Valley Pass and lead the army to the west. After the two armies join forces, we will attack Fei Hong Pass together. Mo Jingli narrowed his eyes and sneered. Genom of Gojosian is really smart. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that I will be betrayed by Genom of Gojosian again. Last time, he was fooled by Lei Tingfeng. Mo Jingli did not forget. How could he trust Lei Jinting again? Lei Jinting frowned and said, as long as we take Fei Hong Pass, we will lead the army to sweep the entire northwest. After destroying the foundation of the Prince Ding mansion, do you think that Leng Huai of Chu Jing and Lu Jingxian of Cold Valley Pass still need us to worry about them? Mo Jingli was not an idiot. How do I know that once I lead the army to the west, Leng Huai and Lu Jingxian will not chase after us? In the future, won't I be in a dilemma? Lei Jinting raised his eyebrows and said, so, Emperor Chu has the confidence to fight against Leng Huai and Lu Jingxian alone? I have received news that Leng Huai has begun to reorganize the troops in Chujing. They will set out for Cold Valley Pass in a few days. Cold Valley Pass is the most impregnable pass in the Central Plains. But but it also depends on who is guarding it. Being mocked by Lei Jinting like this, Mo Jingli's face turned green and white. What does Jinim of Gojoseon want to do? Lei Jinting nodded with satisfaction and said, Emperor Chu, please block Ling Huai and Lu Jinxian's army. I do not need the Chu army to do anything. I just need to stall for time and not let them mess things up. Although being looked down upon by Lei Jinting made Mo Jingli feel humiliated, he did not want to use his own troops to fight against Lu Jinxian and Ling Huai. Rather than this, it was better to wait for Lei Jinting and the Mahist army to fight until both sides suffered losses. Then he would be the third party to reap the benefits. How could Lei Jinting not understand Mo Jingli's thoughts? But he did not care and smiled coldly. Okay, we will do as Jinim of Gojoseon says. Mo Jingli nodded and agreed to Lei Jinting's suggestion. In the study in the deepest part of the general's fu, Yili sat behind a desk and looked at the people in the room. She couldn't help but sigh. Feng Jiao stared at Yi Li and said, Wang Fei, do you know the whereabouts of the prince or not? Yi Li shook her head and said seriously, I really don't know. It was a pity that her sincere answer could not make Feng Jiao and the others believe her. Wang Fei, do you think we will believe you? Yi Li raised an eyebrow and looked at everyone with a smile. Han Mingyue said with a faint smile, Wang Fei should at least know some news about Xiao Yao. Otherwise, how would Wang Fei know what wounds Xiao Yao should have? After Jinim of Gojoseon saw Prince Ding's wounds, his brow visibly relaxed. When he faced Yi Li, his smile became more sincere. It was clear that Jinim of Gojoseon had received the news that Prince Ding was wounded, and the wounds on Prince Ding's body matched the information that Lei Jinting had received. Yi Li sighed helplessly and said, I really don't know. It's fine. Since Wang Fei can't say, we won't ask. Feng Jiao clearly still did not believe that Yi Li did not know. He just thought that it was because Yi Li could not say. But at least it proved that Mo Xiaoyao's safety was not a problem. Everyone present couldn't help but sigh in relief. Even though they vaguely understood that the prince was still alive, it was still uneasy to not have definite news. Now that they saw Wang Fei's calm appearance, it was as if they had eaten a calming pill. Mother, can we kill that big bad guy? Mo Xiaobao sat next to Yi Li and asked with a pure face. Yi Li lowered her head to look at Mo Xiaobao, who was looking at her. She couldn't help but smile and said, When did you learn to bite people? This time, it was definitely Mo Xiaobao who did not care about his image at all. Even though Mo Xiaobao liked to fool around, he was still very proud. Even if he wanted to prank someone, he would not use this kind of trick that a normal child would use. Mo Xiaobao said with a smile, Is this child's acting good? Yi Li raised a brow and looked at Feng Jiao at the side. Feng Jiao said with a smile, When little Shitzi saw Mo Jingli, the first thing he said was, You bastard who killed my father king. I'll bite you to death. Then he pounced on Mo Jingli and fiercely bit Mo Jingli. I saw that a piece of flesh on Mo Jingli's body was almost bitten off. He really has good teeth. The others couldn't help but cover their faces and laugh in a low voice. Mo Xiaobao's little face became embarrassed, and he said unhappily, It was so smelly this Shitzi had to drink a lot of water to rinse my mouth. Next time, I'll definitely use another method. However, this method was the most satisfying and also the least likely to be suspicious. If he used something else to hurt Mo Jingli, it wouldn't be a child's mischief that could be explained away. Chapter 998. Yi Li looked at Xiaobao curiously and asked, What else did Xiaobao do to Mo Jingli? Yi Li knew her son well enough. He would not bite someone just to vent his anger or to make Mo Jingli look bad. Xiaobao chuckled and said, I sprinkled the medicine that Mr. Shun gave me on his hand. Shun Yang, who was sitting at the side listening to their conversation and taking care of his own medicine, suddenly stiffened. He slowly turned his head and stared at Xiaobao, asking, Little heir, you used that bottle of medicine? Xiaobao blinked innocently and said, It's the bottle that Mr. Shun just concocted last night. It's green. It's a beautiful little jade bottle. Shen Yang's body swayed. He quickly held onto the table and asked calmly, "Is that what I gave to the little heir?" I asked Mr. Shun if he could give the bottle to me. Mr. Shin nodded. Xiaobao asked, puzzled. Xinyang was silent. "You're asking about the bottle, but you're asking about the medicine too." Seeing that Shun Yang's expression was not right, Feng Jiao asked curiously, "What medicine did Mr. Shin concoct? Is it very important?" Mo Xiaobao smiled and said, "I saw something written on Mr. Shun's small bottle. It said something about acacia or something spring." Oofed. On the other side, Han Mingshi spat out a mouthful of tea. He looked at Shun Yang in disbelief and said, "It can't be the aphrodisiac, right? Mr. Shun, what are you using that for?" As he spoke, he looked at Shun Yang with a gaze that said, "You're already so old, yet you're still so interested." Han Mingshi lived up to his name as Mr. Fengyu. He had been in the entertainment industry for many years and was naturally familiar with all kinds of strange medicines. Shin Yang's lips twitched. He rolled his eyes and said, "What do you mean I'm using it for? A few days ago, someone gave it to me to see if there's an antidote." Han Mingshi did not believe him. Who would research an antidote for this kind of medicine? Any normal person would know how to cure this kind of medicine. Han Mingshi looked at Xinyang with an expression that said, "I'd be a fool to believe you." Xinyang also understood that the more he tried to explain, the worse the situation would become. He glared at Xiaobao with resentment. If it wasn't for this damn brat, he wouldn't have been mocked by a junior like Han Mingshi. Mo Xiaobao hid in Yi Li's arms and secretly glanced at Xinyang with a smirk. Yi Li helplessly patted Mo Xiaobao's little head and lightly coughed before asking, "Then, will this medicine have any side effects?" Han Mingshi giggled and said, "No, this is a top-grade medicine. Even if you had the money, you might not be able to get it. It was just that he was better at controlling time. Normally, it would only flare up after 2 hours, and once it did, it would be unstoppable. So, Junwei, cough cough. Young Master Feng San, it's best to get someone to prepare." Han Mingshi clearly sensed that this matter was not suitable for Yi Li to handle, so he could only change his tone and look at Feng Jiao. Feng Jiao rolled his eyes in annoyance. In his early years, he was also a person who had been through hundreds of flowers, so he naturally knew what the so-called aphrodisiac powder was. Mo Xiaobao looked at everyone and asked curiously, "What do we need to prepare?" Yi Li lightly flicked his forehead. Children are not allowed to interrupt when adults are talking. Mo Xiaobao held his little forehead and looked pitifully at Yi Li. Sitting not far away, Zhuijing, who was busy handling files, frowned and raised his head to say, "Wang Fei. Right now, Prince Li seems to be in Jinnum of Gojoseon's courtyard." It had been exactly 2 hours since Mo Jingli had been bitten by Mo Xiaobao. Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but look at each other. After a while, Feng Jiao and Han Mingshi jumped up at the same time and rushed in the direction of Lei Jinting's courtyard. Of course, they weren't going to save people, they were going to watch the show. Han Mingwei raised her eyebrows and stood up to say, "Let's go take a look too. It wouldn't be good if Emperor Chu or Jinnum of Gojoseon were hurt." Mo Xiaobao excitedly kicked his little legs in Yi Li's arms and reached out his little hand to Han Mingwei. "I want to go too. I want to go too." Shenyang, who was at the side, pulled him over and said, "Little Sheetsi, you should come with this old man to read the medicine manual in the study again. You should use any kind of medicine. You're not afraid of harming others or yourself." Yi Li nodded gratefully at Shenyang. She really didn't know how to explain this kind of medicine to Mo Xiaobao. With the guidance of the famous Dr. Shenyang, she believed that Mo Xiaobao would quickly understand what kind of medicine could be used and what should be used carefully. Yi Li, Han Mingwei, and Qin Feng leisurely walked towards the guest courtyard. Before they reached the entrance, they saw the servant girl who had been arranged to serve them rushing over with a pale face. Seeing Yi Li, she released a breath. "This servant greets Wang Fei." Yi Li nodded and asked, "What happened?" The servant girl's face was pale and her eyes were wide with fear as she said, "Wang Fei, quickly go take a look. Jinnum of Gojoseon is going to beat Emperor Chu to death." Everyone couldn't help but pause. Yuli sighed and said, "Go take a look." Before they even entered the courtyard, there was a burst of noise coming from inside. Feng Jiao and Han Mingxi were sitting leisurely on the wall and excitedly watching. They even excitedly gesticulated from time to time. Yili sighed. Feng San Mingxi. Were these two afraid that Lei Jinting didn't know how happy they were? Feng Jiao and Mingxi lightly landed and said with a smile, "Wang Fei, don't worry." Jinim of Gojoseon is about to go crazy from anger. He hasn't discovered us. Yili raised an eyebrow and asked, "What's going on inside?" She thought that Lei Jinting and Mo Jingli should be secretly plotting inside. Since they were going to be together sooner or later, Yili naturally didn't mind them plotting in their own place. It was better than running to a place that she didn't know and creating a situation that wasn't easy to control. However, even if the poison in Mo Jingli's body flared up, Lei Jinting would at most throw him out or find someone to help him deal with it. They wouldn't fight. Han Mingxi gave a low laugh and said, "It seems like Emperor Chu intended to be rude to Jinim of Gojoseon. Also, after the poison flares up, the poisoned person will be several times stronger than normal." So, Yili couldn't help but twitch her lips. For the first time in her life, she felt her face turn green. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.